and they're mad about that. So there are lots of groups you could try to peel away, and that's the playbook. That's going to be a big part of the Trump plan in 2024, the Trump universe plan.
Yeah,
the anti-Biden plan, I should call it.
Sure. I want to throw one notion at you from one of my brainchilds on the anti-Trump plan. I remember one of your times you were on this, Charlie, you talked eloquently and insightfully about how people who are victims of scams don't like to admit that they're victims of scams, right? And right now, it's like clearer than ever how big of a scam that Trump is running on his own voters, as they're paying for, as he can barely do events, and they're paying for all of his lawyers, paying for his lifestyle. I do wonder, one of the advantages that Republicans have about being corrupt, they might be corrupt and stupid, but they also are nefarious, right? They're willing to use these types of strategies to try to peel off, low info black voters or young voters who might be able to be tamped down by, advertisements that are dishonest or prey on them. I'm not suggesting Democrats be honest, but do you think there's any appetite or any reason for Democrats to think about ways that they can turn the tables and having outside groups try to talk about how Trump is, in red areas and rural areas with young men, talk about how Trump has scammed them, talk about how the abortion issue might affect them if they're not ready to be fathers yet, right? I'm not seeing a lot of that from the Democrats, but I do think that there's potentially green shoots there. But the other hand of that is maybe these people aren't reachable. Some people might say that too. That's a waste of time. These people aren't reachable.
But I think we're moving to a very different kind of map. And the 2018 election suggests when Democrats talk about going after Republican voters, they say, I think it was, I'm going to never forget who said, we have to appeal to the guys who drive pickup trucks with Confederate flags. Yeah. I forget who did. And I applaud the sentiment candidates should obviously try to compete for everybody, but you're not going to win the guy who drives a pickup truck with a Confederate flag on it for a Democratic candidate. Meanwhile, they don't see who they are winning. So 2018, Democrats flipped the House seat that was held by George H.W. Bush in one of the most affluent parts of Houston. They flipped the seat that had been held by Newt Gingrich in the Atlanta exurbs. They flipped Eric Cantor's seat in the outskirts of Richmond.
The seat where W lives, because Colin Allred, now the Senate candidate, they flipped. Yeah, where W lives now in Dallas.
Where are Democrats making their gains? Not with people who drive pickup trucks and fly the Confederate flag, but actually with the kind of people who 50 years ago were the heart and soul of the Republican Party. People own their own homes, who are married, who have IRAs, who are basically content with life. Remember, if you watch Mad Men, all the partners in Don Draper's firm are all Republicans, not because they're super ideological. They're basically satisfied with their lives. So they're Republicans, and the Democrats are the party of the people who aren't satisfied with their lives. And not to make a moral judgment about which is better. It's just there are some people who are more content than others, and historically they tended to be Republican. Well, guess who Biden gets? But the way he gets them is not by saying, "Hey, you're pretty smug, vote for me." The way he gets them is he shows. I just think of the ads that work on me. The ads that work on me are the ads that look like they're old AT&T phone company ads. People coming home and putting down their briefcase and hugging their kids and playing with the dog. People working in a classroom with kids of every background. Flag, Statue of Liberty, fireworks, American battleships.
I'm susceptible to all this too. Yes.
Yeah. Right. The Morning in America ad. Now that ad, when you watch it today, it's incredibly old-fashioned. Like the shots are so long, you cannot believe that 6 seconds of the Statue of Liberty. Are you serious? You think we're going to live forever? Yeah. but that and Biden. That's how he launched his 2020 campaign. It was, do you love this country? Are you proud of this country? Do you think the country is basically right? Do you think we built something worth preserving? Do you have more to defend than you have to lose? You have more to defend than you aspire to acquire. Those messages are very powerful in the George H.W. Bush, Newt Gingrich, Eric Cantor congressional seats. Those are the people who I think are going to put Biden over the top. And one more thing, and this is about the vote work. I can remember having been at this Never Trump business for a long time, back in 2017 when it was a clever joke to say Never Trump was a dinner party, not a political party.
Yeah.
But in fact, we're not the base at all. We're the people who put Biden over the top. And he needs his base, and to appease them, he does things that Never Trump people don't like. When beef prices go up, he has to pretend it's because of the machinations of evil meatpacking companies, which is stupid and false and untrue. When they didn't become better people when beef prices go down. Gasoline prices are not determined by the moral quality of oil companies. That's childish. But the Never Trump people who are the margin of victory are the people who would normally be susceptible to Republican messages, but who respond to patriotism, to unity, to pride in country, and to dislike of troublemaking and resentment and violence and threats of violence. And the emotional and the lack of emotional control that you see from the Trump people. This guy should be in a psych ward, not running for office.
Yeah, one data point in your favor on that from this week is there was a special election for a state house race in the Huntsville suburbs, Huntsville, Alabama. There was like a 25-point flip for the Democrat who's focused a lot on the IVF scandal. So kind of combined, not scandal, the IVF ruling in Alabama. Okay, another article that you wrote recently that I wanted to get in was the Good Republicans' Last Stand was about Ukraine funding. How there was a cadre of the remaining good Republicans. I believe at this point Mike Gallagher was still a sitting member of Congress. Maybe he was in this category. It was before Mitch McConnell had said that he was going to step aside. But there were some Republicans doing the right thing, and yet here we are a few months later, and still nothing has been done because of the bad Republicans. How do you assess the state of play now and the good Republicans' last stand?
Well, I think this is the issue when I say why am I going to be in the line at 5 a.m. to vote for Biden in 2024? It's because of Ukraine, where Biden has not been by any means perfect on Ukraine. He slow walked a lot of the weapons that they needed early on. He's been trying to micromanage this war to give them the Ukrainians just enough not to lose, but not enough to win. And who knows what that point is? Many mistakes. And 2023 should have been the decisive year of the war, and because of bad choices by people in the Biden administration, it was not. And so we're suffering and bleeding through 2024. But the Republicans are selling them out, and that is just shocking to me. President Biden asked for more money for Ukraine on October 20th of last year. We're nearing the 6-month mark, and that has been stalled. And while there are majorities in both houses of Congress for the aid, because there's not a majority in the House of Representatives, the aid has been successfully stalled. And Republicans have not been willing to do what it takes to overcome their own leadership, including, by the way, people who, and one of the people I singled out was the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Jim Risch, who has been a strong supporter of Ukraine. He just goes AWOL. I mean, behind the scenes, he's doing all kinds of things, but he doesn't even cast a vote before the scenes because he's so frightened of his own voters and Trump. There does seem to be enough assistance from Europe to keep the Ukrainians on the battlefield through the fighting season. They have found, thanks to the Czech government, a supply of artillery shells in Taiwan that does look sufficient to get, and the Europeans are paying for them. So they can eke it out, and we hope the United States will be back in its responsible position of world leadership after this election, and especially if the Democrats retake the House of Representatives. But it is a terrible, terrible betrayal.
And It's rather astonishing the degree of the betrayal. I was talking to Stephen Hayes on last week, and we were discussing all this, and there's like a cadre of Republicans in the House and the Senate that are still holding on to the complaint that Biden isn't doing enough, right? That they try to speak as if it's the early 2000s or the 1980s, and like that they are the real hawks here and want more. Thinking about your Mike McCalls, your Tom Cottons, but when it comes to actually trying to put pressure on Mike Johnson or actually do anything procedural, they're totally AWOL. Like there's nobody that is actually putting any real political pressure on Mike Johnson to get this to move on the Republican side, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, you don't get to complain that your buddy is not giving enough charity if you yourself are going around town kicking homeless people. And that's what's going on here. I mean, Biden isn't doing enough on Ukraine, and more catastrophically, did not do enough at a time when doing enough would have really brought the war to a speedier end, which is in the early part of last year. He didn't do enough. He didn't, and he's succumbed to the classic problem of democratic foreign policy, which is trying to be too clever, trying to specify the precise outcome that you're trying to hit 24 months out, and then 24 months in advance, trying to gauge precisely the degree of resource and effort you need to get to that mark. Instead of just saying, send everything, empty the arsenals. If the Ukrainians end up with too much stuff, well, that's money wasted, not lives lost. Send them everything, send it fast. Don't worry too much about how this is going to play out. You don't know. When people say, what's the end game? The end game is we win by applying maximum effort maximally early. So that was all. You can make that criticism, but you can't legitimately make that criticism if Mike Johnson is saying, I'm going to withhold aid from Ukraine altogether because Trump tells me, and Trump is doing it because Putin tells him.
Amen. Couldn't agree with that more. Okay, moving down to Gaza briefly. We guessed yesterday that was representing the view of that Biden should be putting more pressure on Bibi, that we should have it on the table, stopping providing weapons to Israel because of atrocities in Gaza. I do not share that view, but also I guess a couple weeks ago that had the view that Biden was trying to distance himself from Bibi too much. That's another view I don't share. I have some concerns. I think that a lot of what Israel's actions were in the first months after the attack on October 7th were totally defensible and understandable, and I'm concerned now that we have reached a situation where they don't particularly have a plan for achieving their objectives of eradicating Hamas, and the plan that they do have doesn't make a lot of sense. You had Jared Kushner going around the other week talking with Bibi allies about how they're going to occupy Gaza and put condos there. I don't know that Mar-a-Lago Gaza is a solution that's going to make a lot of sense in the region. So where do you kind of fall on this discussion about how Biden is calibrating this, and frankly how Bibi is calibrating it?
Well, first I want to make clear I'm no kind of military expert, and particularly not on the most difficult form of warfare, urban warfare. I have no idea what is the right strategy and what is the right tactic. And to the extent that I had views, they've turned out to be completely wrong. I worry that Hamas had booby-trapped Gaza in all kinds of ways. And it really seems like actually one of the big surprises of the war is how little effort Hamas has made to fight or to defend the people it supposedly represents. I mean, its plan seems to be to save itself and expose the civilian population to maximum harm in hope of generating a response on TikTok, which is also not a good plan because a lot of people suffer while you're waiting for the TikTok brigade to bail you out, which they're not doing. I would say first, I'm going to repeat what I said about Ukraine. Don't micromanage these things. The reason wars are to be avoided at almost any cost is because they are big, destructive, wasteful, cruel, unpredictable animals. And once Hamas made the decision to wage this war of atrocity against Israel, it unleashed responses that were just incalculable, but that were bound to be horrific. The most important thing, because wars are so horrific, the most important thing is to get them over as fast as possible. And that means not meting out your violence. The same criticism I have about Biden people in Ukraine. You do not mete out your violence with a exact measuring caliber, hoping to hit precisely the right quantity. You do too much too early in hope of bringing it to an end as fast as possible, getting them to the work of restoration and peacemaking. Benjamin Netanyahu is pretty obviously fighting this war with one plan in mind, which is he knows that the moment the war is over, his political situation begins to wobble, so he doesn't want the war to be over. And he's then adopted maximalist goals that can never be reached, so the war will never be over, and so he will never be. So to my mind, one of the biggest Israeli mistake was saying at the beginning, okay, we were caught by surprise, but the president, and we'll change the government as soon as the war's over. The government had to be changed immediately. Yeah. And
where were you on the Schumer speaking out about that? Did you think that was appropriate?
I didn't think it was smart, no. But for other reasons. And also it's late. I mean, the point of Netanyahu should have resigned on the 9th of October, and if he wouldn't, he should have been forced out. He should have been forced out by the Israeli public. And once the Israeli political system reached its consensus, we'll change him afterward. You set in motion very perverse incentives. On the American side, I think Biden has been stalwart. And I think some of my friends in the pro-Israel community just are comparing Biden to their idea of what they would like rather than to what has ever existed before. The situation where this is very reminiscent of is the 1982 Israeli war in Lebanon.
Thank you for bringing this up.
That began when the PLO assassinated the Israeli ambassador to London in the streets to the UK in the streets of London, a really shocking crime, culminating a decade of terrible PLO atrocities, the attack on the Israeli Olympic team at the Munich Olympics, atrocious hijacking, some of them PLO, some of the PLO affiliates, and then this, attacking a diplomat on the soil of a NATO country. So Israel entered Lebanon to try to drive the PLO out. The war was very brutal. And the Reagan administration at first backed, and then completely changed, flip-flopped, and began putting enormous pressure on Israel. And at one point, somebody in the administration, I don't think President Reagan himself, but a senior, used the language of Holocaust and genocide from the unnamed source of the White House against Israel, which is something that's so shocking and offensive when backbench Congress people do it. But the idea that somebody in an administration would do it, if that's your benchmark, if Reagan 82 is your benchmark, then Biden has been a stalwart friend, and it's unrealistic to ask him to do any more than he has done. And I have. And I think they have been able to be very generous with Israel with information, with weapons, with high technology. Israel needs different things from what Ukraine needs, and Israel's needs have been met better than Ukraine's needs have. Now, maybe it'll be different if the war goes on for 2 or 3 years, but for right now, I don't think there are any reasonable complaints against the Biden administration. But as to giving them advice, I don't have advice. They are facing. They've got. So I don't lost track of the count of living hostages, but there's still more than 100 Israeli hostages in Hamas hands. The people have been killed and maltreated in the most horrific ways on video with the intention of provoking the reaction. And so I don't know that there's any way off this path until we get to a true outcome of the war.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on Biden, and obviously, the hostages should be freed, and this is all on Hamas. I was encouraged for all the negative things that are happening on campus these days. I'm at USC this week, and I was encouraged that there was a Free the Hostages gathering on the quad at USC that was unperturbed, and there's a rather big group that was, I think there's some reasonable concerns that they might have been at least shouted down, not that their safety would be in question, and so I was encouraged to see that. I guess my one just follow up on this one area where I think I'd pick a nit with what you said is it is not about so much like the military strategy that I'm not a military strategist. I'm not going to tell BB you should do it this way, you should do it that way. It is if you are going to engage in a offensive action such as this that is going to have the number of casualties that we've seen in Gaza and the tragedy that we've seen in Gaza, I would like for there at least to be I would like for somebody to be able to enunciate what the end game is. And I don't think that they've offered one that makes a lot of sense. It's like, well, question mark, Israel's going to occupy it. No, there's going to be a foreign group that's going to occupy. Who is that? The Egyptians, they don't want to do it. The Saudis, they don't want to, right? And so we're going to continue to go in and to bomb without. And I guess maybe the only answer to that is, well, we're just going to do it until the hostages are released, and then we'll see kind of where we sit. But that's the element of this that gets me a little bit, that wishes we could bring it to the negotiating table. And I know that, again, that's on Hamas, but that's the part that I get queasy about.
I'm going to give you a very candid answer to this, and maybe too candid for my own good. But
Please, no.
I think the reason people don't talk about the end game is because there isn't a good one. There really isn't. Hamas did this thing on October 7th. They did what they did in the way they did it with the video, with the goal of making it impossible for Jews and Palestinians to live together side by side in neighborly state-by-state relationships. And I think for generations, I think they succeeded in that goal. So we have these impulses, which is, okay, we have to get back to negotiating the two-state solution. But Hamas said, what we want to do is we want to videotape ourselves or GoPro ourselves doing things to the Israelis so they can never, ever trust us. And not just us, Hamas, but us, the 15,000 people who came into their country every day from, I think that was the number, from Gaza to work, who were trusted people, who worked on the kibbutzes and who gave away the identity, who participated, it looks like, in the rapes and robbery. We want to make it possible for them to ever trust those people. And in the same way, our military plan is one where we have no bomb shelters, we've stockpiled no food and water for what is technically our population. We're going to expose them to the vengeance of a highly advanced technological military state, which is seeking vengeance for what the terrible crimes we did to us, and they will inflict that vengeance in ways that make it impossible for our people ever to forgive them. And when this is over, so we say, what is the end state here? That's a technocratic question about a war that was designed to stoke so much hatred. And the authors of that war were Hamas, but the Israelis are the counter-authors because they behaved in exactly the way they had no human possibility of not behaving in. And it leaves behind only wreckage. I don't know who is going to police Hamas. No one. And if anybody who does come in, it's going to be like Iraq, end of 23 to early 2003, early 2004. If an Arab force or a European force go in, Hamas will commit terrorist atrocities to drive them out, and they will probably succeed. So there's going to be no law and order in Gaza, except in the tiny zones that Israel retains, which means there's going to be no reconstruction. There's just going to be tents. There's just going to be poverty. And that was the goal of the people who started this war. And I don't know that you can outsmart that, or outcompassion that, or bring anything good. Sometimes malign people get their way, at least in the immediate term, and I fear very much in this case they have. And to say, well, let's come up with a plan to outsmart them, is just asking human intelligence to do more than I think human intelligence in this situation probably can do.
Thoughtful, quite depressing response, but on theme for this podcast at times. Okay. Final topic's not going to be much easier. So when I took over this podcast from Charlie a couple months ago now, time flies. I said to Katie Cooper that in the first week I wanted to make sure we had my favorite recurring guest, which was you. And that was our plan until you got what I imagine was the worst call of your life, that your daughter Miranda had collapsed. I imagine most of our listeners know by now that she died a few weeks ago at the age of 32. You wrote beautifully about her life and her final gift to you in The Atlantic last week. I recommend everybody read that with some tissues. Many in the Borg family have had the privilege of knowing her, Mona and AB and others. And so I did not have that privilege. So I was hoping maybe you'd share a little bit about her for those of us who had never got a chance to meet Miranda.
Well, we do have this intimate bond of this coincidence of time. I was to speak to you on the 16th of February. Our call was
if that's your take, I'm supporting RFK because Biden isn't supportive enough of Israel. Because RFK is very, very, very supportive of Israel. In fact, I would go as far to say that RFK is a hawk on Israel. And a lot of alt-media type progressive or non-progressive commentators, because RFK has mostly been making circles in the right-wing media space, have been kind of surprised to find that he's rabidly supportive of Israel. And when it comes to corruption, if anybody's going to tell me if that schmuck actually somehow ended up in the White House, then he wouldn't immediately indulge himself in the most obvious corruption imaginable, then you have a weird trust in a man for no reason. Why trust a man that is a serial liar? We've covered his segments on the show before. I remember checking out one of his ads, and we counted 12 lies. And I'm saying 12 lies, back to back to back to back to back to back. This is not somebody you should trust with your, this is not somebody you should trust with like a local McDonald's, let alone the whole country. And so hearing these two reasons from him as to why he would support RFK Jr., to me was absolutely bizarre. Definitely when RFK Jr.'s party state chairs for his campaign are coming out and deliberately saying that, hey, what I would like to see happen is RFK takes enough votes away from Biden to make an electoral toss-up, and so it's not dependent upon who wins the most votes, and it's not even dependent upon who wins the most electoral college votes. It's dependent upon sending it back to the state governments, which are largely controlled by Republicans, therefore possibly handing an election that otherwise wouldn't be won by Donald Trump to Donald Trump, circumventing the voters. That is concerning to me, especially since another reason why Cenk Uygur said he wasn't in favor of Joe Biden was because they didn't have the party primary, which, by the way, an incumbent not really having a party primary is nothing new at all. I mean, that doesn't mean it hasn't been changed. It doesn't mean you might not like it. I don't really like it, to be honest, but that's nothing new. And if somebody was to tell me that the RFK Jr. campaign wouldn't try to use semi-undemocratic tactics to try to win an election, as we're hearing the state chair say they want to, at least they are interested in subverting the results of the election. And she openly said that she talked to RFK about it. Hey, RFK, would you be comfortable with me coming out and saying this? And he said yes. He said yes. That's what she said publicly. I didn't think any of the logic that Cenk Uygur put forward made sense for why he would be considering RFK over Joe Biden. Definitely considering this election. Now, if he was to say, I live in California, explicitly say, I live in California, I have a special right almost, or special privilege, living in a state that is hard blue, that it doesn't matter how I vote. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to write in Santa Claus because he's the only real pacifist candidate. That I would respect more than this. I don't know if it's a contrarian take or just an edgy take or where it's coming from. I respect that a lot more. And it would also allow you to differentiate between living in a swing state that can have a real impact on who's going to be the next president of the United States, what's going to be the makeup of the Supreme Court moving forward. And anybody telling me that's not important after you overturn Roe versus Wade is a schmuck and is not paying attention. Like, these distinctions were not made. And I wanted to see how he's going to do in a conversation talking about this topic and others when he has other people in the room to push back on him and not just Anna Kasparian to the side of him going, And that's why David Pakman and Brian Taylor Cohen have been invited on with Cenk Uygur onto the Don Lemon Show, which is his new show online after, that fiasco at CNN. And I wanted to check it out with you guys. So let's get to it. Let's start with, let's do a little bit of the abortion segment and then we'll skip through it if it's not that important.
The right wing in this election.
It has that potential. I think it's a little.
So the question was, is abortion the issue that sinks the right wing in this election? That was the question.
Early, and we can make grand predictions, but I think it's hard to say that it will be the issue. But this really is potentially a problem. It's all completely predictable. I mean, you go back to the end of 2015, lots of folks, without patting anybody on the back necessarily, were saying the path here is if Trump wins, he gets 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices at the first opportunity. They will overturn Roe v. Wade. Antiquated.
Wait, let me pat a few. Can I pat one person on the back in particular? Sam Cedar. Go back and watch Sam Cedar's debate with Jimmy Dore on the issue of the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, which Jimmy Dore said was impossible. He said it was impossible. He said it was more likely that the moon went into Lake Michigan. That moment, and not even that moment alone, but that moment should have discredited that man from any future political commentary, period. If you say that something's impossible and then it happens, you need to reassess whether that is a voice in media you should be listening to. I mean, look at it this way. If CNN made that type of mistake, would Jimmy Dore give them the benefit of the doubt? I don't think so.
Laws that are still on the books in many states will then all of a sudden be at the forefront. And next thing you know, you have laws. We said 1964. Many of us are thinking this is an 1864 law. Next thing you know, those are the laws people have to contend with. And it's leaving the evangelical right theorists, Mike Pence putting out this very critical tweet the other day. It's also leaving folks who are in the majority who think abortion should be legal in most cases angry. So it has the potential to be a real problem.
Well, the thing is, as you said, you can't really be half in and half out. I mean, you can't, you sort of leave it up to the states. You can't really be half in and half out when it comes to abortion.
I mean, listen, you can claim to be, but the problem is that there's the majority of the country now actually doesn't really want that. They're in theory open to states' rights until what states want are no longer, unless it's no longer convenient to them. And we're seeing that happen with a lot of folks on the MAGA side. And I think that this has the potential to backfire. Now, there's going to be so many other issues. I know Cenk and Brian will talk about some of them. So I'm not ready to say this is going to be the defining issue in November, but it seems to be important.
And jump in.
It all depends because Donald Trump himself is trying to course correct. He put out a True Social post saying, look, I believe that there should be exceptions for things like rape and incest. And he said that because he knows that basically everyone in the United States believes that there should be an exception in abortion for rape and incest. And there's only a small group of ideological radicals that think otherwise. And while this is not serving those ideological radicals, he understands that if Donald Trump, if he is going to win re-election, it's going to not be by making those ideological radicals just love him that little bit more. It's going to be by winning over independents and getting back suburbia, which he lost in 2020, but was able to get enough of in 2016 to beat Hillary, but lost in 2020 to Joe. And this type of position on abortion is not how you win back suburbia. Because suburbia does not think that IFB should go away. Suburbia does not think that rape and incest should be something that, okay, well, this 14-year-old girl was raped by her brother. She has to carry the baby to term now. Like, nobody believes this, but only the ideological diehards that were always going to vote for the Republican anyway. And he understands it. And when you listen to his post, though, and this is something I respect about Trump, is that in some instances, he's the most dishonest man in the world, but in other instances, he's more honest than any politician. And it's hard for me to describe how, so I think it's a great example of how it is. Well, Trump will lie about a lot of things, his golf swing, hurricane patterns, tons and tons and tons of criminal activity. One thing he was honest about is the motivations behind why he was doing this, where he explicitly said, if we lose this election, it's going to be bad for us. He said a lot of things, it would lead to death, destruction, yada, yada, yada. But basically, he pitched it like this. We need to make exceptions for this. If we do not, that could very much make us lose the election. We do not want to lose the election. He didn't try to make some strong ideological, like, okay, this is why life actually doesn't begin at conception if it's rape. Actually, this is why life doesn't actually begin at conception if it's your brother. He didn't make that argument because that argument would make sense. If life begins at conception, then life begins at conception. You can't make any ifs, ands, and buts about it. Now, I would make a distinction between the life of 2 cells and the life of a fully grown person who can think, breathe, and can comprehend the universe around them. That's the difference between a blade of grass and, something that has consciousness. But that distinction doesn't matter to a lot of evangelicals, and that's not a distinction that I think Donald Trump particularly cares about either. And if he did care about the distinction, that would not only apply to rape and incest, though that would apply to other instances as well, which could even piss him off further. So he's just sticking to the most ugly exceptions, rape and incest. But it's purely electorally motivated. But if you truly believe, and you got to look to the perspective of the people who believe that abortion is murder in all circumstances. If you truly believe that abortion is murdering a baby, then it's not that surprising that they're going to give some backlash. Because if your political leader is saying we should murder babies sometime, yeah, that's going to give you a bad. That's going to give you. You're going to be repulsed. You're going to be repulsed by that. So yeah, it makes sense that they're not happy with it. But I mean, it might not be an ideologically consistent position from Trump, but it certainly is at least a more electable position from Trump. And he's open about that, and that's his motivation.
Anytime, guys, if you feel passionate about it. But Brian, I want to ask you: do you think that this is going to be a deciding issue, or maybe one deciding issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the issue. To David's point, in terms of being able to straddle both sides, I think Donald Trump tried to do that, and it blew up in his face pretty badly because on Monday he came out and said that he supports states' rights, and the veracity of that claim we can get into in a moment because he doesn't. But regardless, he said he supports states' rights. And then what happened on Tuesday? The very next day, within 24 hours, a state came out and said that we're upholding an abortion ban from 1864. And so by virtue of saying that he supports states' rights, he now owns.
Mind you, though, while the court decided that they do have the right to enforce that law, which was made before Arizona was even a state, by the way, I think it was still a territory in 1864, in the middle of the Civil War, or towards the end of the Civil War, the Attorney General of Arizona said that they would not enforce it, which of course got a huge sigh of relief from Arizona people. But mind you, that election that elected that Arizona Attorney General was decided by 300 votes out of hundreds of thousands. So if somebody tells you your vote doesn't matter, well, it does.
The issue that happened within 24 hours of him saying that. So there is no way to be able to straddle this issue because when you claim that you want states' rights in an attempt to make yourself seem more moderate, what the states are actually doing completely undermines that, and it does it immediately.
But Cenk, he did say today, he was in Atlanta, and he was getting off a plane, either getting off or getting on a plane, he said to a reporter, I'm going to speak to the governor, we're going to fix that, take care of it immediately.
So, look, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, and he's now become a standard greasy politician. Oh, I'm so proud that I overturned Roe v. Wade, and at the same time, I don't mean it. Yeah, women can have any rights that they want, as long as I get elected and I get rich and I get famous and all these things. So which one is it, Cenk? You greasy politician. So he's so...
It doesn't need to be pointed out more that Donald Trump has finished his transformation into a greasy greasy politician, that Donald Trump, as the anti-establishment candidate, he might not be the friend of a certain establishment you might not like, which might be the Democratic establishment, some type of liberal establishment, the liberal Democratic establishment, which I think is good to have established, at least in the United States, over non-liberal anti-democracy movements. He might be fighting against some version of the establishment, but he has his own establishment. For example, Biden had a big fundraiser. I think it had 1,000 people, and he raised $25 million. Might even have more people. And the donations varied from like $300 to like $25,000 or something in that range. Trump then a little bit later announces braggadociously that he had a fundraiser of 100 people for $50 million. Now, if that's true or not, if it's BS, I don't know. But if you're trying to portray yourself as the populist man of the people, raising $50 million from 100 people, you don't think some favors were being bought? For example, when Trump turned against the TikTok ban, which is something that him and his movement have been pushing for a while, it was not because of some big ideological shift where Trump was like, I found the way of TikTok. I am now going to be engaged in a TikTok trend. And then Trump went and like opened an ice cream packet and licked the top, put it back in the freezer. No, that's not what happened. Trump had a meeting with somebody who's financially involved with TikTok right before he came out with the announcement, hey, guys, I just had this meeting. It looks like actually we shouldn't ban the TikTok, huh? And that person just so happened to be financing his campaign. Greasy politician behavior. It's the type of stuff that you would expect from a greasy politician. That Molotov cocktail anti-establishment chic just doesn't exist with Donald Trump anymore if you're paying attention and you're looking at the details. If it ever existed in the first place, which I don't think it did.
And the Republicans' hypocrisy is obvious as it is every single time. Lindsey Graham all of a sudden saying this is a moral issue that has nothing to do with geography. So let me get this right. When conservatives in this country were defending states' rights during
Look, I'm going to go out there. Lindsey Graham's position is at least more morally consistent than Donald Trump's, even if it is more repulsive.
slavery and Jim Crow for 100 years. That was not a moral issue, or that was a moral issue. That was totally fine to be decided by geography. But all of a sudden, we're not talking about states' rights because he wants to make abortion illegal everywhere. Lindsey Graham does. And so Donald Trump, make up your mind. In the case of
To
Arizona,
be clear, it's more consistent on the issue of abortion, not the issue of like states' rights or states deciding these different policies.
real quick, look, the court
Because Lindsey Graham wants a national abortion ban. When he announced he was going for it, like a lot of his colleagues looked at him like he was like, "What are you doing, man? The political wins are not there for this. Not during this election. It's already going to be a rough spot. What are you doing?"
decision is what it is. When you overturn Roe v. Wade, things like this happen. Old laws kick into place. I don't have much of an issue with that legally. Policy-wise, it's a disaster for the women of Arizona. And then in terms of politics, Joe Biden has never had a better gift. This puts Arizona back into play. Now Biden has a pretty great chance of winning Arizona.
And for people like Carrie Lake, it's a disaster. For anybody who's on the ticket in Arizona as a Republican, I think it would be a disaster.
She came out against it.
So
Actually,
not just Arizona either. I mean, this is
even though there's previous audio for endorsing abortion bans.
be on the ballot in Montana. This is going to be on the ballot in Florida. This is going to be on the ballot in New York, where these congressional races have major
By the way, I might be going out to Montana to try to help that ballot initiative. I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure it out, but keep an eye out for that.
implications for the House in 2024. So they've really stepped in it here as badly as they can.
Jake, I want to pivot to something else. Some of the comments that you have made.
Oh
in
boy,
recent days,
here we
you've
go.
been, incredibly critical of President Joe Biden here. In recent days, you have even gone as far to suggest that you would vote for RFK Jr. instead of Biden. Really?
Yeah, I'm considering it. So I don't know why people get so outraged by this. And I know part of it is that it's a binary world. So when you say you're dissatisfied with Joe Biden, people go, "Oh, so you love Donald Trump?" No, I hate Donald Trump. I don't know that anybody hates Donald Trump more than I do. Having said that, that doesn't mean that Joe Biden doesn't have an awful, immoral, genocide-supporting policy in Gaza. And I'm disgusted by it, and any decent person should be disgusted by it. So what am I supposed to say? Like, "Oh, Joe Biden's so great." No, I don't do propaganda. Joe Biden sucks, and his corruption is the same as all the establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans. They take hundreds of millions, actually in the case of Biden, billions of dollars in corporate campaign contributions and pretend that the contributions don't matter to them. So I'm not ever going to grab pom-poms and cheerlead for Joe Biden. Now, in terms of RFK Jr., I'm not saying I'm going to vote for him. I'm saying I've begun to consider it. He's crazy on vaccines.
Again, he's worse on the issue of Israel. And of course, Trump is definitely worse on the issue of Israel. Like, he would not be any better on the issue of corruption in any manner. And on issues like public health, he would be a million times worse as an open anti-vaxxer. This is a terrible idea. He hasn't thought this through. Not to even talk about the fact that RFK Jr. doesn't have a chance, and his state directors are talking about using his campaign as a tool to get Trump in the White House, to try to subvert the process. Stop thinking this through, man. He's not thinking this through. This almost feels like headline grabbing more than anything. Like, he knows that, like, Cenk says RFK would, like, be like, what? And get people to pay attention. Like, what's the purpose of this?
The conspiracy theories, etc. At the same time, he doesn't come in with a giant amount of corruption and baggage like Biden and Trump do. So that's just reality. And then where does that leave me? I don't know. I'm going to see how the campaign plays out.
You have said that Joe Biden has been, quote, corrupt his whole life. I mean, what evidence do you have that Joe Biden is corrupt?
100% corrupt. I have overwhelming evidence. But I don't want people to think that I'm picking on Joe Biden as he's the only politician who's corrupt or that he's personally corrupt. I'm talking about systemic corruption. The problem with Donald Trump is he's personally corrupt and he can't wait to take money from Saudi Arabia and all these other places. We get that. We all understand that, right? But when it comes to Biden, people in mainstream media and the Democratic Party make what I view to be a totally insane statement, which is, no, he might have taken $1 billion from corporate contributions, but he doesn't owe them any favors. And he doesn't let those donors affect them at all. Look, that's just nuts. So here, I'll give you an example of the thing that I'm most animated about these days, which is Gaza. He's taking $11.2 million from AIPAC. I mean, I'm curious what you guys think, but I think it's mental to think that he doesn't.
Before I move on, I understand that. Listen.
By the way, my position is that he shouldn't be taking that money from AIPAC. I don't believe any money, that people should be taking money from groups like that. I agree with that on principle. But the idea that because I'm not happy with the way that Biden is financing his campaign, I'm going to default to the option that doesn't have a chance of winning, that's also worse. The logic does not play out, especially when you're doing it as an online commentator. If he said, personally, I don't want to vote for Joe Biden because he's so awful. I'm in California. I'm going to write in Santa Claus. I understand that. I'm from Maryland. If I wanted to write in Santa Claus, I could write in Santa Claus, right? But if you're talking to your audience who live in Pennsylvania, who live in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, who live in Florida, who live in North Carolina, who live in Georgia, who live in Nevada, who live in Arizona, who live in New Hampshire, who live in states that electorally can decide traditionally the outcome of the race, you should not be sending signals to them that they should be going for options that don't have a chance in hell. You should not. I don't look at voting as choosing my best friend. I don't look at, if I was doing that, okay, I would not be voting. I wouldn't have gone to campus for Bernie Sanders either, because I don't think me and Bernie would actually have a great time going out to the club and partying. Or like, I'm not even looking for somebody who necessarily agrees with me on every issue. I still canvass for Bernie because he's the one who agreed with me most on the issues that I cared about. I'm looking for the best possible path forward of those available as we continue to build upon the successes that we've had in the future and try to prevent this country from derailing. And I think a lot of people do not appreciate how little it could take in some instances, given a perfect storm of disasters, to derail the republic and send it into a tailspin. We see in Myanmar what happens when democracies are sent into a tailspin. We've seen countries tear itself apart in Sudan, in Syria. We've seen the results of this. I have no interest in pussyfooting around this when we have somebody running for office who is quite open about the fact that he has no respect for democratic institutions. He's perfectly willing to subvert them. He's perfectly willing to commit crimes to attempt to subvert them, get fake electors, try to intimidate Secretary of States of his own party and punish them for not trying to throw out the election and get him votes that he doesn't have. And we'll watch as his supporters storm the Capitol and sit there for hours and do nothing to stop them, as they're chanting for the hanging of the Vice President of the United States, who you wanted to take unconstitutional power to overturn the results of the election, to have state legislatures decide the result outside of the American people. That's undemocratic. And he was setting it up forever. He said if he lose before the election, if he lost, it was rigged. Do you think he's going to treat this election any different? Do you think if given the opportunity to grab total power that man wouldn't? We should not put this man an inch within the White House. I mean, he should be an inch within any type of power institution, even a fucking dog catcher, let alone President of the United States. When there, this is something I've taken from my short time on this earth and from the little bit of history that I've been able to take in from my time reading books and trying to be a little nerd, is that when there is an ascendant authoritarian right-wing threat, the last thing the left should do is squibble and squabble and fight each other when they should be uniting, trying to pave over as many differences as they can for the general election fight. It is not smart for the left to divide itself when faced with this type of threat. It isn't smart. It's a losing strategy for the left. It's a losing strategy for the country. It's a losing strategy for the republic. I'm not saying
I get it.
I'm not saying paving over those differences forever. You don't even completely pave them over. You just feel acknowledge them. I want the president to be more aggressive when it comes to marijuana legalization. I want the president to be more aggressive when it comes to public option, even going further than that. I want the president to be more aggressive when it comes to a ton of issues. But we cannot pretend that we live in different circumstances and that there's actually a chance of putting somebody else in the White House outside of Joe Biden and Donald Trump unless one of them croaks in the next few months.
Said about Gaza. That is understandable. A lot of people are upset. A lot of people have questions about policy as it relates to Israel and what's going on with Gaza. But to say that Joe Biden is corrupt, maybe he's taking advantage of a system that's already in play. But again, I'll ask you, what evidence do you have that Joe Biden is corrupt?
Now, look, this is the thing that I'm confused by you guys on. And so, Joe Biden here, let's talk about one issue, but it applies to drug companies.
So this is the thing. What Don Lemon is asking for is more traditional, like, corruption that was actually criminal in the United States. He's asking for Bob Menendez style corruption. He was he still is actually an American senator, even though he's going through a ton of criminal allegations right now because he took gold bars from Egyptian agents to do their bidding and then praise the Egyptian government. I think the dude should resign in disgrace. It is disgusting that the dude is still in there. I think it's right for us to try to kick him out of the party, we should kick him out of the Senate. Point is, though, that is more traditional style corruption that Don Lemon wants from Cenk. But what Cenk is saying is that he is benefiting off of an already normalized form of political corruption that is big corporate donors contributing to campaigns and then the campaigns advertise. And once those people are in power, they will then serve the interests of state corporations by, like, for example, if it was an oil and gas company, maybe giving them some government contracts, or maybe if it was some group around guns or group around, I don't know, electric cars, maybe they're going to do some new legislation for them on electric cars. He's talking about that style of corruption, or what he's calling corruption, even if it's called legalistically in the United States corruption. It is certainly, I would say, a perverse incentive if you don't use the word corruption.
Oil companies, banks, every kind of corporate contribution. But in the case of Gaza, that's a good example. AIPAC has given him $11.2 million over the course of his career. He's the number one recipient of AIPAC money in United States Senate history. So my proposition, which I would, if you did a poll on it, my guess is 95% of Americans would agree, is that does that $11 million affect Joe Biden's unilateral, unconditional support of Israel throughout his entire career and today? 95% of Americans would agree with me. Of course it affects his decisions. But yet all the mainstream media treats it as like corruption. How dare you? He's an angel who would never be affected by $11 million.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, Jake. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
You're straight talking. You know RFK is not going to win. He doesn't have a chance to win. But you also know that every vote that's not going to... Jake, you know that RFK is not going to be the next president. I think we can all speak plainly here.
Why is he shaking his head? Why is he shaking his head? Does he think he has a chance? No, he's just fucking with him. He can't. No, come on, Jake. Why is he shaking his head? He can't be disagreeing with the premise. Like that RFK has a chance. There must be something else he disagrees. He can't be disagreeing with the fact that RFK doesn't have a chance. RFK does not have a chance. If RFK can have any impact on the election, it is purely by taking the votes away from other people. Whether Trump or Biden is
you're trafficking in straight denial if you're actually claiming by shaking your head that you think that RFK Jr. has a chance.
Well, I think just if we're going to ask a question, I would say what are the 5 states he's most likely to have a shot in? Maybe we could start narrow.
Yeah, guys, look, here's the deal. I know the third-party candidates have a very, very low chance. Jill Stein, Cornel West, and every other election. Of course. I'm not a person who denies reality in any way, shape, or form. Having said that, this election is kind of like the Ross Perot election, where a third-party candidate actually has a legitimate chance because both the candidates are despised. So if a Mark Cuban or a Jon Stewart were to come in, I think they win the whole damn thing.
No, Ross Perot didn't win. I mean, like, you can't say, oh, this is like a Ross Perot election. Oh, really? President Ross Perot? I was not familiar with that. Well, even if it was a Ross Perot election and RFK, an anti-vax loon who lies out of both sides of his mouth and his own family basically disowned him, is comparable to Ross Perot. I think that's insulting, just because he's got the name Kennedy, but whatever. But even if that is the case, Ross Perot lost.
RFK Jr. is a pretty weak candidate, so he has a much lower chance. But even so, he's polling at 10, sometimes at 20%. So if you think that has no chance, I think you're wrong. Is it a high chance? No, of course not.
I have a couple of...
No, he has no chance. Like, people see the name Kennedy and they smile and go, ooh. Now, having the name Kennedy will not be enough to deliver you to the White House. The 10 to 20% is because he has the name Kennedy. A few percentage point might be because they actually like the fact that he's against vaccines and stuff like that, but that is not a delivering message to the White House. As people learn more about him, they're not going to like him. They're not going to like him. He's not winning any states.
Right, the broader question I want to ask is, like, knowing that this is, like, very likely not going to happen, you have more likelihood of being able to persuade, to push Joe Biden, especially on these issues that you're passionate about, than you would if Donald Trump became president, which would be the likely outcome by throwing support behind someone like RFK. You think Joe Biden is bad on Gaza? What do you think Donald Trump would do to Palestine, to Gaza, if he became the next president?
Hang on, you answer.
We're all saying this as if, like, from the luxury of a bunch of guys sitting here while abortion bans are being passed across the country. We just talked about an 1864 abortion ban that was just upheld in Arizona. If Donald Trump becomes the next president, then forget Arizona. We're going to have a nationwide abortion ban in California, New York, Vermont. I mean,
we don't know that for sure, but there certainly will be people trying to propose that.
Luxury of not having to...
Like, it would be very, very difficult. You need 60 votes unless Trump would be willing to do it with a filibuster. And I gotta say, honestly, out of all the candidates that would be willing to do it, Trump's probably near the top of the list.
To worry about that in this conversation right here, but there are women across the country who will lose that luxury by virtue of, imposing purity tests on certain candidates.
That is true. That is true. But hang on, Jake. I want David to jump in because I want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. I mean, listen, on the RFK math, first of all, I mean, I've been seeing what some of his advisors have been saying. One of them's talking about how his path to victory goes through California. I've looked at the math in California. He'd have to take half of Biden's and 1/3 of Trump's support. I mean, I think that it is a mathematical impossibility. Cenk and I have talked about the math of this before on my show, and we may just disagree about what's likely versus what's probable. On the corruption thing, I actually agree with Cenk that every single person who has been president has both benefited from and accepted the status quo of campaign finance, the way politics is financed, super PACs, all of it. And also because we have a Republican Party that has spent years now wasting millions in taxpayer money looking for supposed criminal bribery that they still have no evidence of. James Comer is privately admitting in fundraising emails, we're not going to impeach the guy, it's just not going to work. I think it's important to be responsible and talk about how Cenk pointing out the corruption of the system is totally different than Joe Biden being guilty of any things they're personally accusing him of. And then lastly, and then I'll go back to this other stuff, I don't want to vote in a way that is, I'm a super simple and pragmatic guy. My vote in New York or Cenk and Brian's votes in California aren't actually going to, quote, matter in the sense that neither of those states will be close. Biden's going to win all of them. I actually think of the three options, Biden's the best option, so that's who I'm voting for, rather than calculating message sending or whatever. And on Gaza, if one is concerned about the prioritization of the Palestinian people, RFK would be worse based on everything I've heard him say.
Thank you for somebody bringing it up, David. Thank you. RFK is so much worse on the issue of Gaza. And Donald Trump is a guy saying you should go after the families of terrorists. So if you have a problem with how the bombing campaign is going on in Gaza, I don't think Trump does at all. In fact, if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if he went in there and said, going too nice
About the conflict, and Trump would be even worse.
So Trump's critique of the Israeli government was literally, I've read it recently, was they're losing the PR war. It has nothing to do with civilian casualties, nothing to do with the World Central Kitchen aid workers getting killed, or the Orthodox Church that was bombed, or any of the other instances of lynching in West Bank. No, it's just that, man, they're not selling it well.
Even on that, the best option's Biden.
And Cenk, David is right. When I said that he may be taking advantage of a system that's already in place, he articulated that much better than I did. What people think when you say Joe Biden is corrupt, that he's personally corrupt, right? Not that he's part of a system that you're pointing out the flaws in that system. But listen, I spoke with D.L. Hughley. He said something very similar to what David said, and we'll play the soundbite for you.
I had a dinner with him and told him and the vice president the same thing. And I said, but the problem is, I don't live in Gaza. I live in the United States of America. And I'm not going to, as a protest vote, make my children's life harder. I'm not going to give my vote to somebody in a protest, from a protest perspective, that would empower people that only want to make my children's life. I can't think of one group of people who wants to give you guns and abortion. To rid you of any diversity, equity, inclusion. It's just a lot of things. Like at one point in America, it was illegal for slaves to learn. Now many places it's illegal to learn about slaves. That's a mindset. And so there are a lot of things that bother me. But I think where I see people, where I have a clear kind of line of sight is where I think will be best for the future of my grandchildren.
What do you say?
Yeah, so I have so many things to say here. First, let's start out with, we are not deciding who we're voting on today. If you guys have already decided and you say, okay, Joe Biden, we bow to you, we serve you, we will do whatever you want. I'm not in that
Serve you.
Okay, so he's got to earn my vote, earn my support, and he has not done that at all. Okay, so that's point one. But yes, on election day, if Kennedy, RFK Jr. is still around 10 points, that means he has 0% chance of winning. Applies to Cornell, West Carolina, etc. Then I'm going to make a decision between Joe Biden and Donald.
Could you imagine, like, okay, here's my situation. Let's say it was Bernie Sanders or like any type of guy, like anyone, versus Donald Trump. Donald Trump's like, I'm going to be dictator. Let's just like Donald Trump said he wanted to be dictator day one. Let's just even further. And he said, I want to be dictator. And I came out there and said, Joe Biden just ended support for Ukraine. I'm going to build a coalition to not participate. And we're not going to participate in swing states to send a message over Ukraine aid. Now, I might feel good about that. I might feel like really good about that. It might make me feel so much better about myself because I'm standing by my friends who are dying, right? I might feel better. But there is nothing that's going to come from that that's productive. There's nothing that's going to come from that that's going to help the people in Ukraine. There's nothing that's going to come from that that's going to change the situation. The only thing that's going to happen is I get almost like an emotional release. I use the ballot box as a stress toy. And that's not how I feel like using the ballot box. I don't think it's strategic. I think it would make me feel better if I wrote in, who am I voting for? Nestor Ivanovich Makhno. Like, oh man, I feel much better about myself. But I have to understand that, this is one factor that decides the vote, and this is one issue. There's a ton of issues on the table. And at the end of the day, Biden is much better than the other option, even if he has Jake Sullivan in the room holding him back, and even if he's been unable to go further with Ukraine aid, in part because of House controls on him, but also because of advisors holding him back. Like, it would not fix the situation with Ukraine. It would not help the Ukrainians. It would not help any of these other issues. It would basically just be the political equivalent of me throwing my hands in the air and saying, fuck it.
Donald Trump, and I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump. So there you go, okay? But at this point, we're not anywhere near there yet, and we've got a third-party candidate that's in double digits. In terms of Joe Biden being able to be pushed, I haven't seen it. So on Israel and Gaza, he can't be pushed at all. No matter what we do, no matter how many, like there's literally 1 million Palestinians starving to death. There's 33,000 dead already, and Joe Biden is saying no, send them $14 billion more to do more genocide. That's not a little issue. That's a giant moral issue, and I do not want to fund a genocide. So you're not going to move me off that position. But David is right.
I do want to say that Cenk Uygur is of the position. Let's say I just grant that it's a genocide in Gaza, right? Let me not get into the terminology of the academic terms. If I was to just grant him that it's a genocide in Gaza, I would have to ask on top of that, why does he oppose funding a resistance against what would be a genocide in Ukraine? Because if the argument is that there's a genocide in Gaza over the idea that the Israeli government may remove, we don't know for sure, but they could plan due to certain far-right people in the party to remove the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, take over the land, as many people in the pro-Palestinian camp suspect. We know that the Russian government is taking homes from Ukrainians and giving them to settlers. We know that the Russian government has signed laws into law that makes it so that if you do not accept the Russian passport, your property is theirs. They can take it from you and they can give it to whoever the hell they want. As they're taking Ukrainian children, kidnapping them, illegally deporting them to Russia, and then sending them to nationalistic summer camps where they're telling them, you're not Ukrainian, you're a Russian. You're a Russian. What is that? That's cultural erasure. Some people might use the word cultural genocide, or just the word genocide. A lot of Ukrainians do. If this is a genocide in the West Bank, this would also be a genocide. He is firmly against sending down any more military aid to the Ukrainians. That's what I've heard from Cenk. I think that's the position him and Anna have. And for me, if you're really this strong, we must fight against genocide, struggle against genocide, unless it comes with guns, because that's aesthetically unpleasing as a left-winger, because Raytheon might smile a bit. I don't know. Like, I respect the amount he cares about Gaza. I just would like to see that same outrage directed towards the issue that is not getting as many views as it used to.
that unfortunately all three candidates are awful on Gaza. They're all despicable.
I had the UN ambassador in the other day, and I questioned her about this genocide language, and she said that she does not believe it's
Well,
genocide.
that's a lunatic position. I'm sorry. But look, if you know what the definition of genocide is, it is not the same as a Holocaust. So, by the way, Israel, what are you doing? For God's sake, what are you doing? Now you're bragging that it's not a Holocaust. So, Holocaust is when you try to kill everybody in the race. Israel is not doing that, okay? Genocide is when you target based on a race and you kill at the levels that Israel's killing at now. Srebrenica was 6,000 Muslims that were killed by the Serbs, and the UN declared that a genocide. If Srebrenica is a genocide, there is absolutely no question at all that Gaza is a genocide. And it has all of
Is that not the goal of Hamas to wipe out the Jewish state? Is that not the goal of Hamas to wipe out Israel?
Yeah, all of these are super tired talking points. So, yes, but Israel is actually preventing a Palestinian state. For 7
Okay, in Srebrenica, to be clear, what happened is they gathered up all of the men, like everyone, and then they shot them. And that's what they did. They gathered up everyone and they shot them. There was not a question of, is there terrorists in this home? Oh, there's one terrorist, 20 guys, blow it up, boom. You can say that doesn't apply with the law of proportionality. You can go far enough to say it's a war crime. They're not taking into consideration civilian casualties. But that is different than Srebrenica. You can both be brutal, you can both be horrible, but you don't need to pretend these two are the same things to be morally outraged by both.
25 long, brutal years of occupation. Israel has said, oh, theoretically the Palestinians don't want us to have a state, but you don't get a state. How's that fair? That doesn't make any sense at all. The minute they allow Palestine, look, both sides need to recognize the two states. The idea that Hamas has that Israel's not going to exist is also very much a lunatic idea and a dangerous, terrible idea. I do not support that at all. I support protecting civilian lives on both sides. And right now, Israel, we've got to be honest about this. Israel has killed 30 times the number of civilians that Hamas did. So if you think Hamas is an awful organization as I do, then you should be outraged by what Israel has done. Yet I don't see that. When it comes to Israel, no, okay, send them 14 billion more. No, honestly, at this point, the Israeli state is, I mean, I don't want to put it on the whole government. There's a lot of,
By the way, in my head, I don't know why I'm really specific about numbers, and I don't think the numbers are adding up, but I don't want to nitpick about the numbers because I feel like it'd sound like I'm downplaying. But I'm just going to say I'm not going to get into any of the number stuff right now. I just don't feel like it. I don't think it'd be worth it.
great people in Israel, and I hope they turn around and they vote the right way. But this current government and the IDF, as it is currently composed, the leadership, are definitely meet the definition of terrorists. Netanyahu is one of the largest terrorists in the world right now.
Depending on you considering that a terrorist does not have to be a non-government actor, which is how a lot of people define terrorists. You don't have to agree with the definition. You can say it's morally flawed, you can say it's ethically flawed, but it depends on your definition of terrorist.
Hey, real quick, and I know, Brian, you want
I
to get...
understand it's the ethics of the thing he's trying to get at.
And on the issue of moving Biden, I kind of do see evidence that Biden can be moved and influenced. I mean, Biden's taken money from Big Pharma for a long time, and yet he did $35 insulin, inhalers, and on the 10 biggest Medicare drugs, now those companies are being forced to negotiate. On cannabis, quite frankly, I don't think Biden cares at all about decriminalizing or legalizing, and yet he's asked for the rescheduling of cannabis. And
He needs to move forward. I've said this before. It is now legal in the majority of the states. Most Americans live in states where pot is legal. Pot being legalized is overwhelmingly popular. Overwhelmingly popular. Biden has an issue with youth motivation to go out and vote right now. This is an issue that obviously is concerning youth voters, especially. And now, I just say, like, you go forward and just endorse it. Just endorse the policy of marijuana legalization. I think it'd be a smart political move. You should move forward. At the last State of the Union, he said that nobody should be in prison for possession. Nobody should be in prison for possession. There's one step forward from there. There's only one last step he has to do. Just one little baby step more, and he's there. Just go for it. Just go for it. Just go for it.
on student
The Germans should not have gotten legal pot before us. Okay? The Germans shouldn't have gotten that. That's embarrassing.
loan debt, I don't think he cared about student loan debt at all, and he's done more student loan debt forgiveness than any other president. So I do think that he actually listens to the people around him.
Yeah. And look at the state of the economy. You mentioned the CHIPS Act and all of that. That does not change. That has no bearing on anything.
Those are two different things. And so it's really important to clarify, Don, as you pointed out accurately earlier. So, for example, you're right. I don't want anybody thinking that I think that Joe Biden is personally corrupt, like Donald Trump is. I think all the Hunter Biden hearings are nonsense, and they've never had any evidence about it. But systemically, he's among the top 3 most corrupt politicians we've ever had. Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden, because they've taken the most amount of money. And you could put Trump and Hillary Clinton in there as well and get a top 5, okay? So now when you talk about pushing Joe Biden, look, some of it is...
Okay, if we agree that they're all engaged in the same type of behavior to varying levels but very similar-ish degrees, it's just different, like which groups are taking money from, then it's going to become a question of not, okay, who's bucking the system on this, because none of them are. It's going to be who can implement the best policies, who will have the least destructive impact on the country, who could benefit the country more, who's better for sustaining and making the republic survive, like who's better for the country. And if you sit down Donald Trump and Joe Biden in front of Cenk Uygur, he cannot argue, because he's already said he won't vote for Donald Trump, that JoeIden is as bad or worse than Donald Trump. And if we acknowledge that RFK doesn't have a chance, which Cenk can't at the moment, because I think if he did, then his whole thing would fall apart, because then it would feel like he's just basically calling for a protest vote for protest vote's sake, then this leaves you with 2 paths, and you either have the path that is, rocky, you don't like, it's subs your feet, it's fine, I don't like it, and the other path full of bear traps, right? I'm choosing the rocky path.
Is real, but way too little, like rescheduling. Just make marijuana legal nationally. What's wrong with you? You're losing younger voters.
True.
It's such an easy layup. 70% of the country agrees.
True.
On some of it, though, it's not just weak. It's actually a trick, like the drug prices. You tell me I'm supposed to give him credit for negotiating drug prices on 1 to 10 drugs out of tens of thousands of drugs? No, that's a way of distracting you and pretending that he did something while he actually protects 99% of the drug companies and their drugs and who are giant donors of his.
I think what David was responding to is that he can't be moved, but he seems to be
No, but
moving
he's
on
not
those
moving
issues.
on the drug issue.
And those issues are incremental.
No, he's not moving on the drug issue. That whole thing is a scam to protect drug companies. So you don't want to say out of tens of thousands of drugs you're going to negotiate price on 1. That means you're not doing it. In fact, you've got a cover story. On some things, he has moved a little bit. Student debt's a great example that David puts forward. So these are facts, guys. And on student debt, he's relieved about 10% of the student debt, which is such a classic Obama-Biden corporate Democrat move. 10% is definitely better than 0%. So if I vote today, I'm going to vote for 10% rather than 0%.
Okay, all right, Jane. Go ahead. I know you want to get in. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like, I mean, you know how the government works. Like, when are we going to get sweeping? Like, well, who's gonna sweep in and get and pass Medicare for all and the Green New Deal tomorrow? We have a 51-49 Senate with Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, and yet we've gotten a lot of these things done, things that will have material impacts.
Sorry, the Russians got me. I'm back. Where was I? I forgot what you were saying. We'll just get back to it.
On people's lives, reasons for people to be able to afford medication that they wouldn't have been able to afford yesterday. Is it everything? Of course not. Is it enough? Of course not. Is it going to take more time? Of course it is. But like to downplay the accomplishments that they've made just because it's not everything, it seems so like. It just seems so like kind of diluted, and you know how it works. You know how
in this environment, when you consider who's in the Congress, when you look at the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the
what I was going to say is Joe Manchin's not going to be in the Senate much longer because he's being ran against by somebody more popular. He's not going to be able to hold it anymore. Once we lose that vote, if we have a 50-50 Senate, you're going to find out very quickly that actually we kind of miss Joe Manchin a little bit. I don't like Joe Manchin. I don't like him at all. But having that extra vote, even if we had to wiggle him a lot to get him on a few issues, was adding more flexibility to the administration. And once we lose that, that will be an issue.
Matt Gaetz of the world and what's happening with the House Speaker, to get done what Joe Biden's gotten done is not, I think it's nothing short of a miracle. That he's
I think you have a great opportunity with your platform. I mean, to reach so many people, to be able to use that platform to continue to push into the left, as we all should. We should push from 10 to 20. We should push for more student loan debt cancellation. But to claim that it's not, that it doesn't count because it wasn't everything, it seems just like not the right way to go about doing this. Use your platform to keep pushing.
Again, let's be super clear. I never said nothing, and I clarified this. I'll clarify now. I clarified on the show all the time. So, for example, one of the best things that Joe Biden did was he put in a 15% minimum corporate tax. That's a great policy, and I love that policy. And I'm fair and honest about all of these things. So, 10%, like I said, on student debt relief is a lot better than what Trump did or would ever do. He goes backwards on all of these issues. So I know that, and I clarify that to the audience all the time. But don't come and tell me that 10% is good enough. Give me a pat on the head and move on. No, I'm not giving him a.
That's not what he's saying. He didn't say that. He didn't say give it a pat. He said you should continue to push it along.
Yeah, no, but guys, how's that working out for us? One drugs. So at this rate, we're going to take what 10,000 years or 200,000 years to negotiate drug prices on all drugs. I'm tired. No, this is really important. I'm tired of a Democratic leader that we have to beg to do Democratic things. We constantly are begging and pleading with Democratic leaders to do the things that they promised. How about they stop lying to us and actually goddamn do it? Here, I'll give you a great example. We're not talking about Green New Deal or Medicare for All. Brian, I know those are not realistic at this time, and I want to work towards making them realistic. But when you talk about $15 minimum wage or voting rights, those are super realistic. And they chose.
One at a time.
Sorry, but the $15 minimum wage thing, they tried to get that through. It was shot down by the Senate parliamentarian. And not only was it shot down by the Senate parliamentarian, Joe Manchin didn't want it, Kirsten Sinema didn't want it. We didn't have the votes for it in the Senate, even if we could get the Senate parliamentarian to overturn it. And it's not like, okay, we could have tried to overturn the Senate parliamentarian's vote, but if we did do that, we would still have to get the extra Senate votes and then bust up the filibuster to do it. If we didn't avoid the Senate parliamentarian. Because the Senate parliamentarian, we wanted to do it through budget reconciliation, and they said, no, you'd have to pass it as a normal law. You couldn't do $15 minimum wage through budget reconciliation. So we would either have to convince Joe Manchin and convince Kirsten Sinema, get their votes after overturning the Senate parliamentarian, or somehow convince a bunch of Republicans to sign on and just pass it as a standalone 60-vote bill, neither of which was accomplished. The way he sells it sounds like it's a press a button and then you got it situation, which I don't think that's the case. There's no way you're going to get the senator from West Virginia to endorse a $15 minimum wage in West Virginia, especially if his name is Joe Manchin. And he knows that there's no one else that's going to take his job because there's no other Democrat in the state that can win that seat. There's no Paula Jean Swearengin wasn't going to do it. Richard Ojeda wasn't going to do it, even though I think Richard Ojeda probably be more electable than Paula Jean Swearengin was. Like, that's just the case. I don't wish it was the case. I don't wish that was the reality, but that was the reality of the situation around $15 minimum wage.
You know why those didn't pass. You know that Kirsten Sinema curtsied and voted it down. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Short of putting Kirsten Sinema out there and turning her thumbs down to a thumbs up. These people are advocating for certain things. We have immovable Democrats, corporate Democrats, that those should be the targets of your ire, because it's the Kirsten Sinemas and the Joe Manchin. And by the way, these systemic blocks against having any type of like reasonable Democratic governance or representation in the Senate and the House.
The goal would have to be to make opposing a $15 minimum wage in his state impossible, making it so you build a grassroots movement in West Virginia against Joe Manchin. And somebody could replace him as a Democratic senator there. But it's just, given the politics of West Virginia, I'm just saying, you're going to have a rough time doing that. That's something that's going to take like a decade of work, not a few months.
We need to pass a Voting Rights Act so that we're not completely gerrymandered out of power. That's where the issue lies. But we can't do any of that. Not giving Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who are very clearly and plainly the cause of these problems, a pass and just saying that, oh, it's all of the Democrats, actually redounds to their benefit.
Can you imagine if they were the majority? Can you imagine if you had a Republican in the White House? No, not a Republican, I should say. Can you imagine if you had a Donald Trump in the White House and you have the members of Congress and some of the members of the Senate now? Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to make a point about the drug stuff. I don't think it's good to oversell or undersell this stuff. And while Cenk is clearly right that there are 10,000 drugs out there, the reason that those 10 drugs were selected was on the basis of how many people use them. And so, yes, many of those drugs have a few hundred or a few thousand people that use them. Remember the whole Martin Shkreli thing. Not defending Martin Shkreli, but the drugs that were in question there are used by very few people. So the selection of the 10 drugs is both a starting point and it's strategic because of the number of people using them. And to say it's 10 out of 10,000 kind of misses the significance of it, in my view.
Yeah. Here's how I feel about this. And I think it's very simple, and I'm sure you've thought about it before. I look at politicians and politics as public transportation. They're never going to get you. They're never going to take you to your house like a chauffeur, right? Or you drive your car in your garage. They're going to take you to the bus stop or the train stop that is nearest to your home. And that's what I'm voting on. Someone who is the closest, who gets me the closest to the policies that I find important. And in this particular era right now, that is the Biden administration. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent. But the only side now that's looking out for
is he not a Democrat? Is Don Lemon an independent? Okay, I didn't know that.
Democracy happens to be Democrats, and the one who's in the White House and the one who has the best chance of winning again is Joe Biden, whether we like it or not, and it's not perfect. And that brings me to the next thing, because currently, Brian, the polling is a dead heat. There was one outlier. Did you see the Reuters Ipsos poll that came out just a short time ago?
Biden leading by a couple points.
Biden 41, Trump 37. So on the average of polling, there's a +1. He's a +1 over Trump. That's a pretty big turnaround from just a few weeks ago. How do you think he was able to stop the bleeding?
I think it was a combination of a few things. And by the way, I would caveat this by saying, like, I don't really put a ton of stock in these polls anyway. So this is us having a conversation based on something that...
God, like, on one hand, it is true that like the polls are not sacrosanct. Like, they're Abraham gave him the 10 Commandments by God. Here is the correct polling numbers. That's not happening. But we shouldn't disregard these polling numbers. They're one way to look at the political atmosphere, one indicator. You also need to look at voter registration. Because the way that these different polls weight the different numbers is different. A lot of them have different methodologies, but it's one indicator that you should look at. You should not disregard these polls just because Nate Silver has, did an oopsie after oopsie, and we're just going to now disregard polls because all polls are stupid and the polls are not always right. We shouldn't do that. It's like a weather report. Like a weather report might be wrong, 65% chance of rain. Oh, okay, then rain. That doesn't mean now you ignore the weather report. That means it's just one indicator. Like, oh, okay, the weather report says this. It's likely that it'll rain tomorrow. Plus, polls are always a snapshot in time anyway.
Agree with the premise of, but I think a couple things are helping. One, the economy is doing well. It has been doing well for a long time. The macroeconomic factors of the economy are doing well, and those are lagging indicators. So we'll start to feel those now.
That's true, because also gas money predicted at the start of the year that prices would continue to go down until nationally in December it'd be $2.99 on average across the nation, and that was with the conflict in the Red Sea taken into consideration by gas money. Those prices will probably continue to go down, and as those prices continue to go down, that will have a positive impact. That's one indicator. There are other indicators as well, like unemployment continues to stay low. Real wage growth is increasing at a semi-steady pace. These are things that over time, hopefully people will feel more of. But I mean, whether or not people attribute that to Biden and his administration, that has yet to be seen. But the polling data could indicate that. But again, snapshot in time. It could be other things as well. Can I just go out there? If I'm wearing suits, if I have a show where I wear, please burn down my studio. Not for anybody else. It's not an insult towards anyone else. But if I start wearing suits, you have permission to burn down my studio. Okay, I don't want to wear suits ever. I will have lost this connection if I'm just wearing suits on my show. Okay. or that will mean that I've sold out and went with the big time. And if you try to burn down that studio, the security will stop you, and then you can't even film on promise anyway. I just don't want to wear suits on stream. I couldn't imagine it.
Stock market, the fact that we have 26 straight months of sub 4% unemployment, the fact that we have 15+ million jobs that have been added, those are going to start to bear themselves out in the coming months. Even though they've been around for a minute, it's going to take a little bit for people to actually feel it. Of course, there's still a ton of work to be done. And there's also the fact that, of course, the abortion stuff, and now, almost on a weekly basis, we're having updates on the whole question of abortion. We just had Florida Supreme Court rule that Ron DeSantis' 6-week abortion could take effect within the last 24 hours. We had Arizona's Supreme Court also ruled that their 1864 abortion ban can take into effect. People are seeing that. That's an issue that absolutely energizes the entire population, left to right, and so that's having an impact. And then there's the fact that Republicans keep setting the bar all the way in the basement for Joe Biden. And so, for example, I feel like the switch kind of got flipped after the State of the Union. Republicans keep setting the stage where, all Joe Biden has to do is basically show up and say his name, and he's going to exceed expectations. But Republicans keep setting expectations all the way on the floor, and so when Biden shows up and he's able to do a good job like he did at the State of the Union, and even kind of go back and forth with some Republicans who are trying to heckle him, it only makes him look better because now everybody's expectations have been set to nothing.
I'm interested to hear what Cenk has to say about this one.
Yeah, no, on this one I totally agree. And so,
You do? Wow. We have a consensus here.
By the way, I should just note, I have a ton of respect and admiration for Cenk. So nothing is personal. Of course not. I've known Cenk for a long time. He's been nothing but kind to me, and so I just want to put that out. I'm glad that we're able to have a dialogue, and him and I agree and disagree on certain things.
That's how it's supposed to be. That's what a democracy is built on, right? Differing opinions and ideas and views. Well, Cenk, let me ask you this, because there's been some serious demographic shifts in the polling when you look at for this election. NPR came out with an analysis of their polling from 2020 compared to their most recent poll. Biden is gaining ground with college-educated white people and people over 45, but there is an issue, right? There's an issue when it comes to younger people. He is losing major ground with young people and non-white voters. Why the shift?
yeah, I'm going to explain that in a second, but I got to tell you, I think this polling is surprisingly great news for Joe Biden. And I'll tell you why. Because I've been seeing him losing younger voters in drip for the last year or so. And especially with Gaza, I've never seen someone lose voters that quickly and that massively. And so he went from plus 26 to now down to on young voters. And he's losing minority voters in a big way, and that was already clear. That's why I ran against him, because I thought he had almost no chance of winning. So where's the good news? Well, now in the polling, you're seeing why the election is still close. When if a Democrat is losing young voters and now is almost tied with Latinos or losing Latinos, he should have absolutely no chance of winning. But what's happened is, number one, college-educated voters are now going in droves to the Democrats and Biden. So there's been a massive shift there. They were already on the Democratic side, but they're much more so now. So from a small margin of victory there, he's gone to a very large margin. And older voters have done something stunning. Older voters are the ones that are the hardest to turn. Their ideas are usually set, their parties are usually set, and it's nearly impossible to move them. But they have moved in very large numbers towards Biden and the Democrats.
That is true.
Thereby erasing the advantage that Trump has with younger voters, which is a sentence that should never be spoken, but here we are. And so all of a sudden,
Wait, clear. Trump doesn't have an advantage with younger voters. It's just that Biden does not have the advantage that he should have with younger voters as a Democratic candidate.
older voters vote more than younger voters do. So Biden is back in a ballgame in a way that I have to be honest, I didn't expect.
So a couple things on this, Don, if I can, real quick.
Yeah,
some of these numbers don't really pass the sniff test unless you believe that we're seeing the greatest unless you believe we're seeing a racial realignment like we haven't seen since the civil rights era or the Civil War, right? So I recently interviewed Adrian Shropshire, who runs.
And also, can I just say that the Republican Party, RNC, in an effort to stop hemorrhaging money, have cut out their community outreach programs into Latino and Black communities that were actually having real successes. And that's something that is sounding alarm bells in a lot of Republican circles, because they felt like some of the more positive polling numbers could have been in part due to efforts like that. And they feel like instead of trying to build on the momentum that they could get, as the Democrats don't have as tight of a grip on these voters, not saying that all these polling numbers are right, I somewhat agree with David here, not completely, but somewhat agree with David here, they decided to make cuts because they had to make cuts somewhere, and they chose the community outreach programs. And 1/3 of the staff. Yes, 1/3.
Black Pack. They have done a bunch of their own polls. They are not able to replicate any of these racial realignment findings. So number one, I would be a little bit skeptical of the degree to which this is being claimed. The other element to this is just like a technical element, and not to get too in the weeds, but we all are familiar with the margin of error on the polls at the top line. It's often 3 or 4 points because of how these crosstabs are created, which are what if we look at men and women? What if we look at men and women broken down by race and then by education? Every time you add another layer, the margin of error goes up. The math is sort of beyond me, but I've spoken to some stats people who attempted to explain it to me. And so I also think that the effect is, number one, not nearly as large as some are claiming, and significantly subject to a growing margin of error the more we want to slice and dice it. I'd be shocked if these are the numbers we get in November.
Well, my question to you is going to be, do you believe those numbers, or if you believe those numbers, David, and you answered that, but if you believe those numbers, why do you think Trump has been able to make such major gains with non-white voters, at least according to the polling?
I believe the numbers, so I can take this.
Can you
Yeah, go ahead. No, listen, it would be mere speculation. I'm actually not sure. I think first we have to disaggregate how much of this is erroneous or not completely precise polling data, but I want to hear from Cenk on this.
Yeah, so guys, I don't think that it's that Trump is gaining younger voters or minority voters. I think that Biden and the Democratic Party is losing them. And my theory on why that's happening is because of the TV online divide. Generally speaking, older voters watch television. And if you do that, you're going to get, in my opinion, a corporate message. And a corporate message is status quo is wonderful and terrific. And that might be why Biden is gaining with older voters, because Biden.
Whereas if you're young, you get TikTok news updates about how Biden's controlled by the Jews, and you don't like the guy. I mean, not to be like, I'm an alternative media platform. I can't be angry at alternative media. I'm just. But no, the internet does have problems with information. But I do think there's a media consumption divide.
Is very much a status quo candidate. But for younger voters, they're getting their information online. And in online, you see the reality. You don't get it glossed over by television. You don't get Morning Joe's filter.
Let me be clear. Online, you don't just see the reality. A lot of times what you see on the internet is not the reality. A great example of this would be the amount of people who are reposting footage from Syria pretending it was footage from Gaza, and many of it being people who are just straight up Assadists, who are apologizing for the killing of those kids in Syria, but now that it's geopolitically different, they can use those bodies, pretend it's somebody else's bodies, and use it for their political point, and, in my opinion, to make ad revenue on Twitter, okay? But there is a case to be made about the internet being able to give you more unfiltered takes. Like, my hour-long interview with a right sector soldier, they're not airing that on CNN. Never.
Morning Joe's filter on it tells you that, well, Israel's 50-50, mainly not even 50-50. Israel's like 90% right, blah, blah, blah. But online, you don't see that at all. You see dead babies, you see people being picked out of the rubble. So young people have no interest in Biden's position on Gaza. And you see in the polling, that is the number one issue that is moving younger voters. For minority voters, it's a little bit different. But what's wearing thin is the Democrats constantly saying, you have to vote for us. We're entitled to your vote. And if you don't vote for us, you're a bad person. That is terrible political strategy. And I think
Republicans say that as well.
The younger minorities are getting tired of it.
Republicans say the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump has said the same thing to Jewish people.
No, yeah, that's right.
It was literally, if you don't vote for me, you don't really love Judaism. You're like a fake Jew. Real Jews support Trump.
Remember, I'm not a binary guy. I think Trump saying that to Jewish voters is outrageous and ridiculous. So that, to me, it's not an either or. I think they're both doing it.
So under that standard, the majority of American Jews would not be Jews.
Trump did it with Jewish voters, and then Biden did it with black voters. If you don't vote for me, you're not black. Are you kidding me? What kind of obnoxious, entitled message is that?
It's true.
I want to move on now. I want to talk about this. This is, for me, this is a big issue, and I think it's going to be for all of you, because I believe that if this happens, it's going to be the end of democracy. And this is that Project 2025. I'm sure all of you know about it. What happens if Trump does win? This is a proposed policy platform for a second Trump White House. Some really scary stuff in there. Abolishing the FBI, abolishing the Department of Homeland Security, abolishing pornography, banning abortion pills. I want to know, Brian, what you think of these policy proposals.
I would love, honestly, and I'm saying this as somebody who doesn't want to ban the XXX videos, okay? But God, wouldn't it be fun to watch them try to ban porn? Wouldn't it be fun to watch the government try to shut porn down in the United States? Oh my God, it would be fun to watch them fail and fail and fail and fail again, trying to bring Indonesian porn censorship to the United States. My God, it would be funny. I'd have a blast watching it, honestly.
More so than that, isn't it?
He loses the 4chan vote.
That is really the end of democracy, no?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's really no way to sugarcoat this. Everything that Trump is kind of saying that he wants to do is nothing more than this, like, Christo-fascist fever dream, right? Nothing, it's all...
Okay, if Cenk is nodding his head and acknowledging this, or he believes this, okay? The whole thing about democracy, and the thing that's really, the benefit of democracy is if you lose, there's always next time, right? Like when the Taiwanese first had their first elections, it was actually the ruling nationalists that went out of their way to have an election because there was an uproar of support for democracy, and they thought, well, if we're the ones that introduced it, maybe we'll win, and then they did win the elections. But then when they lost, instead of trying to do a military coup, which many people were scared of they might do, they decided to say, oh, maybe next time. But if that maybe next time doesn't exist, then you're stuck, and then all the policies that Cenk Uygur wants to do are not even an option. How does he balance that? How does he reconcile that?
Just straight autocracy, authoritarianism, and he's promising it. And you know what the fact is? The sad part about it is a number of people in the Republican base want it, and they polled them on that exact question. And they asked them, "Do you want Donald Trump to be able to terminate the Constitution? Do you want him to not have to run again for re-election, just become a dictator?" And they've all said yes, or a good number of them.
Oh, they've all said yes.
So yeah, I mean, they're not
yes.
hiding this, they're not couching it in certain language. They're coming right out and saying exactly what they're going to do. And I think that we have to be. I think they're relying too on the fact that so much of it's the Steve Bannon approach of just flooding the zone with shit, right? And just hoping that we don't recognize it. And so I would just say for us, the pro-democracy forces that span the entire political spectrum from left to right, to not get lost and try to chase each thing and just kind of what is it that Mehdi Hasan says about Gish Gallop, and just to focus on our winning messages. And I think that's going to be focusing on abortion and that's going to be the most effective message moving forward.
Gish Gallop is David Pakman saying as well. But I do have to say, having covered every single word and every single minute of the previous Trump administration when he was in office, he does what he says he's going to do, David. And
he at least
that's not true. He fulfilled if you look at the list of promises that he fulfilled, a lot of them went unfulfilled. You're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. Didn't happen. Going to get rid of all the national debt. It didn't happen. He recorded the largest deficit in American history. There's a lot of promises he makes that he doesn't fulfill. Actually, the majority of the promises he makes he doesn't fulfill.
Tries.
Project 2025.
I mean, listen,
try to do it.
I try not to be hyperbolic with my audience and say, listen, there's no question that Trump wants to do these things to the extent that he understands them, to the extent that someone told him, the Heritage Foundation or whoever said, hey, here's something you should do. I believe he's going to try. I am cautiously optimistic that he would not succeed at doing all of these things. One of the scariest parts of Project 2025 is he wants to replace career bureaucrats, people who work at the lower levels in so many federal government departments who are privately, they vote, I'm sure, but they are overtly non-political in their role. They're not replaced with every new administration. He wants to take tens of thousands of those folks and replace them with complete and total loyalists who also happen to be incompetent in many ways. That's extraordinarily scary. I'm cautiously optimistic he would not actually succeed at that. And so when my audience calls and says, do I think if Trump wins, there will be an election in 2028? I do. I think there's going to be a lot of problems, a lot of strife, a lot of close calls, and he's going to have some successes if he wins. But I do actually think that our checks and balances this is a low bar, but are strong enough that we will have an election in 2028. Cenk, you don't think so?
I disagree. Sorry, if I can just jump in. I don't respectfully, David. I disagree. I host a series with Mark Elias, who's the nation's premier voting rights attorney. What Republicans are doing at a granular level is trying to disassemble the very foundation of democracy. In Arizona, there's efforts to tear up the voter manual. Like, it's basically, you would liken it to not just changing a stop sign to a street light, right? Like to a red light. It's basically taking all of the signs off of every street and expecting people to know what to do. And then when chaos would ensue, it would give them a predicate to come in and just kind of upend the entire system and do with it what they will. So there are lawsuits across the country. There's election vigilantism efforts across the country. There are just efforts to disassemble every facet of our democracy happening in the courts right now as we speak. And if they had the presidency and God forbid one or two houses in Congress, they would have a ton of success at being able to succeed with this.
And Jake, on top of that, the Washington Post is reporting that one policy under consideration is the Insurrection Act. Trump using the Insurrection Act of 1807 to activate the military for domestic law enforcement, as well as directing the DOJ to target Trump adversaries.
Yeah, I think that I'm definitely the most alarmist out of all of us on this.
How can you be the most alarmist on Trump will kill democracy and then not vote for the only other option?
So number one, look, if somebody said to me, we're going to go for systemic change and we're going to make the executive branch a little bit stronger to make sure we can root out corruption, I'd be very open to that. But this Project 2025 is nothing like that. It's the exact opposite. What it does is it doesn't dismantle the corruption, it furthers the corruption. So one of the things that it does, for example, is they want to get rid of all regulations so that oil companies can run roughshod with almost no laws to check them. What kind of populism is this? That's not populism. This is a backdoor way of actually cementing.
Well, it can be. I mean, this is the thing. A lot of populism is not just like, woohoo, they're just doing what is popular. It's not. A lot of it isn't. A lot of it is just demagoguery.
Corporate rule. So it's not an accident that the Heritage Foundation, totally powered and fueled by corporate money, is pushing this agenda. But the most dangerous parts of it are the ones that you guys have mentioned. And I'm much more alarmist than David on this for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Insurrection Act is real. They consider that many times in the first administrations, including a 3-hour conversation at the White House on whether they should roll out the tanks and do martial law after he lost the election. These are very dangerous people. And the only reason that Donald Trump didn't do that is, to be fair to the rest of his staff, at that point, when he still had establishment figures in his administration, they said, we are all going to resign together unanimously if you do that. He's not going to have those guys that check this time. There's going to be no brakes in the car. So it's going to be a bunch of loons in the room, and they're not going to hesitate to do things like martial law. Guys, they already did a fake elector plan. That is a coup against America, where they knew they lost the election, and they tried to overturn a legitimate election, full well knowing they lost. And part of the reason they went in that direction is because some portions of the right wing have become convinced, ironically, right before the numbers began to change, that they had lost demographically, and they were never going to recover. So the right wing has never cared about democracy. What they care about is power. power. So if they get power through democracy, they're fine with it. If they need to destroy democracy to get power, they're also fine with it. Not all of the right wing, but yes, the Trump portion of the right wing. Project 2025 has so many things in it, like getting rid of the FBI. That's defund the police on steroids. That's a lunatic position to get rid of the FBI and Homeland Security. So
But do you agree that do you agree that he would not actually be able to get rid of the FBI?
yeah, he would have trouble with the FBI, David, but I think that you're overestimating the opposition he's going to get. I saw the fourth time around, and I thought that Trump was going to get run out of town, and I famously lost a bet with my co-host Anna Kasparian about that. And when I make the same mistake that I think you're doing right now, which is thinking that the Democrats are going to be effective in fighting back, that the establishment or the system is going to be effective in fighting back. Last time around, they were awful at fighting back, and Trump ran a steamroller over them. This time,
Hang on, Brian. Cenk and David.
But the thing is, all of this argument, all of the argumentation that Cenk is putting forward right now, only makes the points that Brian and David were making earlier that much stronger.
I think that I agree with Cenk on this, David. I think that maybe you're overestimating the checks and balances in the system because last time Donald Trump was in office, they were tested and many of them failed.
Some of them did fail. So
Yeah.
I mean, listen, Cenk is doing a really good job of convincing me that it's extra dangerous to mess around with any Bobby Kennedy Jr. stuff this time around. With every word you're convincing me it's that dangerous.
That's a good one. Go
by the way, I
ahead.
prefer Cornel.
Yeah, no, you know, I just to
Why? I'm sorry. Why didn't you just say Cornel West then? Why wouldn't you just say Cornel West then? By the way, if you're again, if it's going on as a genocide, then Cornel West standing against supporting the Ukrainians against, if that's the genocide, then that would certainly also be considered a genocide. Again, there's not a consistency here. There's not a consistency here.
to Cenk's exact point, you know, we have Democrats and Republicans playing two different games, and for a long time to right now, I mean, we have the Dick Durbins of the party who are so focused on like ceremony and decorum, and like they're just getting stabbed in the face with with a machete on the other side, and you know, that may have barely held up thanks to, you know, in part of even a few Republicans. Those Republicans will be gone. There won't be any Mike Pences. There won't be any, you know, insofar as Ty Cobb was able to do anything, or you know, some of these White House counsel. Those guys will be gone. And so what they did in 2020 was basically a stress test. They're seeing they're pulling on the parts of the fence and seeing
Testing
where
the
the
limits
weaknesses
of the
are.
system.
And
Okay, look at that. Black screen. It was a good point from Brian. You know, I thought the best point Brian made was when the screen turned completely black. I thought that was a really impactful point to really get through the existential dread.
I promise you that fence is coming down in 2024 to 2028 if Donald Trump wins re-election, because the Democrats aren't going to be able to do it, and there will be zero Republicans. There won't be any Brad Raffenspergers or Mike Pences or Ty Cobbs that are going to be blocking him.
All right, I want to go. We've covered a lot of ground, but I want to do something, get to some things quickly. And I know that now on streaming, I can go a lot longer, but we have gone on for a while. So if we can do these quickly, I want to talk about fundraising. Donald Trump, $50 million. That we saw these big.
We already kind of talked about this earlier. Let's see what's left. Let's see what's left here. So, $50 million Trump fundraising. We already talked about this earlier. Trump hush money conviction. That's the last big topic. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to listen to that. We can wrap this up here. I think 45 minutes of Don Lemon and the gang is more than enough. I think, if anything, this video convinced me more that Cenk was not prepared really for this conversation, or that he really hadn't thought through the RFK thing. If Gaza makes you vote for RFK, it doesn't make sense you vote for somebody that was more supportive of Israel. That doesn't make sense to me. RFK is not going to be better on any issue surrounding corruption, in my view. RFK is like a liar on top of a liar. If you're somebody who cares about things like Medicare for all and good public health care, which I know is something that Cenk cares about, it's kind of hard to do Medicare for all if you can't even get the basics down of healthcare, like vaccines. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then he randomly throws out, you're like, oh, he prefer Cornel West. Then why aren't you going with Cornel West? If you're already going to go for a no-name, not a no-name, Kennedy's a name, but going to go with a candidate that has no chance of winning, might as well go with a candidate that has no chance of winning is more ideologically aligned with you. I guess maybe it's because in the no chance of winning spectrum, Cornel West is even lower, because Cornel West's campaign has been a mess, with him originally announcing with the People's Party, finding out that there's just a bunch of podcasters who don't know what they're doing, so switching over to the Green Party, finding out that the Green Party, you'd actually have to run in the primary, so dropping to the Green Party and then running as an independent. And also not being as well known as Kennedy. So I guess on the spectrum of no chance in hell, you know, Robert Kennedy is, RFK Jr. is a little bit closer, but it's still in the no chance of hell section. So I mean, at this point, just like choose Cornel West, like write in Marianne Williamson, write in Bernie. Like just at that point, definitely when you're in California, it doesn't matter either way. Weird, man. I just don't think Cenk's takes here past the sniff test. That's why I wanted to check this video over. And yeah, I think I'm coming out with the same conclusion I had last time I watched him try to defend these takes. I don't think he thought this through. Zaporozhye filming with artillery crews, ground rocket crews, and a lot of this is pretty dangerous work, so I've had to be on the down low, no streaming. But I got some great content for you. A great debate with Jackson Hinkle from, I think, about a year or 2 years ago now. And even if you have seen it, you should watch it again. It's a great blast in the past. It shows how much of an uneducated, knuckle-dragging window licker Jackson Hinkle really is. And right now, we see him gallivanting across Russia, driving around in tanks, playing with toys in full camo, with white sneakers like a fool. And so I just want to show you guys how much of a fool he really is. Well, just remind you, enjoy the debate. I'll be back to regular streaming very shortly.
How's it going, Jackson?
I'm doing okay. I have a bit of a sore throat. Other than that, I'm fine.
No worries.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm taking my day off because I have to go to a board meeting, but I'm happy to be here.
Cool. What do you want to talk about? Because I feel like we could talk about. You see, I used to have this mindset because I'm new to debating. Bosch was my first debate, so I was like, my first debate, I was like, I only want to debate like actual fucking big fish. Hence why I was like, who the fuck is Dylan Burns? I'm not gonna waste my time on this little shitlib that is an imperialist. I'm not gonna waste my time on this shit. So now I have you here because I've changed my strategy. I'm gonna literally run through all of you. I'm gonna run through all of you one by one. So you're the first one on the talking block tonight. Good to have you here. So what do you want to talk about?
I can't see you, Jackson. Unless he's great.
Tune onto my Twitch stream. You're not gonna see me on Discord. I'm streaming right now.
Okay, fair enough then. Okay. I'll tune into your Twitch stream.
Just leave your camera on. What the fuck are you doing?
I thought you did, hey, babe, I can't see you on Discord.
What did you just call me?
I said I didn't call you anything. I said if I can't see you on Discord, then why can't I'm gonna jump on Discord?
Because I'm putting your face on my Twitch stream.
Ah, okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the guest turn. Okay, so first off, you say like a lot of things.
Dave?
What?
Did you say Dave or did I mishear that?
I think you misheard that. You're not my type, Jackson. Sometimes if we want to hear things, we hear them.
No, everyone in my chat heard it. Go on, though. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, whatever. The first thing I wanted to talk about is your claim that I've like proposed myself to be like some foreign policy expert, right?
Bro, it says it in your bio.
What does it say in my bio?
It says you are a foreign policy advisor to a congressional candidate.
Okay. And?
That's what an expert would do. If you're advising a nation congressional candidates on fucking foreign policy, that's what a foreign policy expert would do. You're providing an expert analysis of foreign policy to someone who wants to sit in the Hall of Congress.
Okay, so I don't like to use the word expert. I've never proposed myself to be an expert. You and Bannon have both said this. People have claimed I've made this before. I've never claimed myself to be an expert. I've advised people. I'll just tell people my experience with foreign policy, and they choose sometimes that I would be useful. For example, I helped Jill Carter, state senator, when she was running for Congress, get ready for an interview about the Israel-Palestine conflict on the issue of BDS.
Would you concede that non-experts typically do not provide analysis on foreign policy to congressional candidates or to state senators?
Sometimes. I don't know. It's when people call themselves an expert, I just have a high.
You wouldn't concede on that point because I would say yeah, like non-experts.
Sure. I just want to make sure that it's not perpetuated. I've called myself an expert of some sort. I want other people to go to other sources to hear anything on my channel. I just want to make sure that's perpetuated. I don't want anybody to take my word at face value.
Okay, I don't really care, but I'll abide by your terminology of being an advisor.
Okay, so I want to talk about Taiwan.
I'm down to talk about Taiwan. I'm down to talk about AOC. I'm down to talk about anything.
Okay, I want to talk about Taiwan because this is the thing that everybody's been really badgering me over, right? This is the big thing. Okay, so number one, I just want to ask, do you agree with Bannon that I'm going to be like a Kissingerian type of some sort?
Bro, I don't know. I want to talk about Taiwan.
Okay,
I don't
okay,
as
long as you didn't make sense. Fine. So what's wrong with my tweet? Because that's the big thing that everybody's successful. What's wrong with it?
I do not believe that we should be propping up other militaries, especially in an effort to try and wage a new Cold War against China and turn China against Taiwan. I don't think we should be doing that. And I think it's antithetical to the principles of American government to do that.
Okay. So you believe that us funding this
You elaborate on your opinion first. Because you're the one who put out the initial tweet about Hassan. What was your principal concern over Hassan's take?
My principal concern is that he's using the word escalation extremely incorrectly. The idea that us sending these arms to Taiwan is an escalation, I find to be quite silly. Definitely since this has been a policy of the United States since 1979, and that's only officially under the Taiwan Relations Act. We've been sending them aid much before that. So to consider it an escalation when we're continuing a continuation of American policy is just not factually correct. It would be the status quo, the perpetuation of the status quo.
So if you, well, actually, it's an increased sum of armament that we're sending, but also if you think that that's some sort of a non-escalation, then what do you think the explicit purpose of the United States providing military support in general for a sovereign entity that's trying in some ways to disassociate itself from China and become its own sovereign nation, or the United States' goal is to cut Taiwan off and away from China? What do you think the goal is of the U.S. in intervening there?
So first, about the first part of that, it is an increased sum, but a big reason why it's increased is number one, inflation, and number two, because the defensive needs of Taiwan has increased over the years. As the Chinese military increases its capabilities,
defensive needs, it's a part of China. The U.S. recognizes it as a part of China.
No, you're getting two things.
U.S. doesn't have an embassy there.
No, we do have an embassy there. We do. It's called the Taiwan Institute, the American Institute of Taiwan.
That's not a fucking embassy, Dylan. That's not a fucking embassy. We don't have an embassy there because it's not a sovereign country. If it was a sovereign country, we would have an embassy.
Okay. Do you want to calm down?
Do you want to have like absolutely reasonable takes?
Well, I want to finish my statement. You're not even letting me finish, Jackson.
It doesn't function as an embassy because it's not an embassy.
But it does function as an embassy.
No, it doesn't.
It does everything an embassy does. Wait, can I finish? It does function. It deals with passport issues. It deals. It's what our number one negotiating and talking to Taiwan. It functions as that. It does name one thing that an embassy does that the American Institute in Taiwan does not do.
I'm just telling you, it's not an embassy because it's not a sovereign country. So the label as such would be very disingenuous. It would be towing the State Department line of saying that Taiwan is in its somehow own way a sovereign country. It's not.
So you're conceding that it does function as an embassy, though.
I'm not conceding anything. I'm just saying.
You just said that it doesn't function as an embassy.
I'm saying that I said it's not an embassy.
Then you said that it didn't function as an embassy.
I'm saying it's not an embassy, and for that reason, you can't claim that it functions as an embassy.
But it does. Then what thing does an embassy do that the American Institute in Taiwan doesn't do? One thing, anything, literally anything. Anything in the world.
It would be an embassy if it was an embassy.
That's not an answer to my question, Jackson.
It's not its own country. It doesn't have an embassy.
It does everything that an embassy does. Just like there's another example of a Taiwanese institute of similar nature in the United States that has basically what would be a Taiwanese ambassador that was there, for example, in Joe Biden's inauguration.
An institute, not an embassy.
But it does everything an embassy does.
If it was a country, and if the United States recognized it as a country, then we would be calling it an embassy, correct?
We don't call it an embassy because we wanted to.
Because it's not a country and we don't recognize it.
Why do you keep interrupting me, Jackson?
Because you keep going on these illogical paths that deviate from what the truth of the situation is.
Jackson, you gotta let me finish my statements or I can't talk to you.
It's not a statement if it's a lie, but go on.
Lies can also be statements, and you haven't proven that it's a lie. It does function as an embassy. You're the one who said it didn't function as an embassy.
You're asking you what does it do? It doesn't recognize it as a part of China. You started pushing back on that.
Yes, here's my statement. There's a difference between the one China policy and the one China principle, right? The Chinese government holds the one China principle. What the principle is that the mainland government, right, the
PRC is the sole governing body over mainland China, and that Taiwan is a part of China, right? But the one China policy is very similar, but the key distinction is that we don't really necessarily say that Taiwan is a part of China. We do not make that statement. It's ambiguous, just like most of our policy on Taiwan is to give us wiggle room. Even the Chinese recognize this.
The Chinese do not recognize.
They recognize that's our position. They recognize that's our position. I'm not saying they recognize that Taiwan is its own separate country, but they don't pretend that we have the one China
The
principle.
Chinese recognize that Taiwan is part of their country.
Okay, that's what the Chinese
Chinese call
recognize.
themselves the Republic of China. The U.S. doesn't have ambassadors in China. We don't have an embassy in China. It's not its own sovereign country. I know you want to try to finish.
we can go through all the things that make its own
I can let you go on for like a minute to talk about all the dumb shit that you just put forward.
Okay.
So now let me talk. So it doesn't have its own embassy. We don't have ambassadors there. They call themselves the Republic of China. China recognizes that it's a part of China. So I mean, you're just avoiding the principal debate that we were starting to have at the beginning of this live stream, which was, what is your excuse for saying that it's reasonable for the U.S. to give an increased supply of armament to Taiwan at this point in time when there is increased aggression towards China from the U.S. and our Western allies in a myriad of complex ways?
So first, I'm going to assert why I think it's a country. When it comes to what most countries would designate what is countries, whether you go with Webster Dictionary, any dictionary you put in front of me,
It's not a country.
Okay, you can say words. Now can I finish?
The U.S. doesn't recognize it as a country. So are you saying that you personally recognize it as a country, or the U.S.
I
recognizes it?
personally recognize it as a country because
Okay,
not recognizing it. Wait, let me finish. Can I
England
please?
recognizes Taiwan as a country, but the United States doesn't. Go on.
Okay.
I can see that.
The United, yes, I can see that because the United States doesn't recognize it as a country out of formality and trying to keep ties with the Chinese government, right? It's ridden a tightrope for a very long time, right? For example, Kissinger wanted to throw Taiwan under the bus. Many American administrations wanted to throw Taiwan under the bus. And it was Congress that stepped in and stopped them on many occasions. Sometimes it was the opposite. Now, when it comes to why it's a country, it has its own functioning judiciary, it has its own military, it has its own flag, it has its own anthem, it has its own currency, it has its own identity that has formed over years, it has its own history separate from China. It is part of multiple international organizations, not all international organizations, but the United States is a part of, say, the International Criminal Court, even though we should be, and that doesn't make the United States not a real country, right? I don't believe that just like this isn't a country, this is a country. It's just the America gets to determine what is and isn't a country, and the China gets to determine what is and isn't a country. That's why when we didn't recognize mainland China, I still consider that a country.
So you're saying that you know more than the leaders of the U.S. government and the international community, which all define Taiwan as being a part of China. That's just your opinion. That's your opinion. I get it. That's your opinion. You just say that Taiwan's a country and no one fucking agrees with you.
No, that's
no one in
not
the chat
true.
agrees with you. No one on Twitch agrees with you. The U.S. government doesn't agree with you. China doesn't agree with you. The majority of people in Taiwan don't agree with you.
That's
Type of one in chat
definitely
who don't
not
agree
true.
with Dylan Burns. I don't think any of you agree with them. So Dylan, go on. Explain why the United States, in your eyes, should be providing an increased armament to Taiwan that is not its own country.
Number one, you're wrong again. The United States, in all function, recognizes it as a country. It does not state it because they know it is of China. This is true of basically every. Let me finish. Let me go on my spiel. Just because somebody doesn't recognize it as a country does not mean it's not a country, right?
They don't recognize
I already said this earlier. Can I, Jackson, calm down, okay? I understand.
Because
you're not your point. No, because you're interrupting me. I'm trying to say points. You're not talking
You said that the U.S.
Yes, the United States does not rule the world. I don't know if you believe China and the United States are the only two powers that dictate what it is and isn't a country, but you know what? There are nations on this planet that say it's a country and have formal embassies with it. It's not a lot, but it's changed with time because the mainland's influence has grown. Yes, we have changed with it, but we treat it as a country.
The U.S. does not have embassies.
I said we have a functional embassy in Taiwan. We have a functional ambassador in Taiwan.
The U.S. is one of them. We don't have an embassy.
No, I said it's one. I said that the United States is one of them. You're not listening to me. I said it's one of those who changed its policy when it comes to embassies and national recognition officially. I was trying to tell you that it does not officially recognize it as a country. But I don't believe that just a number of nations recognizing something as a country means that it becomes a country. Definitely when the reasons they recognize it as not a country, even though unofficially many have a similar policy as the United States and have private institutes act as ambassadors in all ways, act as embassies in all ways, is because they want Chinese economic power in their countries. They want the Belt and Road Initiative. They want these things, which I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of the Belt and Road Initiative. I want trade. I want international prosperity. But just because you've been strong-armed by the Chinese government to get rid of your embassy does not mean you automatically now are no longer a country. Because if that was the case, then would you agree that in 1950 the Taiwanese government was the official government of Taiwan, of China, and we should treat that as the official government of China just because less nations recognize the mainland? That would be ridiculous.
So you do realize, though, that your preferred strategy here of like providing increased armament to Taiwan, which you claim is a sovereign country, but no one else does, and that the U.S. increased aggression towards China. You say that that's like what we should be doing, right?
No,
you say that's a good thing, that we should be providing this increased armament, which is an increased aggression. And if you believe that, that's obviously going to that's going to potentially one day, when the aggression reaches a certain peak level, is going to splinter potentially, if the U.S. gets its wishes, Taiwan from China. That would be the U.S.'s wishes here, right? Or at least economically splinter Taiwan from China. Now, China makes up a greater portion of trade with Taiwan than the U.S. currently does. Taiwan makes up a greater portion of trade and imports with Taiwan than the U.S. does by a great sum. So why, if you are claiming that you want to increase trade with China, you want these, I would assume this is accurate, you want more mutually beneficial trade agreements between countries all across the world, why would you want this U.S. policy of increased aggression, which will only inevitably result in the splintering, at least economically, of Taiwan from China, and which will result in more harm for the people within Taiwan?
So first, I just want to say you're wrong that nobody recognizes the official government. Guatemala does, Haiti does, Honduras does, Paraguay does, Nicaragua does, Belize does. There's many countries that do. Not a ton.
What do those countries have in common?
So wait. If that's the no, if it's they all have it in common, then why does the American position on it matter? If the idea of only American allies doing it, then why would the American recognition of matter in this case then?
I didn't push back on your assessed motive of the United States for not recognizing Taiwan as a sovereign country. I just said that they do not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country.
Okay, there. Anyway, let's get to the main point again. So I do support when it comes to China. I want to de-escalate. I agree with Joe Biden's, even though it was no toast speech at the UN, that they should come together, kumbaya style, and try to find resolutions. I didn't agree with Trump's tariffs on China. I didn't agree with that at all. But just because I want to de-escalate doesn't mean I abandon my values when it comes to Taiwan.
You don't want to de-escalate. You want the U.S. to give more arms.
But it's not.
Taiwan.
How is it an escalation if we're just continuing the status quo when it comes to Taiwan? Because that's what we're doing when it comes to the Taiwan Relations Act. It doesn't change.
It's an increase in armament. And it goes hand in hand with AUKUS. It goes hand in hand with everything we're doing in the South China Sea. It goes hand in hand with all of the military placements we have surrounding China. It goes hand in hand with the economic warfare against China. You can't look at just one policy alone without assessing all of the other things that the U.S. is doing on a global scale to counter China and increase aggression against China. You can't do that.
You can ask me about those specifics, about any of those things if you want to. But right now I'm talking about this specific policy on whether we support or not support it. And when it comes to this, the Taiwan Relations Act is very clear. What?
I got to stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Congrats. So the Taiwan Relation Act is very clear that when it comes to supplying arms to Taiwan, it should be purely and only determined by their defensive needs, and we provide them weapons of defensive of character. Now, when it says that, it means its needs, whether it has to do with inflation increasing or its strategic needs. That means that the policy of it increasing some years and decreasing other years has been constant for the entirety of our relationship with Taiwan post-1979, which, by the way, was the same time that we had one of the best relationships with China, because it was the midst of the Sino-Soviet split, and they wanted to open up to the United States, and we wanted them to open up to us. And so if we've had this policy through both hard times when it comes to Chinese relations and easygoing times when it comes to Chinese relations, I don't understand how this is an escalation if it's a continuation of what we've been doing for years.
Well, I have two things. First of all, you have to look at the relationship that the United States and the leadership within, the relationship the United States had with Taiwan and the leadership within Taiwan and what they were doing to people within Taiwan during that period as well. But also, you have to assess the fact that the U.S., in my eyes, should not be providing, we shouldn't be bankrolling these countries in military aid. We shouldn't be bankrolling countries in military armament and just completely stuffing them full of all of the military weapons that we could, squeeze out of the military industrial complex in a given year, because that country should be able to defend themselves on their own. They shouldn't have to rely on U.S. taxpayer support to wage their own alleged defensive wars, which I would argue, given the U.S. motive for escalating tensions and all the ways they are with China, this aim that the U.S. has with Taiwan is not to support any sort of defensive measures. Again, my principal concern would be the U.S.'s goal to splinter Taiwan, if not only economically, but geographically from China.
Okay, so we're moving away from the idea of an escalation, then we're going on to the motives behind it, right? Okay, so when it comes to Taiwan and these arms, you say you question whether it is defensive. So
I'm saying in general, I question the motives of the U.S. government in bankrolling countries in military armament and stuffing them chock full of military weapons, right? Because the U.S. doesn't just do that because we have a sincere care for a country's defensive operations. I mean, you have all of American or modern American foreign policy precedents to back that up.
Wait, say that last part again. Before
you have to just heard me. I'm not going to fucking repeat myself. Just say what you're going to say.
I just wanted to hear it. I didn't hear. Okay, whatever. If you don't want to be polite.
All of modern American U.S. foreign policy history backs up the precedent that the U.S. is not gravely concerned with the defense of any given nation or any given people. We do things so as to exert further dominance as an empire across the globe and to achieve our foreign policy goals and aims.
Okay. So I will first just say that the weapons that we're providing them, none of them are going to be purely offensive weapons. These are weapons that could maybe.
How do you dictate that? Tell me how you dictate that. What sort of mechanisms do you have in place to dictate that?
Mechanism? Wait, you mean mechanism I have in place?
No, that the U.S. government is providing. No. The mechanisms that the U.S. government and their relations with Taiwan have in place to control that they're not going to be used for offensive means. Tell me.
I don't have that information.
You want to know why you don't have that information? Want to know why you don't have that information? Because the same thing was said when Biden entered office about Yemen. They said they're only going to be providing defensive weapons, missiles, and military supplies for Saudi Arabia, and it just so happens that they use them for offensive operations in Yemen.
So you found offensive weapons that Taiwan is in control of that we gave?
I'm asking you to provide the.
No, you're making a claim. You're making a claim. I'm making a claim. I'm not making a claim.
I'm asking you to provide the structures that are in place that will guarantee that these weapons are offensive operations.
I never alleged that there were structures in place.
You said that they were used for defensive operations.
Yes, and so, and they are. Jackson, listen, you gotta calm down. We're gonna have a conversation here.
Tell me how they're going to be used.
Jackson, they are going to be used.
I can see that you're wrong. Tell me how they're going to be used for defense.
You gotta calm down, okay? You can't just be a mini Haas, okay?
Tell me.
Look. You're making a claim. No, I don't concede the point. You're just being anal for no reason. Because I am telling you, you would need to provide me evidence that we're providing them offensive weapons for me to be like, wow, that's terrible. We shouldn't be doing that.
My claim, Dylan.
My claim is we're giving them offensive weapons. I have checked the weapons we're giving them. I asked
you the structures they have in place to guarantee that.
Just because there is any structure in place to guarantee it doesn't mean we haven't given them defensive weapons. Are you alleging that the artillery we gave them is going to shoot over the Sea of China? They're going to shoot over from the mainland of Taiwan? Is that what you're alleging? Are you alleging that the F-16s we gave them are going to do bombing runs on mainland? You got to show me offensive weapons if you're making the claim.
Dylan, I didn't make that claim. Tell me when I made that claim. Tell me the claim I made. Tell me the statement I said.
You are asking me to provide an example of structures in place to stop us from selling offensive weapons to Taiwan, and I responded, I don't know of any, but I have yet to see us sell what I would consider these purely offensive weapons to Taiwan. So please, if there is a concern about this, instead of yelling and getting your dungaroos, I'd like to see that because that would be very concerning to me. That'd be something I would call my Congress.
I just told you, Dylan. I just explained to you that we don't have those increased armaments in Taiwan yet. The future has not taken place yet. But what we can do is look at modern American foreign policy precedent and look at the fact that that same exact thing has happened in Yemen, where Biden said that he was only going to provide defensive weaponry for Saudi Arabia, and they go on to use them to bomb innocent Yemeni children. So what I'm saying is, unless there's a structure in place to guarantee that, then maybe we shouldn't be providing them with military armament, because this is the same fucking thing we do every time the U.S. empire engages an intervention in another country.
So you're yelling about something that has yet to occur, and I agree politicians lie sometimes, and that's bad, and I think we should immediately end support.
Sometimes.
Yes, sometimes. Yes, politicians lie sometimes many times, 90% of the time. We don't need to be anal over that. I'm acknowledging that Joe Biden lied. You want me to, what else do you need me to say?
So do you recognize the inherent flaw in the system? You don't recognize. You see it happening in Yemen, but you don't understand how that could happen in another country.
Listen. If you know what, I agree. So you and me, let's go to DC and say, hey, put checks on this, official checks on this. Which, by the way, I don't know. Have you checked if there's official checks on this or not? Have you gone?
Dylan.
I'm asking if you have.
Exactly. You're asking me a question. I'm going to answer.
Okay.
There might be official checks on it. There are official checks on Yemen. There are official checks on the arms that were going to Saudi Arabia as it related to offensive operations in Yemen. But the checks don't matter because there's no system in place to actually guarantee that those checks are upheld. Hence why we shouldn't just be providing armament to entities within sovereign nations that could potentially try and sow discord with those weapons.
So the interaction we just had is that you asked me a question on whether there are official checks in place to make sure they're defensive. I say I don't know because I'm trying to.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I said, what are the structures in place to guarantee they're not used for offensive operations?
And I tell you I don't know, and then you go on this rant about how terrible and bad it is, and then I ask, well, do you know? And then you say, well, I don't know. So what is the solution here? Number one, to be go and Google and find out if this is the case. If neither of us can do this. And number two, if it doesn't matter to you either which way, why even talk about this for any amount of time?
Because, Dylan, my principal concern here is that the U.S. is giving an increased supply of armament to Taiwan, and there is no structure or system in place that has been put forward, as I know of yet, in any country that could guarantee that military armament isn't used for offensive operations. So regardless of whether they take the Yemen approach, the Saudi Arabian approach, and do the same thing here, it doesn't really fucking matter. Even if they did it, it would be a nice gesture, but it wouldn't really fucking matter because at the end of the day, Taiwan's still going to use these weapons in whatever way the U.S. empire says they should use these weapons. Hence why we shouldn't be giving fucking Taiwan weapons. Don't you get it? Don't you fucking get it?
You need to calm down, okay?
No, I can't. Illusion of hate.
Well, no, you haven't researched any of this, and you're.
Get this through your head.
Okay, Jackson. okay? Is this like press TV talking points? Like, I don't like, why are you so angry about this, okay?
Get it through your head.
Calm down, so I can talk to you like a rational human being, okay? There's only one house on Twitch, okay? I don't need there to be two.
You're right. It's a fucking empire and it's crashing upon the gates of Red Poop. You are going down with these absolutely delusional takes.
Number one,
Say your next
I'm
thing.
not
Say your
even,
next
number one,
point.
am I part of Red
Say your
Poop?
next point.
I'm not,
Say your next point.
I'm not part
Say your
of
next
Red
point.
Poop.
Say your next point. Explain why we should be giving increased military armament
Okay.
to Taiwan.
So number one, you allege that there's like basically no standard that could check this. Okay, what standard would you even have basically? It's because obviously you don't want to do this period, but you're saying that there's no standard we could even possibly have to make sure this is the case. So like what percentage likelihood would you need to like 100% assurance that no one could like jolt the system? Like what system would you put forward? And that is different when it comes to checking to make sure that these weapons are defensive. I know you don't want to send them in the first place, but if you have a problem with the system in place, you got to tell me what system would you like in its place if that was the case. If that's one of your problems with it.
No, I don't want to send them at all.
Well, yes, I acknowledge that.
I'm just debunking your bullshit argument that these are only going to be used for defensive operations.
Yes, but they are, and you have no evidence otherwise. You can just say, well, let's look at Yemen, let's look at there. Okay, but this is the Pacific. The strategy for Yemen is that the United States wants the Houthis to lose the civil war because we want our allies in Saudi Arabia to have a beneficial government in Yemen. We do not have, under any delusion, that Taiwan is going to invade and retake the mainland. The Truman administration gave up those hopes a long time ago. The Sheikh and his offspring failed miserably. The White Terror is over. There's no auspices. The United States or Taiwan are going to do an invasion. So I need evidence.
Tell me when I thought that I ever said that I thought that was the explicit goal of the United States. Tell me when I said that.
I'm not, but it doesn't make sense for us.
Why are you doing this straw man?
Let me finish.
You're creating a straw man.
No,
you're acting
you gotta let me finish.
I know you like Vosh, but you probably shouldn't like take every single strategy.
Look, why are you so nice to Vosh and you're such an asshole now? What
you haven't called me a Nazi yet, so there's that. I will be a little bit nicer.
I'm not going to call you a Nazi because I don't think you're a Nazi.
So, Dylan, you say that...
Can I finish my point? Okay. I'm trying to be nice. I specifically, when this Taiwan discourse started, I was going to be as good faith as possible. Man, you're testing me, man. Look,
well, you're not being that good faith because you say that you're asking me my principal concern is over whether or not they're defensive or not. I said it like 20 times. My principal concern is that we're sending arms to Taiwan.
We're trying to have like somewhat of a discussion here. And since you brought it up, I wanted to talk about it.
Go on.
So, my thing is, I don't even think the United States would have a large interest in giving Taiwan offensive weapons at this point, since offensive weapons is not really that could strike the mainland or do any of the civilian damage about the mainland that the United States could provide them, would not benefit our strategic goal, which our strategic goal is to make sure that Taiwan stays independent from China as its own entity, if you don't want to call it government. We'll use the word entity to just move forward. So if there's no evidence of us giving them offensive weapons at this point, if neither of us know if the check's in place, right, I don't understand why we're talking about this. And we just like... Why we're talking about this, again, is because you said that they were going to be defensive arms, right? You objected to that, and so I wanted to see the offensive
arms. And I proved you wrong.
No, you didn't. You haven't proved that we've given them offensive arms. Show me evidence of that.
No, I proved... You were the one who made the claim that these are defensive arms.
Yes.
You could not prove that these are only going to be
the weapons that I have seen are weapons that are going to be used for defensive purposes. For example, the F-16s. That's probably the thing that you can maybe make them a hubbub about. That is being given to them because of Chinese, you can call it infringement, you can call it liberation, I don't really care. Chinese aircraft are going into what Taiwan considers its airspace on a frequent basis to test it. They're like prodding it for seeing if there's weak points or just...
China is flying into Chinese airspace.
Yes, Taiwanese airspace, a separate country.
Taiwanese
airspace. But again, I'm trying to use nuclear...
The United States government recognizes that Chinese airspace.
No, that's not true. Wait, you just made a claim that's not true. Prove that.
No, you made a claim
that the American government acknowledges that it's Chinese airspace. That's not true.
We'll get to it in a second. Give me 1 second. Because you said that these were going to be used for defensive operations, and they're not. You can't prove that. Well, no, you can't prove that.
I'm saying, I said that we're giving them weapons of defensive character that can be used for defensive purposes, and I know they're going to be used for defensive purposes because
I don't know that.
Okay, show me any intention otherwise. I made a claim. Just prove my claim. How are they going to be used for offensive purposes?
There's no guarantee that these are going to be used for defensive purposes. I cannot see into the future, Dylan. There's no way.
So also, you have no evidence. You don't know if the in place. You don't know if we've given them offensive weapons. In fact, you haven't even disputed that claim. You don't know.
No, I have disputed that claim.
Okay, so show me evidence of that. Show me that offensive weapons.
I'm saying that we claimed that they were going to be defensive operations only used for Saudi Arabian arms in Yemen, and that didn't end up happening. So how can you guarantee, based on the words of the same administration who guaranteed that,
because
that these
strategic priorities are completely different. The strategic priority in the conflict in Yemen was that we want the government in Saudi Arabia and their allied government. No, because you've already said this. So if the aim of Taiwan is to allegedly protect their own airspace, that you call it Taiwanese airspace, if you will, which is a part of the Chinese country, then they would be protecting themselves from their own country, which would mean that they'd be trying to secede if that's how they're going to be using their military against their own country. The Taiwanese government has said that we don't need to declare independence because we're already an independent country. That's a statement from the president of China, who has one.
So why do you think the United States would be having its puppet regimes across the world?
Is there any evidence that we control the government in Taiwan through like puppeteering or anything like that? Or are we just using this government as...
I don't. We have foreign policy aims. We didn't control Iran before we started warmongering in Iran and trying to commit regime change in Iran either, or any other country for that matter. That's kind of how regime change works.
So you think we're going to do... What is that? How is that relevant to Taiwan? Are we going to do regime change in Taiwan, or what's the allegation?
I never made that explicit claim. I said that it could just be economic splintering from China. It could be trying to, get China to place some sort of like economic sanctions within Taiwan. We don't know, but we do know that the U.S. has sinister goals there, and they are increasing the aggression towards China and increasing their support for Taiwan in a myriad of ways.
Okay. So
specifically, the political group thing within Taiwan who would like to either secede or have limited engagement with China.
Okay, again, this is the government of China. Okay, I understand that is their position. That's your position. The government of Taiwan has said they don't even need to declare independence because they already consider themselves independent. The people of Taiwan have elected Tsai Ing-wen on 2 occasions, and she is one of the most separate country, quote unquote, independence candidates you could possibly think of. So you
understand though that there are people within Taiwan who would love to have Taiwan secede in the same way that on year after year, Bolivians resoundingly elected Evo Morales to serve as president. But then you had a very, very, very small faction of individuals led by Janine Áñez who led a coup in the country. The popular will doesn't matter when the U.S. empire is involved.
Okay, so the popular will does not matter when the U.S. empire is involved. Now let me just say, the people in Taiwan that want to be back part of China is a very, very, very small minority. The same way that the population doesn't matter. So the will of the Taiwanese people does not matter is one of the things you're saying here.
The U.S. empire does not matter. To me, it matters.
Well, you just see it as an arm of the U.S. empire, but I don't see it simply as that. I see it as also
Taiwan, or is the U.S. empire providing
the U.S. empire is fighting Taiwan, but just because the United States supports arms, weapons, whatever you want to call it, just because the United States supports a country through military means or economic means, does not mean we need to just disregard what their people want. Their people want to say. That's very dismissive of the Taiwanese needs. What is that? Like, why would you?
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. You're misconstruing my words. What I'm saying is the U.S. empire. No, I care more about the needs and the wants of the Taiwan people than you do. What the U.S. empire wants is to exert dominance and expand their empire in every way, shape imaginable, and they're going to do that by countering China in their eyes. I think that's actually a very, very short-sighted approach. I think the U.S. should be working in a mutually beneficial way with China to expand their reach across the globe. I think that makes far more sense for the longevity of the U.S. empire and our country and our prosperity of our people. But the U.S. empire currently is engaging in a campaign of all-out aggression with China, and this is just a piece in their puzzle. Taiwan is a piece of their puzzle.
So, if that's the case, then would you be in support of the Chinese military backing off, the American military backing off, and the Taiwanese people having a referendum that is monitored by both Chinese, American, and international officials, so they can all make sure that it goes by the books, there's no interference of some sort? Would you be in favor of that then? The referendum, and the Taiwanese people can pick their own future?
I'm not sure I would support that. No, because I think if you would looked at California in 2016 and you had taken a fucking poll amongst all Californians in 2016, I mean, it's definitely questionable as to whether or not this would happen. But there's a chance that the majority of Californians would have voted to secede, and I think that's fucking absolutely dumb. Taiwan is a part of China, and that's all it is.
That is the Chinese government's position. Yes.
If they want to secede, then they are going to have to guarantee, based on their own rights, that they can actually leverage their own power as a sovereign country and secede without U.S. backing, right? Without U.S. armament.
So what you're saying in this case is that the might makes right here.
I think Taiwan could not. I don't think Taiwan could secede independently and form their own sovereign country without the support of the U.S. empire. Okay. And if a country can't do that,
I could say the same thing about Palestine.
They shouldn't be guaranteed their own country.
So do you hold that opinion for Palestine as well?
Israel wouldn't be able to maintain dominance and control over Palestine had they not had all the
nuclear weapons. So let's say we dropped it all right now. Well, now they most certainly have nuclear weapons.
I think we're in agreement here, but I think you are misunderstanding what I'm saying. Because I think I agree with you.
Okay, I believe Palestine should have its own independent country, and that we're happening right now.
Are you a two-stater or are you one-stater?
I don't
think in the past you supported two-state solution.
I would say two-state because I don't think one state is practical or could ever happen unless it was under an Israeli government, which I do not want.
I think a two-state solution is far more impractical, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying is I'm in agreement with you in that I don't think Israel would be able to maintain dominance over Palestine or been able to expand as much as they have over the past several decades without U.S. backing, which actually further backs up my point about Taiwan.
The question would be about, so right now, if let's say Israel moved in and they were like, all of this land is ours, we claim it all, nobody can stop us. Now we know that recently Taiwan has gone on a diplomacy beach of basically like blast, and nobody would practically stop them. Nobody would either do alliance purposes or the fact that they have nuclear weapons. So under that situation, are you saying that the international community should just stand down and not do anything because at the end of the day, this is
all of that?
Yes, if Israel took all of Palestine right now.
No, Dylan, I'm not saying that because you need to fucking listen to what I'm talking about. Israel wouldn't be able to expand the reach that they have if they didn't have U.S. backing over the past several decades.
I heard you.
But I said that a country, if they cannot guarantee their own sovereignty without help, without support from another country like the United States Empire, then they should not be their own country. That's exactly what I just fucking argued.
Do you see how that, again, so America drops the support right now. You think this example wouldn't work because America has support in the past. So even if we drop, let's say we stop funding the Iron Dome, stop funding everything, we said, we're out, not our issue, we need to rebuild our infrastructure, we need Medicare for all, right, which I know is something you would support doing, right? We pull out. Israel could do what I'm saying. They might do. Just go in there, this is all ours. So what should the international community do then?
If the Israeli, okay, Dylan, I'm just going to say it very clearly, and I'm also going to counter that point you just made, because it's actually an interesting point. If Israel hadn't had all the support that they've had over the years, they wouldn't have been able to build up their military into the point where it can now do that without further U.S. backing. You, again, are just looking at this isolated situation rather than the complex history of U.S. foreign policy as it relates to Israel in the modern era. Had the United States not provided all of the carrots that we've provided to Israel over the past few decades, they wouldn't be able to just do this today without further U.S. backing. Now, what I'll also say to counter that point is there have been numerous assessments that have been drawn up surrounding Israeli security on their northern borders and whether or not they could actually maintain a stronghold on northern cities within Israel if resistance groups began attacking and how long they'd be able to manage those. I mean, there's a reason why the Ben Gurion airport had to shut down for the longest extended portion it's ever been shut down for during this assault, because the resistance has grown and it has grown to a point where it can actually threaten Israeli defense. And also you had the resistance launch multiple successful rocket strikes into Israel that passed through the Iron Dome, which also was a new, it was a new exhibiting of resistance forces. So yeah, I don't think if they hadn't had all that support from the U.S. empire over the past decade or past several decades, they wouldn't be able to do that today. But also, I think their support is dwindling as is with U.S. support, and if U.S. support was cut, the time in which they'd be able to maintain their dominance would be questionable.
Okay. I think the example works, but just to be I'll move off of it and say, what about
you didn't provide any evidence as to how it works.
Okay, I'm moving off of it because this example is easy.
Because you lost.
Because this example, you really want me to stand here and argue about this for 20 minutes, or do you want me to use an example that would be more?
No, I don't want you to stand here for 20 minutes and argue about this. I want you to accept that you were very wrong in that assessment.
Because I won't, and then we'll have to argue about it. No, I'm not trying to be very informed about this. Wait, I didn't advise those candidates, or what do you mean I claim?
You did. But you claim to be someone who's actually informed about this.
Yes, I am, but if you
don't know, you're asking your elbow.
Then we'll argue about this for longer. My point didn't have to do with American military support, and we don't know if without American military support, whether...
What was your point?
My point was that if a nation can beat and subdue another nation using force, or a people, or Israel force, yes, my point was that if America was to drop all the support, all the international backers...
It is about military support for Israel, right?
Yes, it is in part.
I'm
using my example has to do, because my example... You're not letting me talk. You gotta let me finish my sentences.
I'm talking in circles. I can't...
How are we gonna go back and forth? My statement is that if America dropped its military support for Israel, right? Stop supporting it, which you want to happen, right?
Yes, I would love it if the U.S. stopped providing military support for Israel.
Okay, wonderful. And so that scenario, we live in that world, we're outie, right? At that point, now we could say Israel, we could talk about the Spanish-American War in Cuba as a similar example if we want to move to that one, but my point had to do with just because a larger force like Israel can dominate the Palestinian people does not mean it should be able to, that a people should be able to decide on their own if they want to be their own independent country through votes. That's why if California voted to be independent, I'd be in support of it. Same with Texas. A great example of this is if the Spanish-American War happened, right? 1898. After it was done. Yes. What?
I thought we were sticking to Israel.
Okay, we'll stick to that then.
So you said, you were talking about Israel. I really do believe that if Israel hadn't received all the support support they've received over the past several decades, and if they stopped receiving reports or support starting today, that well, in the first scenario, they wouldn't be able to exert as much power and have as much control over Palestine that they currently have. But B, if they did stop receiving support from the U.S., their Iron Dome would crumble. They would run out of rockets. I mean, Israel ran out of rockets during the Obama administration during one of their assaults on Palestine, and they literally had to ask Obama to like immediately send them more rockets. I mean, Israel is very fragile. I don't think you understand this.
Israel is not very fragile. So the problem is, in this scenario, let's say they have nuclear weapons. If a force invades, they're going to nuke them and millions will die. It's a terrible scenario.
Chemical weapons as well. But how did they get those? With the support of who?
With the support of the United States. But let me finish.
So,
Let's talk about 1948. We can just talk
How did they get them? How did they get them?
I just told you, through help of the United States. Let's talk about 1948. 1948. Israel wins its war of independence. America's not giving them nuclear plans. We're not giving them this. There were individual Americans who went over there, but that has to do with Zionism. That's not directly America coming down like, here's all your soldiers, here's everything. And they win their quote-unquote war of independence, right? They use the Balfour Declaration as a principle, and they're like, here we are, right? There was still a Palestine-Israel issue then. And my same principle would still apply, that if they were able to dominate those people, which they were already dominating in 1948, when we look at what the Lahai was doing to Palestinians, massacring them in some instances, right? That was it right. They're not allowed to just dominate those people. They should get a vote on whether this is the state of affairs they want. That's my point I'm trying to get out here. It didn't essentially have to do with American support, and we can remove this from the scenario if you want to and go back to 1948.
Because it does. I mean, Israel has lost wars to Lebanon. Israel has lost. Israel literally, people characterize what just happened in the most recent assaults. They characterize that as a loss because Israel had to stop their ground invasion, which they were planning in Gaza, right? I mean, that's exactly what happened. That's why so many experts on this issue claim that this was actually a loss for Israel. So I do push back on this notion that Israel is some sort of a innately strong country that can overpower any of their neighboring countries because they wouldn't be able to. They can barely do so with U.S. support, with decades and decades and decades of U.S. support, billions of dollars per year, and they wouldn't be able to. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind that they wouldn't be able to do that, and they wouldn't have been able to expand their country to all the settlements they have today if it weren't for decades of U.S. support. I mean, do you really honestly believe that if it wasn't for decades of U.S. support that they wouldn't have been able to do that?
I do think that they would not be able to do what Israel today would not look how it looks. They'd probably look closer to 1948. That's
you agree with me?
Well, no, because my position would still hold for the Palestinians within Israeli territory in 1948. My position would still work. Is that those Palestinians should still be able to decide they should be made refugees out of their own ancestral homeland.
No, because the principal argument we had here surrounding Israel was that a country should not be able to stand on their own and be considered a sovereign nation if it has to rely directly upon another country for the majority of their military support or their economic aid. That's what we were talking about, and you just proved my point.
And we can move on to Cuba. Fine, for any reason, I'll just say you're right.
My chat was about to get really excited. I was about to finish. You just made my point that if Israel hadn't have had decades of U.S. support, it would look closer to what it looked like in 1948, which actually proves my point that we were having from the start. This occurred.
My point had to do with the fact that even in 1948, it would still stand that there would be Palestinians displaced by settler colonialism. Would you agree with that, right? And that's my issue. That shouldn't be decided just by the military force of Israel asserting itself in 1948, that the people of Palestine should be able to vote about their ancestral homelands, which they were being expelled from and turned into refugees.
It's not a matter of them voting. I mean, it's a matter at that point of international law and the disregard for it.
So it isn't just. So what you're saying is it's not just that a nation should be able to defend itself, or people should have to defend itself if it wishes to rule itself, and it should not, in that instance, it would be relying on other countries for support. That would be the international community getting involved.
No, that's just relying on international law. Not the strongholding of other countries, not the military support of other countries. That's just the rule of law.
So it should be a law that no one follows because the UN is a paper tiger. Because under the scenario, there needs to be countries that go in to enforce international law. Without it, law is just a paper tiger. A law that is unenforced is no law at all. It's just a piece of writing on paper. We saw that play down in Yugoslavia, for example.
No, I don't think that you necessarily have to have military intervention to guarantee the upholding of international law.
You do not? So what do you think would happen? And by the way, so would you say sanctions is then an okay way to support that? If the international community sanctioned Israel, then that would be okay. But that would not be the use of other countries to prop up Palestine.
I think every non-military example of like diplomatic means should be carried out before you are implementing sanctions that directly impact the citizenry of a country, or before you engage in military intervention. But anyways, I mean, we're kind of getting into another argument now. But I mean, I won that argument. So what else do you have for me?
You know, the ones who have to declare victory and prove to everyone that they won are usually not the ones that do the best, right? Deontay Wilder,
I was literally explaining to you how wrong you were, and then you were like, I don't want to sit here and take this for 20 more minutes. And then I was like, well, I mean,
I beat Manny Pacquiao. I beat Manny Pacquiao. I don't care what anybody says. I beat him. The judges are wrong.
I did. And then I was like, you know what? If Dylan wants to sit here and try to provide a new argument, then sure, I'll hear him out. But did I hear you out? And did you provide? I mean, yes, I did. And did you provide a new argument? No, you didn't. And we're sitting at the same exact.
So are you saying? Wait. You had to secede the point that Palestine and the Palestinians in 1948 would need international support from other countries backing international law for there to be anything done about Israel. Without other countries using force, people aren't going to do shit. The state needs to use force to make people follow laws. If not, it's just writing on papers. Social norms, and social norms are not going to dictate that Israel doesn't abuse Palestinians.
Dylan, the primary argument we were having was that a country should not be allowed to stand on its own without military. Specifically, we're talking about military support from another country, right? That's what we talked about from the beginning. Okay, yes. Okay, so is the upholding of international law guaranteeing that international law is upheld? That's not the same thing as providing direct military support for an imperialist country to take over another sovereign.
It is. Example is the Scarborough Shoal. China lost in international court when it came to the Scarborough Shoal. They ignored it and kept doing what they were doing. So you want to know why it failed?
Tried before you engage in military.
So what would you do then instead? If military support is the last thing, what would you do when it comes to 1948, Israel-Palestine? What would your strategy as the chief? Let's say the UN is actually something at this point, like actually doing shit. Like what would you do? What would your means that if it wouldn't be the military would have no involvement? What would your means be? Because I don't see any other option besides the threat at some point of military force.
I was respecting the will of the international experts who, were guiding the location of where Jewish people were to be guaranteed a homeland, post-war homeland. I would have respected the will of that international community that were alleged to have been experts on this, that was made up of also, I believe, 2 members from the United States, which said that Palestine should not be the explicit guaranteed homeland of the Jewish people. I would have respected that.
And do what about it?
I would have said that Palestine, if these international experts, Palestinian people are all saying that Palestine should not become the homeland of the Jewish people, I would not have issued a executive declaration that we are going to form a new home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
Okay, so talk is one thing, right? Neville Chamberlain talked a lot, and what happened?
You just asked me what I would have done.
Yeah, and you said you would have said this, and you would have said that, and you would have said this.
No, I said I wouldn't have guaranteed an executive declaration which guaranteed the Jewish people homeland in Palestine. That's how they were guaranteed their homeland in Palestine.
So are you talking about the United States presidential, not the Balfour Declaration?
I'm talking about the U.S. support for the Balfour Declaration.
Okay, the U.S. support for the Balfour Declaration. So that would have happened with or without the United States. That was done in 1917. As you say, it was actually anti-Semitic.
Nope.
Wait,
Nope.
it was anti-Semitic.
No, I'm saying it wouldn't have. I'm saying it's questionable as to whether or not it would have happened
But the
without
British
U.S.
did it.
support.
The British did it. And they
But you needed US support, right? You needed US
but they
you needed
did not
everyone
need US. No, you did not need, because the thing is, we had the Sykes-Picot Agreement. We had the McMahon Hussein.
Dylan, think if you had
You're
a
making stuff up.
U.S. force, a competent executive branch that would have done exactly what we did in Iraq, right? You sway member states to support your foreign policy aims, and you would have gotten them to not support the effort to create a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. But I don't even know how we got here, because we were initially talking about whether or not a country could stand up for itself based on their lack of military armament coming from another country, and you literally made the claim. You literally made the claim that Israel would be able to stand up for itself and expand its own territory without direct support.
Right now, yes, in 1948.
No,
wait,
Dylan,
yes, that was talking about. Then we moved it. We moved it. Fine, can we move on to a different example, which doesn't have your problem with it? Can we move over to look? Okay, let's look at the Italian history. Cuba, it was 1898. Cuba, American-Spanish War, right? After the American-Spanish War, there was a lot of discussion about whether Cuba would become an American state, its own thing, or whatever, right? Now, let's say you or whatever, anybody in the world, and you see the United States say, you know what? Yeah, Cuba's a state now. Cubans, obviously, many of them would not be happy. Maybe they revolt, but if we just wiped away the Spanish military, there's not much they can do. So let's say the Americans beat the shit out of Spanish rebels, just like we beat the shit of native rebels multiple times. Would that the might make right argument apply there, or we just move over to native tribes in the United States?
So you literally said that Israel today would be able to exert their dominance across Palestine.
Okay.
You said that at the start of your statement, you just said that yes, you believe Israel will be able to currently, as it is today, exert their dominance across Palestine, right? That's what you said.
Yes.
So I would question, what arms does Israel have to do that are not directly provided by or funded in part by the U.S. empire?
Well, number one, if we stop funding them, that doesn't make all their arms disappear, right? They still have guns that we gave them before, but it's not just us.
No, I understand that. I'm not a fucking dumbass, you piece of shit. I'm saying in a hypothetical situation, you're saying that Israel would be able to do this without U.S. support.
Yeah.
But the U.S. has provided support for all of this stuff. That's my
now we're talking about where I going forward. Okay. Can we move on to something else, or do you want to keep yelling about this?
No, I'd love to move on. You're the one who wanted to continue talking about this.
Now, can you answer my question about Cuba?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't care what you said because I was going to push back on that, so I went and got water. You want to say it again?
Okay. In 1898, we fought the Spanish, right? And we beat them pretty bad, right? The start of that war still occupied today. And after the end of it, there was two debates in the United States: what to do with Cuba and what to do with the Philippines. Those were the two pieces of territory we were able to wrangle from them. Obviously, the Philippines never became a state, and that was never even up for debate. It was going to become America's biggest and most pronounced. A lot of people say this is like the start of American colonialism overseas. I disagree. I think I've heard before, but it's one of the most cited examples. But Cuba, many Americans actually wanted Cuba to become a state. And to be honest, there's not much Cubans could have done to stop that. We just obliterated the Spanish military presence in Cuba, which stopped Americans from going in. So the Americans go into Cuba, we remove Spanish soldiers. United States, let's say, they declare Cuba as a state now. Many Cubans don't like that. Is the fact that they can't push out the Americans because they don't have the means to do so at that point. And let's say 20, 30 years passes, we're occupying that. Is that a righteous or okay occupation to the international community to do nothing just because might makes right there and they don't have the means to defend themselves without the help of Spain?
If we called them a state?
Yeah, we declared that they were a state because there was a debate about that in 1898.
Well, did they become a state?
No, I'm asking in the scenario that we did declare them a state. We were like, they are a state. And the Cubans obviously would not be happy about that. Then what?
They never became a state.
Yes, I'm asking. Okay, I know Cuba's not a state. But I'm saying in 1898, after the Spanish-American War, when that debate was going on.
But Dylan, I literally just spent like 20 minutes talking to you about a real-world example.
Yes, we're moving to a hypothetical. Because you can't get
you're wrong. So you want to engage.
What do you mean it was proven?
This actually was one of the debate tactics. When I was prepping for my debate with Bosch, this was one of the debate tactics that everyone told me not to engage with, because everyone said, when Bosch begins engaging these hypothetical scenarios, you need to tear this back to the real world example.
That could really happen.
The real world example.
This is a real thing that could have happened.
Are not material.
But it was material. There was an actual debate about it, right? So my question to you is, 98. There was a debate about whether this would happen, and my stance would be, we shouldn't just make them a state because we have more power than them and they can't defend themselves without Spanish help.
Prove you wrong with a real world example. Now you're dealing with.
Now you're told. Why are you moving? Just answer the hypothetical. What's wrong with hypothetical? What's wrong with it?
I don't dictate arguments based upon hypotheticals. I act upon real world examples.
How do you have conversations then?
I'm not going to engage with your hypothetical.
So you're saying Catalonia should not be an independent country if it wants to be?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know enough about that to speak to it, and I also don't speak on things that I don't know about. So I'm not going to talk about that
a Kurdish state. Kurdish people wanted a nation for very long.
Dylan, don't even get me started on this. Don't even get me. You just made me so excited. This is a good real world example that I'm actually informed on. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Why not?
Okay. So the Kurdish people could not guarantee their own sovereign entity until there was U.S. support prevalent in the region. The U.S. now claims to own and occupy. This is per Dana Stroud, who now works for the Biden administration on U.S. Syria foreign policy. That the U.S. claims to own 1/3 of Syria, own and occupy. They are doing that with the help of the Kurds, but the Kurds could not do that on their own. They had to have U.S. support. They couldn't do that on their own.
Okay. So what you're saying is because since they don't have enough power to start a rebellion against Iran, Iraq, the Turkish government in Syria, because there are people displaced by borders, because the borders of the Middle East were cut up in a very, let's say, hasty manner, right? They should not have a state. So that's your reason.
I'm saying
I'm not asking about current American. I'm asking should it be its own country?
I don't think that the Kurds would be able to secede and create their own region without the support of U.S. or another.
But why does that support? Why does that remove a people's right to self-determination if it has to be fine? There's been many peoples who have been dominated by superior military powers. Native Americans is a great example. I would have supported international support for Native Americans struggling to maintain their independence against American manifest destiny.
This is the primary basis of my argument, though. If you can't support your own state, right? If you can't support your own state, then you shouldn't be trying to call yourself a sovereign nation because you don't have the means to defend yourself. You don't have the means to create a social fabric that will open up to another country that is currently, is made up of the land that you claim to want to occupy.
You're American, right?
Yes.
You do know that France supported us during the American Revolution. Without French support, there's a good chance we would have stayed a British colony.
I mean, sure.
So would you have rejected French support and then had the American Revolution fail and stay a member of the crown?
I have many problems with the way in which this country was founded. Yes.
So you would have rejected French support.
Not necessarily. I just have many problems with the way this country was founded in general. But if you want to keep talking about Syria, because I do concede I have problems with the way this country was founded, we can keep talking about Syria.
I didn't say Syria. I said Kurds. And Kurds exist across multiple borders.
Where would the Kurdish state be in part located?
In part Syria, in Iran, in Turkey, and Iraq, right? And I believe that if those
where are they
people,
currently occupying?
the SDF, which is majority Arab, are occupying a part of northeastern Syria.
Correct.
The majority of the forces are Arab, by the way, so it would not just be a Kurdish state, by the way.
They want the Kurdish state. That's what they want.
That's not what they want.
They do.
The SDF has
That's what this whole agreement with the U.S.
No,
is.
that's not. The SDF has wanted to negotiate with Assad to get something very similar to the Kurdistan regional government in northern Iraq. They've said this multiple press releases. Their supreme commanders have said it. Multiple people in SDC have said this multiple times that they do not seek independence from Syria. They seek something similar to a regional government, the way, say, Catalonia has its own regional government. Or they say the KRG.
Because there are though many people who make up that group who do want a sovereign state.
I assume there are people who have many diverse political opinions in northern Syria.
And for years, that has been the primary debate surrounding the Kurds is creating a Kurdish state.
Yeah, the last time they tried.
So what I'm saying is, you have this group that in no way, shape, or form could be occupying the land that it currently occupies without the help of the U.S. Now, the U.S. did them dirty and said in a statement that Danish Travel said we recognize this as 1/3 of Syria that we now own and occupy. They specifically targeted this land, not because it's Kurdish land or because it's land that this coalition wants to target and gain control of. They targeted it in their own words because it is the hydrocarbon and wheat-rich region of Syria, and they're going to cut off Bashar al-Assad from their raw resources, such as those. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking tankers of oil from this region across the border into Iraq. They're smuggling it into Iraq. This is exactly what they're doing. There's a Delaware-based natural gas firm that has been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department to operate in this region of Syria. It's what they're doing. There's no other way to spin it.
That didn't respond to anything I just said. You just basically...
does, Dylan. Because your primary argument is that they should be able to have their own states without support.
But I don't... Wait, my question didn't have to do with that, okay? All of that was important. I don't believe that your ability to use power and force alone dictates your ability to be a people that should rule themselves. That is why I support Kurdish independence, because the Kurds, across every country they are in right now, they are treated absolutely god-awful. In Iran, they're mowed down when they protest. In Syria, they were mowed down by both Bashar al-Assad's father and Bashar al-Assad himself in 2004 after the football protest. In Turkey, they were called Mountain Turks. They had their language banned, and their children are shot by security forces. In Iraq, they got the thing that was closest to the Kurdish liberation in a way with the KRG government, but the government of Iraq still went into Kirkuk, and it was not a really good time when that happened. And so the Kurdish people have looked at the situation across all borders and said, we are treated like shit any other time when it is not a Kurd making policies, because the other people fear Kurds. They think we're rebellious, they think we're disgusting, they think we're bad, they think we're a threat to Arabs. We deserve our own state, and I do not believe just because they're a minority or because they are cut across multiple borders that struggle that they have should be dictated just by the means of not being able to take on one of the powerful militaries in the world, in the Turkish government, for example.
Okay, so that's your reason for supporting a Kurdish state, I guess. But my argument here is that a Kurdish state would not be able to stand without U.S. support. And also, it ties back into the original conversation quite nicely we're having, actually.
I don't care.
Because, what if you don't believe that?
No, I said what if I don't care?
Well, I mean,
because I don't care.
You don't care about the argument we're having.
I don't believe that the American Revolution... Well, the thing is the same... Wait, let me finish.
Okay.
No, you gotta...
Okay, actually, I was in the middle of something, so I'm going to finish.
Okay, you finish.
It ties quite nicely back into the initial argument we were having, right? That if a country cannot stand on its own without military support from another country, then, I mean, at that point, it can't call itself a sovereign entity, sovereign nation, and that's exactly what's happening in Syria right now. That's exactly what's happening in Syria.
I don't think that just because another country comes in and assists somebody and they struggle for liberation, or even if it's for self-beneficiary means, like the United States is not doing it because there's some angel. I know there are Americans who support the Kurdish struggle. There's a lot of reasons why we got involved in northern Syria. Multiple strategic reasons. There were some who, of course, saw what happened at Sinjar, and the public outcry was enormous. But my main issue doesn't have to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that I don't believe that just because they cannot... Wait, let me finish, okay? I let you finish when you told me to finish. I do not believe that just because it could not hold up by themselves, that their rebellion is not correct, that they should not be able to rule themselves. It's why I believe the French should have supported the American Revolution. It's why I believe that the Kurdistan regional government has a right to exist and has greatly benefited the Kurds of northern Iraq. So did Operation Provide Comfort. And that's the same reason why I believe that the SDF will hopefully get their regional government, will stop more incidents like the 2004 Commission riots. The same way I would support Native American tribes against Americans going in and shooting Native American children, women, and men.
Dylan, we are dealing with the modern American U.S. empire, and the modern U.S. American empire is the only reason why this coalition of forces in northeast Syria is currently occupying that region. If it weren't the U.S., they would not be able to do that. The U.S.'s primary aim, though, and every time we do something like this, is to balkanize a country. That's what I'm getting at here. I know you reject this notion that the U.S. acts in every, and the modern U.S. empire acts in every imaginable instance as it relates to intervention or military backing in a way that only serves the interests of the U.S. empire, military industrial complex, corporate elite, transnational corporations. I make that claim, I make that argument, and I feel very strongly about that. And you can see that that's exactly what's happening in Syria. The aim is to balkanize the country.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then. Why did that not happen in Iraq once the Kurdistan regional government formed? Because that was before American creation. Well, that is a perfect example, and that's the exact same thing the SDF is trying to create.
It's an example I can't really engage with because I'm not familiar with it.
Well then, but this is also literally right next to them, and this is what they're looking towards. As an example, what happened was that...
I don't even know what year that is.
What year what is?
When you claim that was created.
Okay, the Kurdistan regional government was officially created post the Iraq invasion, but it was unofficial for a long time.
It was unofficial. No, because it's a regional government. The U.S. is helping the Kurds and other minorities that make up those forces occupy that region and try to create a balkanized country. That's what they're doing in the province as well. They create their own territory within that region. It's not like a government that is acting under Syria. They're not acting under Syria. They don't allow the people in that region to vote in Syrian elections.
Yes, because right now they're in conflict with the Syrian government, the SDF, and multiple fronts. And so...
You wouldn't be able to occupy it if it wasn't the U.S.
Yes, I'm happy they supported them, okay? Now let me finish. So here's my point. Jackson, I'm not letting you, and let me finish. I don't care. Until you let me finish. You have to let me talk to you.
You didn't have U.S. backing.
I'm happy about it. Oh my God, Jackson. Okay.
You didn't have U.S. backing.
I don't care. Nobody. Okay, now he's muted. Wonderful. He's muted. I'm muted. We're both muted. You finished? Okay, you were muted too. So nothing was productive there. Okay. So the SDF is not looking to be its own independent country. It has never claimed to be its own independent country. It's not doing anything that would be in the means to get its own independent country. It's not starting up embassies around the world.
Right now.
It's not what?
What is it doing right now?
It wants to be its own regional government similar to the KRG.
What is it doing right now?
It is occupying a part of Syria because they want leverage negotiations with the Syrian government.
They're occupying part of Syria,
Okay.
but they no longer claim to
negotiate with
Syria.
them. Assad rejects negotiations with them. They specifically have negotiations with all these people.
Because they're a force that is
Let me
able to
finish.
hold
Why?
country.
That you have no proof that the SDF has that guy. You could say
They're literally occupying the country right now. They're not trying to
it is very clear. It is very clear. They don't want nuclear agreement. Of course,
doing exactly what
they
they wanted
You
to do.
don't know what you're
They're stealing
talking
their raw
about.
minerals.
You
That is
don't know
exactly
what you're
what's
talking about. The
happening.
SDF has never
Why would
they have never
they
pursued this because a regional government, which let's say that the Assad government doesn't have troops in, they're not going to get a regional government unless they have military power. That's what happened to the KRG. That's what happened.
Why wouldn't the U.S. come in if they were such like fucking on a humanitarian mission there? Why wouldn't they come in and they can easily force Assad to do a lot of things right now?
You cannot force them to do this.
If
In
they can
fact,
take
I can tell you
over
about this. It happened already.
Dylan, if they can force their occupation of 1/3 of the country and steal the raw minerals out of that 1/3 of the country, don't you think they could have conceded power and forced a mutually beneficial regional government agreement? They could have.
Problem is, you're not listening. You don't know what you're talking about. How can you be so clueless? You said Syrian government, but you know a lot about this. How do you say you know a lot about this and know nothing about Syria? You just got your whole spiel. I'm not listening. I gotta speak. I have to speak. Okay, I don't care. I'm a beta. Anyway, I don't care. I'm a beta. You're just muted now, so I'm gonna talk to my own audience. Okay, audience. So here's the thing. The thing that Jackson Hinkle won't recognize is that they have tried to get into negotiations with Assad before, and they have been banned by Assad and kicked out by Assad from having these negotiations where they want to talk to them about the future of Syria, creating that regional government. And the thing is, if the SDF declared independence as its own country, Turkey would invade them and slaughter them in seconds. Because the biggest threat that Turkey sees from Syria is not only from Bashar al-Assad and they want to challenge him by backing jihadists in Syria, but it's also by the idea, the concept of Kurdish independence flourishing in Syria would be so terrifying to them as a people who are so fundamentally afraid of Kurdish rights, they would immediately invade. So not only do they not seek this, if they wished to seek it, unless we decided to move tons and tons of troops, just make the border what South and North Korea looks like, which we have done the opposite of doing by disarming the border, it would be not only not in our interest to do this, it would be impossible to do this. Turkey would never allow this.
I'll unmute when you're
Okay,
done talking.
I've unmuted. There you go. Okay, now that neither of us has gained, you can ask your questions.
Okay, so if the U.S. can take over 1/3 of the country, the resource-rich region of the country, with the help of these forces, why would they not be able to create a regional government?
Because Assad has stopped them from coming to negotiations multiple times. They have offered to come. Assad has stopped them because Assad wants direct military control of northeastern Syria.
Yes, because it is Syria, and it would still be a part of Syria under a regional government.
Well, yes,
and also, let me just finish.
Not regional
Yes, no, it would be. If it's a regional government under Syria, it still would be.
That's not.
Also, why would he have? Why would he give up the resource-rich region, and why would he do any of that if he doesn't have to?
Okay, so the first thing is, if you look at the KRG, they have their own military. They have the Peshmerga. So the Peshmerga. Peshmerga, and again, yes, I don't care. It's respect. It's fine for me. Okay. I don't care. I'm not. If you call me a red tuber earlier, I'm not a red tuber. Okay. I don't pretend to be a red tuber. Okay. I don't need to live in a delusional world where U.S. bad all the time and act like a walking gray zone article. Okay. I don't need to be.
Why is the U.S. backing them?
The U.S. is backing them because we want Iraq to be our ally, and because it's strategically beneficial. And
why is it strategically beneficial?
Strategically beneficial because we have interest against Iran. And we don't like Iran. What do you mean, and?
You actually don't know what I'm referring to. Two things.
Okay. What's the other thing?
We're cutting off Syria from their vital resources, the resource-rich region of Syria, and we're stealing it.
How by supporting the Peshmerga?
No, by supporting the occupation of northeast Syria.
Okay.
And also,
I don't care.
You don't care about
I don't care about this. No. The reason I don't care is because here's the other thing. Wait. You let me elaborate.
Here's the other thing.
Jesus.
Okay, you can elaborate when I finish my second point. The second thing is that we're all doing it, and this is according again to the U.S. State Department. They said this in a statement. We're doing this in an effort to weaken Assad. Okay. Now you can go. Okay.
The reason I don't care is because it is the people of northeastern Syria who are currently rebuilding their territory. This is the same reason the Spanish government doesn't like Catalonian independence. It's because let me finish. You gotta let me finish. You gotta let me finish. We are giving them money for the oil. You do know that, right?
We're stealing the oil.
The oil companies are giving money to the SDF and the SDC for the oil. That money is then being used by the government of northeastern Syria, whether you want to call it. Let me finish. Okay, just mute it. I don't care anymore. If you're not going to let me talk, I'll just mute you and I'll just talk, okay? So we are buying the oil from northeastern Syria, and they are right now rebuilding cities. They are rebuilding territory. They are trying to provide public services, and I believe those are the people who stand on that territory. They should be the people who determine what happens with those resources. Just like in Catalonia, even though Catalonian independence would be against U.S. interests, and the Catalonians have the majority of the resources. I hold the same position for the Native Americans when it comes to the United States. When we're fighting our wars with them, even though they were standing on tons of resources, they should have been the ones who dictate what happened to those resources because they're the ones who live there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So when you say that we're paying for the resources, you said that. Yeah. We are paying the forces that are helping us occupy the region. We're not paying the Syrian government that resource.
Yes.
I know you dumb fuck. That's what I just said. We're not paying the Syrian government. We're not paying the Syrian government that money. So the Syrian people are losing their raw resources due to these occupying forces that wouldn't be able to be there without the help of the U.S. empire. And right, it's just going back into it's being reinvested in the occupation. Now again, I'm not entirely familiar with the makeup of the situation in Catalonia. Now is Catalonia? This is a question for you. Is Catalonia being entirely backed up and funded? Their regional entity. Are they completely backed and wouldn't be able to call themselves a regional entity and wouldn't be able to even try to fight for self-determination for their own land if it wasn't for a major imperial power?
It's hard to say because the Catalonian independence movement has been long, it's been violent, but I don't think anyone's going to get involved in Spanish internal affairs unless there's a huge international backlash to some terrible thing Spanish does.
Okay, so I mean, I don't even know too much about that, and I just picked apart your fucking argument.
You don't know what you're. Okay, what happened? The problem is that I don't believe just because they have guns and they can shoot people and they win that determines whether people should or shouldn't be independent, right? I believe if Catalonians want to be independent, then they should be able to be independent, whether or not they have the military strength to do that.
But you're saying that in Syria, it's similar to. You're saying in Syria, it's similar. You said in Syria it's
Assad
similar to
survived
Catalonia.
because of Iranian and Russian intervention. If it wasn't because of the Russian and Iranian
You said in
governments,
Syria
the
it's
government would
similar-
have collapsed.
Hang on.
So do you support that, or are you against that?
I didn't hear because I was trying to make my point because you got so butthurt when I interrupted you, so I was going to keep trying to talk. In Syria, you said that it's similar to Catalonia, but in Syria, they are only there and only able to occupy and only able to steal those resources and pay them to the occupying forces because of the U.S. In Catalonia, it's much different because it's a completely, I would imagine an indigenous population that you could not prove is being backed by any imperial force. It's a very different situation.
So you're okay with the Russians and Iranians backing the government and their backing being the reason why they survive?
There's a difference between backing a defensive operation and backing an offensive
Do
imperialist
you
operation.
believe that the bombing by the Russian government of a bunch of hospitals, they hit 4 hospitals in 12 hours, do you believe that was defensive, like those medical patients were like carrying AKs or something?
I mean, are you talking about in Syria?
Yes, they bombed multiple hospitals. In fact, a lot of people
Were
were
those
fearful.
hospitals occupied by the white helmets?
Are you actually going to defend the bombing of hospitals in Syria?
Were they occupied by the white helmets?
No.
Assad has done many things I
No,
disagree with.
who
but
cares if they were
occupied
occupied by the white helmets? It doesn't change the
The
fact that
white
there were civilians in those
helmets-
buildings.
Do you know who the white helmets are?
I don't care. Wait. Listen,
They're not
so-
civilians, Dylan. They're not civilians.
So do you
That's why
they're not just white helmets in there. There's civilians in those hospitals. Oh my God. You're a fucking war crime supporter. Jesus Christ, I can't believe it.
Dylan, I know you think this is a really good gotcha.
Yeah, it
Do
is.
you concede that in many cases, military forces in Syria have completely overtaken, gotten rid of civilians in certain territories and regions within Syria, and filled hospitals and schools with like military operations?
This has happened in also the Gaza Strip, yes.
This has happened in many countries. This is like a normal thing that
So would
happens.
you have
That's why I'm
supported-
asking, are these hospitals controlled by...
These hospitals were confirmed to have civilian casualties after the fact. Russia doesn't even deny this.
Okay, then I oppose that.
Okay. Great, because if this was because your thing is if you're so
Dylan,
the white helmets, you have to
who is the
focus
aggressor?
on
Who is the aggressor here? Is it the covert...
Bashar
forces that are being
al-Assad is the
funded?
aggressor because he's the one.
No,
Wait,
no,
let
no,
me
no.
finish. Let me finish.
No,
Let me finish.
no,
If
no.
You don't let me say.
Who funded the Syrian dirty war?
Let me
Who
finish.
funded the
Let
Syrian
me
dirty
finish.
war?
Let me finish my statement, or you're never going to get an answer. Okay? Bashar al-Assad began to shoot his people while they were protesting. This is nothing new. He did it in 2004, and he did it in 2011. And he has tortured children, done many things. The Syrian war started because the people started to rise up, and then the parts of the army, of the Syrian army, defected. Then international players and the United States, Saudi Arabia, America, with Timber Sycamore, and they started to funnel what they wanted to rebel groups, right? But the Syrian civil war started, and then of course Assad got supported from Russia and Iran, and they boom, there's your Syrian civil war, and then ISIS
Operation.
Right.
So who started the protests? Or who, I can say who started the protests, but who expanded the protests, funded covert PSYOP operations to the point where it reached the level it reached?
Those protesters were getting shot, despite, wait, are you saying we supported, like, what did we do to the protesters? What did we give them?
We did the same thing that we do here in the United States internally when we have discontent amongst popular groups. You have covert operations that take place
What
that either
covert
promote or try to tear apart popular uprisings to foment regime change or to splinter groups.
What covert operation did we do? Wait, let me finish my question. You don't even know my question yet, right?
No, you're going to talk about specifically relating to protests in the Middle East, I'd imagine.
Well, yes, but you didn't let me finish my question. What's my question about those protests, right? So are you alleging that before the protesters were shot, you were funneling like weapons and bombs and stuff in there through Timber Sycamore, and that Assad started, like, this is the second part, which you didn't, I don't think you alleged, but the second part of my question would be, even if that was the case, is that okay then for Assad to mow down protesters? Because Russia and other governments have done similar things all over the world when it comes to like supporting protest movements against their opposition, but that doesn't mean that it's a red light to mow down protesters. You go and you try to do covert operations to deal with the international government. That doesn't mean you start shooting protesters.
Did you say in 2004?
Well, there was a 2004 commission rise, and there was a 2011 protest. 2004 has to do with the in Syria. That's why it's a
Was Assad president in 2004?
Yes,
I don't think
yes, he was.
during that.
Yes,
Was he?
yes. I promise you, he was.
No, you're right.
Hafez al-Assad died in I think 2000.
So what I'm saying is that this is just, I mean, it's an objective fact. This is like a common tactic that's used by the U.S. through covert
So
operations
show
to
me
bolster.
the evidence of what I asked for.
We bolster propagandistic campaigns to try and tear apart either sovereign governments, democratically elected
How would you
governments.
do that? Now,
Okay.
show me evidence.
In Syria specifically,
Well, yes, that's what we're talking about.
we've done so through the white helmets.
Okay, so you're saying we were funding the white helmets before Assad started mowing them down?
That's
what I'm asking.
As to whether or not Assad was the first person to start this or not.
Yeah.
Well, okay, think about this. If you have a force within your country that's being backed up by, fucking a U.S. empire that has obviously ulterior motives, which I don't think you would disagree with me on,
We have
then
many those, yeah.
that stem far beyond providing humanitarian support for a just cause within a country. I would argue that's usually the least of our motives. That's the least important of our motives in any given intervention that we face or PSYOP operation we begin. So why is it, you think, that the U.S. would be providing support for these groups? Why is it, you think, that the Obama administration, for example, would allow ISIS to run rampant within Syria? Why is it, you think, that we would do any of this sort of stuff? It all has a covert operation in place.
I will answer all of your questions once you answer mine.
Ask your question again.
My question was, because we're trying to find out who's the aggressor, right? And Bashar al-Assad mowed down protesters, tortured protesters. This is nothing new. This is nothing disputed, okay? Now, you're alleging that we threw all this stuff at Syria. I don't doubt that through Timber Sycamore and multiple things, we have funded a lot of organizations in Syria that oppose Assad. We have done that clearly. My question to you is, you were like alleging that these protesters were like funded by the United States. And so I'm asking you, before...
Backed by the United States.
Yeah, backed by the United States. Wait, backed, not funded.
Funded would imply that there's a monetary
So
transfer.
if we said that we support those protesters, does that justify Bashar al-Assad mowing them down? Because China has said they have supported protests in the United States at some point. They said, hey, look at the BLM protests in the United States. That wouldn't justify us mowing down BLM protesters. That'd be disgusting.
I would say that no, not necessarily, and I would also say that the U.S. doesn't really care about that, but they will preempt it, but they will take any opportunity given to strike upon that, and so discontent amongst the public. So, for example, the U.S. killed 1 million Iraqis in our war there. Do you think the U.S. really cares about 23 Kurdish people who are fighting against Bashar al-Assad and want to create their own sovereign government? No.
It's not 23. There's 100,000 people in northeastern Syria, but
No. I'm saying the amount of people that wasn't it like just over 20 that were killed in that initial.
it was what you're talking about. Well, initially you're talking about 2011.
2004. Do you know directly whether or not like Bashar al-Assad gave the orders to kill those?
Yes,
23
he did.
people?
And the reason why they got really angry is because they started tearing down statues of Hafez al-Assad, his father, and he saw this as a challenge to his rule. He gave the order to send in tanks. There were tanks there. He gave the order, yes.
So did they shoot them with tanks or did they shoot them with guns?
Machine guns, but the tanks were the back troops.
Okay, so again, they sent in he
they
ordered
ordered children,
in tanks.
by the way,
You're alleging that they had them sent in
Well, not
tanks.
alleging. I'm stating a fact. What do you mean? Are you challenging this? Wait.
No, this is your allegation that he sent in
This
tanks. So did he? That's
I mean,
different
an allegation
than-
to like say that America invaded France
Sure,
during
you
World War.
stated,
Yes.
you stated, whatever. I don't fucking care. So did
I
he?
care a lot about this.
So that's different. That's different than saying that he ordered those troops to fire upon them with machine guns. Do you have evidence for that?
Is that a real question?
Yes, I mean, in the same
So,
way that the U.S.
if-
is providing military armament for Taiwan, we're not
question.
explicitly saying that we want
So,
Taiwan to start firing upon China.
I actually do not know if he specifically said shoot the protesters. But
So
let me
let me
finish. While it might be an important detail, if I set military troops into any part of my country where protests were happening against my rule, and they start shooting people, they shoot a decent amount of people, 30 to 100 is the estimate that is most widely cited, right? They start shooting these people, and then they capture many and torture children, women, and men. Don't you think there should be some repercussions for that, or there should be something done? Because if it isn't, that is a tacit endorsement, and it's not hard to assume that when he sent them in there, the goal was to put down those protests because they were staring down statues of his father, who I'm assuming Assad has a nice deal with daddy, and he saw this as a challenge to their rule.
I'm just saying that, yeah, I mean, sure, I don't support like indiscriminate ordered killings of civilians.
Yes.
I'm a leftist. I don't support that.
Say
But what I'm saying is that that's very different than alleging that Bashar al-Assad directly ordered those killings and knew about it and wanted that to
No,
happen.
he knew that these happened. He just didn't care. He was like, "This is fine. Whatever you need to do." He sent them in to do whatever was necessary to put down these protests. Like he's dropped barrel bombs. He knows that barrel bombs have been used. He doesn't care. He's done multiple war crimes. He does not give a fuck.
Dylan, come on. You know that so many of these allegations put forward surrounding barrel bombs, surrounding
Wait,
fucking
you don't believe he
hospital
dropped
bombing.
barrel bombs? Do you want? And hospital bombings is a proven fact. It's been proven time and time again.
I know the fact, but it matters who's in the hospital, you dumb fuck.
There were
It
people in the
matters
hospital. There were civilians in the hospital. There were
It
civilians in the
matters.
hospital. If there was Hamas in a building, and civilians in the building, it does not give the Israeli military the okay to destroy that building with all the civilians. I stand against that too, just like I stand against it here.
I do too, but what I'm saying is, in the same way that with the OPCW cover-up of Duma or with Guta, for example, you have allegations from the international
only go 15 more
community
minutes. This is
that do not
also-
align with the facts on the ground.
Okay, first I just need to say I have
And there have been many entities that have disputed
Let me-
claims.
let me-
Not all. For example, like redline bombings, those haven't been disputed. But there have been many entities that have disputed some of these claims that you're putting forward as if they're statements of fact.
Okay, so first, I just want to say I have 15 minutes left, and we're going to hit the 2-hour mark, and that's enough for me. I'm tapping out. I got to get back to my girlfriend who just came back from Portugal, and I want to spend some time with her. So that's the first thing. But the second thing I'll say is, okay, there have been many things disputed. There have been things that have been proven wrong because it's a conflict, an active war zone, and everybody wants to make their side look good, and the other side look as bad. So people are going to allege, for example, like when ISIS like attacked cities, they would say we killed these many people, and the other side would be like killed barely anybody. This happens all the time. But the things I'm putting forward right now are things that are undisputed. I mean, even Assad. Wait, let me finish. The barrel bomb claims have been proven by pictures. In the barrel bomb claims, let me finish. Assad has basically admitted to this on Russian television. He had an RT interview in about 2017, and he was asked by a Russian reporter working for RT, which is not like a very American imperialist source, I would say. And they asked him like about the barrel bomb claim, and he said basically we'll use whatever weapons are necessary to like win the war. And a bomb explodes. That's what it does. If I ask somebody, did you commit a murder, and they say I used whatever force was necessary, that's an admission. That is an admission of guilt from the 2017 RT interview. Not to mention, like this is like now the question of how many barrel bombs have been dropped is most certainly more disputed.
So what I'm saying is a lot of this stuff has been disputed that you're putting forward as objective fact. And
what things have I said
Dylan,
that have
let
been
me fucking finish. Jesus Christ! Every time I stand on you, you have like a fucking bitch fit. Let me finish talking. Let me finish talking.
Jesus.
Every single time. Okay, there have been many disputed instances that have been alleged by the international community, which I have defended vociferously when there's evidence to back up these disputes, right? In the case of barrel bombs, I understand, right, that there have been barrel bombs that have been used in the Syrian civil war. There's also been torture that has taken place. There have been civilians that have been killed. This has happened on both sides. I don't condone any of it. The question is who's engaged in
Barrel
war.
bombs? There's been barrel bombs dropped by rebels?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying as a whole, there's been torture, there's been crimes against civilians, there's been barrel bombs been dropped by Assad. I don't buy Russian planes too. I don't support that.
Okay.
I know you think I'm a fucking statist, but I don't support that.
What? No, I don't care if you're status. I have a status too. It just depends on like what the government does.
Well, that's a whole nother argument. I mean, I would question what country you're a statist for. But at the end of the day,
Can we just be clear? Wait, when you say status, what do you mean? This is
at the end of the day, no, I don't want to get into another question because I'm in the middle of a fucking argument. So at the end of the day, there's been a lot of disputed points surrounding the crimes that have happened. I still have unanswered questions that I've asked Syrian journalists about alleged war crimes that have been committed by Bashar al-Assad and evidence that has been brought forward by the international community, right? I still have questions that have gone unanswered by Syrian journalists I've reached out to and by people who've actually been on the ground, okay? But also, the key aggressor here today is the United States and the UK who are fomenting a dirty war in the country that has brought about an untold amount of casualties, suffering, loss of life, and bloodshed for the Syrian people. Not to mention the fact that the U.S. is now occupying 1/3 of the country in the northeast, stealing the raw minerals, cutting off the Syrian government and the people from the profits of these raw minerals, and they also have indicated that Jolani, right, that's his name, the guy leading Hayat al-Sham in Idlib province as the de facto leader of the, I mean, that's the group he represented before he put on a suit and tie and the U.S. designated him as an asset in the region, right? You can't push back on that. And who's Hayat al-Sham linked with? They are an Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra rebranded organization. So I have no sympathy for the rebels. I have no sympathy for the White House. I have no sympathy for the extremists that are waging a war against the Syrian people and the Syrian government and who are occupying their land. You can look at these in isolated events, or you can look at it in the larger scope of what is happening in Syria, and you can understand that this is an all-out campaign to destabilize the country, topple Bashar al-Assad, and steal their raw minerals.
Okay, so the first thing there was a few questions I had. Let me try to remember the first one. Yeah, I think I forgot it. So whatever, I'll just ask this. So the first thing I would say is you have no sympathy for the rebels whatsoever. Do you stand by that?
Yeah, no, I have no sympathy for the rebels.
Okay, so in 2011, the rebellion started.
What do you think the rebels are doing, Dylan?
You gotta let me.
What do you think the rebels
I
are
didn't
doing?
even get to start my statement, and you
Well, you're gonna live just in time in which there was
No, you didn't let me
war
finish.
crimes
You didn't let me. You didn't let me finish. You gotta let me.
Primary motive of the rebels.
Talking over me.
Can you name it? Can you name it?
I'm not going to say anything until I can finish my statement. I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm not going to answer any questions until I finish my statement. I'm not going to answer
Primary motive of the
Jackson. I can't answer until I finish my statement.
Primary
I'll
motive
answer it later if you just let me say my. If you let me finish my statement. If you let me finish my statement, I will tell you your motive. I will tell you your motive if you let me finish my statement. I want to finish my statement. I never got to say anything. Jackson, you never. I'll just. Do you want me to just meet you again and we'll do this again, or you want me to say my statement first? That's the two options you got. Either mute me when I just say my whole thing and answer your question, and then you don't get to hear me, or I'll say it now, my statement, and then I'll answer your question. I never got to respond to anything you said. That's not how conversation goes.
Daddy's little kidney stone cheers. X100.
Okay,
What's
are you
this, Dylan?
Hello? Jackson? Jackson. I guess Jackson muted me.
Go for it.
Okay, I'm happy that you finished off your check. So
I wasn't talking to them. I was waiting for you to go.
okay, okay, wonderful. So my statement has to be that in 2011, when the rebellion started, there were many different people with many different interests. For example, the people who fled from the military, those were not people who were just all rank-and-file Islamists. Those were military defectors, unless you want to say Al-Qaeda had infiltrated deep into the Assad military, and that's where they all broke off. There were, of course, people who were a lot more moderate. What happened in the long run is that those people got fucking slaughtered long run. 2012, 2013, those people got destroyed. A lot of them were in territory that was first targeted by Assad first, and they were jostled out of power. And then post-2013 is when, yes, the more Islamist types who are fucking disgusting, like your Al-Nusras, your Hayat al-Shams took over, and those organizations, I don't want to see them control Syria ever. They're disgusting Islamist, engage in terror tactics many times, right? And so my question would definitely be for the 2012, 2011 period, where there were a lot more diversity when it came to the rebellion and the defecting military troops, which were not terrorists, unless the Syrian Arab Army were just a bunch of terrorists. My question would be to you is, what would you say about the 2011-2012 period when there was a diverse rebellion against Bashar al-Assad and the other international forces got involved? Would you have supported Bashar al-Assad being overthrown then, if we could have had the more moderate wing take over?
I'm referring to the current rebels in Syria.
Okay, well, I'm asking a question about 2012.
Well, I'm talking about the rebels that are waging war crimes against civilians in Syria right now.
The rebels that Turkey supports, for example, in the Afrin region, which they took in a terrible barbaric operation, those are majority jihadists, which I do not like. And Turkey is doing terrible things there. And I will get no objections from me. I don't think Turkey should be even in NATO at this point. I will condemn Erdogan any day of the week.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I'm talking about the rebels in Syria right now.
Yes, I
You
answered your
wanted
question.
to say something?
Well, yes, I answered your question. I said I hate the jihadists. They're terrible. I hope they all lose, and I hope Erdogan stops with the support for those terror groups. And now my second question is, would you have supported the Syrian people in a successful overthrow in 2011, 2012, since the groups that were more dominant then were not?
Oh my god. Oh my god. I'm so sorry. No, I'll answer the question. But oh my god, you're literally reading this all off of Wikipedia right now. This is hilarious.
No,
this is hilarious.
it's
Oh my god.
It's not.
There's no way, bro.
No,
you're literally on
I'm
Wikipedia
not.
right now.
No,
Oh my
Jackson,
god.
This is the 2012
wow.
riots. Why are you explaining Wikipedia? I know this. I've read about it. Okay.
Oh
Daughters
my
of Kobani.
god.
Look it up. I've read this before. I know about this.
That's
I brought it up.
bro.
I brought it up.
That's hilarious.
I brought it up. Who cares? Who cares?
That's funny.
I don't care.
I'll answer your question.
Why are you so
At that point in time,
disingenuous?
At that point in time, the Obama administration was already moving forward with an explicit policy of allowing these extremist rebel groups, as they define them, which included ISIS, to run rampant within Syria and destabilize the Syrian government. It means that they could have used their forces, either proxy or their own forces, within certain regions of Syria to try and stop ISIS from gaining more military control of the Syrian country. Right? John Kerry admitted this. He said, during the Obama administration, during the middle of the Obama administration, we were allowing ISIS to. I don't remember his exact word. But
I just want to read it.
Yeah. It was a. I mean, I can play the audio, but I can also just send it to you. Okay. So I've actually tweeted this out multiple times. It's a crazy clip, regardless of what your take is on Syria. It's John Kerry admitting that. Okay, here's what he said, and I'll send it to you. The Obama administration was watching ISIS grow in strength in Syria, and that they were, and this is me paraphrasing, they were going to. Paraphrasing, because I don't have the rest of the quote right in front of me because it's audio and I'm reading a portion of the quote right now. They thought that Russia was going to potentially stop them quicker than they did, and it ended up being that Russia had to come in and actually intervene more so in the country to try and save the country from these ISIS militants. I encourage you to listen to the clip. It's really interesting.
Can you send it to me then?
Yes.
Okay. But you also acknowledge that the majority of ISIS defeats in Syria and the fighting that ISIS had to go through was fighting American-backed proxies.
That ISIS was fighting American-backed proxies?
Yes. Yeah, the vast majority of casualties against ISIS, the vast majority of attacking and taking back ISIS's territory. They took their capital. I mean, it's undisputable.
Oh my god, I didn't know that. I would say that it's directly relevant to U.S. backing of these extremist groups, which also had other ulterior motives that do not align with protecting Syrian sovereignty.
Okay. So this is a link. This is a link to your tweet.
I'd be remiss to point out if like Russia and the Syrian forces and the PMF also didn't suffer many casualties in fighting against ISIS.
Of course, the PMFs definitely fought ISIS, even though the PMFs mostly in Iraq. We're talking more about Syria at the moment. The majority of fighting against ISIS was done by the SDF. So if the idea was ISIS is going to depose Bashar al-Assad and that's going to do all that work, why did we fight ISIS the most in Syria?
Because we were so John Kerry in that clip I just sent you.
Yes, can you send me the original source and not one of your tweets, please?
I mean, that is the original source. You can hear
Your tweet's the original source. I just want to know where it's from.
Listen to. I got it from. I think I got it from a YouTube video. It may have been. Do you know who the new Atlas is? I think it may have been one of his videos actually. But this is. I mean, it's John Kerry's voice. No one's ever disputed that.
Okay, because I just like original sources. Because they didn't want to ditch government and they supported Assad. And we know that was growing. We were watching. We saw the Daesh was growing in strength, and we thought Assad was threatened. We thought, however, we could probably manage. That Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you've got Assad, you've got Putin supporting him. Okay.
Yes.
So you're saying that the United States could have jumped in and got involved to fight ISIS, right? But didn't because we wanted ISIS to depose Assad, right? That's what you're alleging that John Kerry said, correct?
So that was during a different period in which it was isolated from when we were backing the proxies that were the extremist proxies that were fighting against ISIS and trying to
we started Operation Inherent Resolve, at least the groundwork for it in 2013 in the Battle of Kobani when we dropped the YPG, AK-47s, and munitions, and then eventually we got involved with airstrikes, and we even coordinated about 150 Peshmerga fighters to move in and help what was the YPG at the time fight, and the early remnants of the YPG. And so that was in 2013. The uprising started in 2011, and ISIS was still gaining territory. In fact, most of the world thought Kobani was going to fall. Erdogan famously said, "Don't worry, no matter what the Americans will do, Kobani will fall." And then it didn't. It was an amazing show that they saw what happened in Sinjar and didn't want it to happen in Kobani. So my question would be, if that's the case, if that was the plan, it was still happening. Why did we stop it then?
Why did we stop what?
Why did we stop ISIS continue to grow in Syria? We stopped that.
because the United States, wanted to occupy certain regions in which ISIS was gaining a stronghold. We eventually realized that it would be more effective, rather than letting ISIS run rampant across the country, gain more territorial control, destabilize Bashar al-Assad. We thought it would be more beneficial if we took the current approach, if we backed these proxies in the region, took over a third of the country, also took over the Idlib province, and decided to steal the resources on our own and reinvest the profits into the occupying
When did
forces.
John Kerry say this?
So that was before we started supporting the proxy forces.
No, this was in this says he was speaking in September of 2016. He started Operation Inherent Call.
No. He was speaking, yes, he was speaking in December of 2016, but he's referring to a much earlier point in the Obama administration before. But that wouldn't even make any sense. Why would
All
Obama
that he says here is
no, let me finish, because that doesn't make any sense. He was speaking then, he was secretly recorded speaking then, but it wouldn't make any sense for him to be reflecting on a period that happened in the future or prior to the point in which the U.S. was providing support for these extremist groups that were fighting ISIS on the ground. That would make absolutely zero
The
sense.
problem with this statement is what does this statement?
There's no problem.
Let me finish because you're alleging that this shows that we were just letting ISIS go free and go wild, and the reason why it was to aside, even though we then took a contradictory policy immediately afterwards. I mean, 2011 to 2013, that's only 2 years. So you're saying we did a complete 180 in 2 years, right? And all this is going to say is that the American government thought that the chaos that was ensuing in Assad's country would basically cause him to have to negotiate. That he wouldn't have any options due to rebellions, his government defecting, and ISIS, another terror group, gaining ground. Which that is usually how governments fall. Is that the government falls apart, the country falls apart, and they have no option to negotiate or flee the country. And so this is John Kerry basically saying that we thought that ISIS and all these terror groups were going to basically and the rebels were going to tear across the countryside and force them to negotiate. That didn't end up happening. But literally 2 years later, we were fighting ISIS in the countryside in Operation Inherent Resolve. And so you need more evidence in this to suggest that our plan was to let ISIS depose Assad when we just thought it was all the governments.
I mean, you're nitpicking the statement here, so let me just read it out.
This is very important.
He says, this is the former Secretary of State. Yes, U.S. foreign policy absolutely makes no fucking sense. I agree.
Okay.
But this is exactly what he said.
Yeah,
He
it's a
said,
grand conspiracy, but it makes no sense. Okay.
no, I mean, this is what he's alleging. He's saying right here that this is what the Obama administration did. Daesh refers to ISIS. I'm sure you understand that, but I don't know if everyone in my chat and your chat does. Daesh was threatening the possibility of going to Damascus, which we all know is the major city in Syria. That's why Russia came in, because they didn't want a Daesh government, and they supported Assad. And we know this was growing, referring to Daesh. We were watching. We saw that Daesh was growing in strength, and we thought Assad was threatened. And then he goes on to say, we thought, however, we could probably manage, that Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you've got Assad and you've got Putin supporting him. Meaning that the strategy, this is why they did this, because John Kerry admits that the strategy of allowing this extremist group to try and run rampant across the country.
Is this words or your words?
Okay, I'll use his words, Dylan. Grow in strength, and was willing to go into Damascus. That's a pretty appropriate, I would say, run rampant across the country is kind of similar to saying that.
This is
so let me finish. He acknowledged that that was their preferred method of getting Assad to negotiate. Negotiate for what? Any of the things that they're currently doing. Probably. I'm speculating. But that's probably what. Because the aims haven't changed, but the means have. So he said that we saw Daesh growing. They were growing in strength, and they were planning to go into Damascus. And we thought that we'd be able to manage the situation by Assad negotiating with us. But that didn't happen, and Russia came in to support forces on the ground that would counter ISIS. Therefore, the U.S. had no option but to change their means, their course of action in Syria to support these extremist groups, overtake ISIS, and occupy the land, which is what they're currently doing in the Idlib province and in the northeast of Syria.
Okay, so first, there's two things I want to say. The first thing I would say is, if this is what John Kerry said, John Kerry is not that intelligent.
What John Kerry said.
Okay, so the problem is, the first thing I have a problem with John Kerry said, I disagree with John Kerry. The idea that Russia was going to...
Secretary of State, why do you disagree? You need to be more specific.
Well, I'm about to say why I disagree with John Kerry, if you let me finish my statement. Okay, so the reason I disagree is that it was proven immediately when the Russians got involved that their main goal was not to fight ISIS. They said that publicly, but what they immediately started doing was bombing rebel strongholds, right? They bombed rebel strongholds. The majority of their bombs hit rebel strongholds. So if their priority was to fight ISIS, like the Russian government said, and John Kerry said, why was it that they immediately targeted the rebels, not ISIS?
When you say immediately, when are you referring to?
Like right when they get into the country and start bombing campaigns, because that's the main way that they supported them militarily.
So what were they doing before they got into the country?
They were supporting Assad through other means.
No, I mean, I think I misunderstood you.
Okay, so...
I mean, you're not alleging that the U.S. Who are you saying they?
The Russians.
Okay, so what was the U.S. doing before they started supporting these extremist groups?
Well, you were saying the protesters good. Like, what do you mean? You're talking about the 4 Timber Sycamore, like, basically...
I'm specifically referring to the point that you haven't been able to refute yet, that John Kerry said this. And that
I never said he didn't say this. I just asked for the evidence.
This is the evidence.
Yes, and now I'm talking about...
The reason why there's nothing on the books about the U.S. providing direct, open pathways for ISIS to run rampant, or as you put it,
what you're saying is... But this is John Kerry.
We do have evidence of Israel, who is our close ally, providing direct support for ISIS and Daesh, and providing medical support and providing strategic support. But we also have this evidence, this audio clipping. This is evidence from the former Secretary of State claiming that prior to launching these, these proxy extremist missions in the country to occupy regions of the country, which only had to have happened because Russia came in and helped Assad defend the country from ISIS, this was the preferred method, the preferred means of the U.S. empire in Syria. Okay, so you didn't give anything I said. So listen to what I'm saying. No, you did. You gotta listen if you're going to speak. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where John Kerry's wrong. You haven't done that.
I did. I said that if John Kerry thought that the Russians were going to get involved to then stop ISIS, why is it that when they got involved, they then fought the rebels primarily?
That who fought the rebels?
The Russians.
Because the U.S. didn't think that Russia was going to get involved.
So that's why I'm saying I disagree with John Kerry. He was wrong about it. He was factually wrong. He was factually wrong about the Russians.
The U.S. made an assessment. They thought that they were going to be able to get. They thought that nothing would come out of this. They thought that it was going to be the end was going to be that ISIS forced Assad to negotiate with the U.S. to come and provide some form or another of strategic support.
Okay, no, you don't have
so we did it anyway.
they took away things that players normally found from older games, and the crouch tech killed so many casual players. It's like, yo, I can't throw this guy. I don't know how to stop this crouch tech. What's up, everybody? This is Justin Wall, and we're back with an interesting video talking topics. You guys love it. And this time we are talking about the Twitter discourse. Old game versus new games. Are new games easier? Are they the same level as old games? Who's better? Old players, new players? You know, I will give my thoughts because I have played old games and new games. I've beaten old players. I've beaten new players. I've lost new players. I've lost old players. You know, I have been on both sides of the spectrum. So if you guys want to see the action, hit the like, share, subscribe, turn on bell notification, and let's get into the video. So I want to have a conversation. Obviously, you guys have been on Twitter. Pretty sure you have seen the discourse.
People that weren't even able to beat these guys before are now able to do okay, or be on par, or even win sometimes. Take like an MOV, like a Haitani or someone, and play those guys on Street Fighter 6 or Street Fighter 5. You might do alright. You might even win.
Might even win.
Either of those on Street Fighter 3, and you get cooked. It'll be 20-0. Like, you don't understand the difference in the actual levels of the guy. It's not the guy good, but you've improved and now you're on the level. No, the game has given you to him because the game is easier now, and you can tell it's easier now by how many good players there are. Everyone's good now. That says everything. Why isn't there a limited playing field to who gets good? Why does everyone get to get good? Because the game's easy. Like, you haven't seen hordes of people get good. The game is mad hard.
I feel like a lot of people are, taking the words to heart. Yo, let's give a big shout out to Christy for his Talking with T podcast series. So if you guys haven't checked it out, check his channel out, give him subscribe and everything. So what I want to, kind of like talk about, a lot of people are complaining old versus new, and I mean that's going to be a conversation that people are going to have 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and ultimately in anything competitive. I do agree that games are easier now. I feel like it's really hard to say no, it's not. At least in my opinion, like the games are easier to learn. It's easier for people to understand how to play fighting games because there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of hand holding, and that's okay. I feel like that's something that helps accessibility. Like you think about the in-game stuff, there's tutorials, tutorial modes, really explains how to play the game. When you think about old games don't really do that. Like I think the only time you see that in old games is SNK games, and they tell you like this is what like punch does, every punch does, its mechanics and everything, but they're not really telling you how to play the game, how to understand your character. So in terms of that, that's obviously lacking from back in the day and has been improved on as time goes on. I think we can all agree on that. In terms of obviously social media, everybody is able to connect with each other from worldwide to talk about, oh, this is what I found, this is what you found, and let me share it and everything like that. It's a lot of sharing involved now when it comes to modern fighting games, and obviously older fighting games did not have that. We had arcades and we had Shoryuken.com, and obviously not every Shoryuken.com is it's not no Twitter, not no YouTube, none of that, right? If you know what Shoryuken.com is, then you know what Shoryuken.com is. But when you think about social media now, a lot of people have gotten better in older games, right? I would say it's obviously not as much compared to the modern, like the official modern fighting games, like Street Fighter 6, but people have gotten better, like obviously with the help of Fightcade. There's more Third Strike players playing Third Strike more than ever, right? So I think that's really, really awesome. Going back to fighting games are easier now, yeah, I would say it really is, and I'll give you some prime examples. They took away things that players normally found from older games, and for example, crouch tech. Crouch tech is so strong in older fighting games as a defensive tool that the average person would not know how to stop it. I mean, this is, I feel like, blatantly true. When you think about Street Fighter Third Strike, when you think about Street Fighter 4, bro, crouch tech killed so many casual players. It's like, yo, I can't throw this guy. I don't know how to stop this crouch tech, and there's option select. Remember how backdash has invincibility frames on wake up? Pro players abuse option select. The average player did not know how to option select. Even there was YouTube guides or anything, just the concept of option select is pretty difficult. And these are not like mechanics in the game made by developers. These are found by players like Glitch Tech, OSs. And now when people make fighting games, they're gonna make sure that if something is found, they're gonna patch it out. It's gonna be patched out because they're trying to make sure that it's a true strike throw paper scissors type of game. Now another prime example of a Glitch Tech found was patched out was Street Fighter 5. Street Fighter 5 had jump back tech in season 1. I don't know if you guys remember. Everyone from Asia was abusing it. All the top players were abusing it. But guess who wasn't abusing it? The casual player, the average player, the ones that make it to the winners finals or loser finals of their pools, they can't clutch it out. They were not using it. However, once they took out jump back tech, obviously it became more of an RPS and more people were able to get opened up properly. And then I feel like anytime they have some type of new tech that's being found, it's just going to be patched out. I think that's just how it's going to be. And it obviously lowers the skill gap in my opinion, the skill level, like in terms of the gap of a top player versus the average player. But I think that's okay because they want people to not feel like bad about themselves. But I think when you think about fighting games, if you suck at a fighting game, if you feel like CVS2 console version after PS2 or Dreamcast, where they removed row cancel, nobody played that version. Maybe casual players did, but for people that like, hey, I want to go to the CVS2 tournament, they're not playing that version. Everyone's still playing on PS2 and Dreamcast, right? I think that's what it comes down to, is that people just eventually got used to these glitch techs, these option select. But I feel like if we had Twitter back in the day, I feel like people would have been ham. People would have been ham. Yo, row cancel's so stupid. Row cancel needs to be taken out. Row cancel needs to be fixed ASAP. Blah 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 blah. It definitely would happen. I think I disagree from Reinhardt is saying like the way it was worded that older players were just like so OD and godlike. I guess based off the concept of this part of the video, right? And like MOV, like you wouldn't be able to touch MOV. The problem is now is like you can't really prove that anymore. MOV, it was amazing at Third Strike. Definitely, it was him or Kuroda as like the GOAT of Third Strike, like top 1 or top 2. Right? He won SBO with his arm broken and he took everybody's Third Strike with Chun-Li. Obviously you see MOV play Super 4, Super 5, Super 6, and his results they're pretty lackluster. And then he wanted to become pro in those games, but like what's really preventing him from being on that level? And in my personal opinion, the reason why he couldn't get to that same level that he did with the Third Strike was because there were so many interesting defensive mechanics that Third Strike had that he was abusing. Chun-Li had an option select where she get either standing heavy kick or parry or throw. You understand that? There was a 3-way option select. Clearly that is not in any of the modern games that we're playing now, which is Super 4, Super 5, or Super 6. But it also could be the cases like this game's not your cup of tea. Just because you're a top player in one game doesn't mean you're gonna be a top player in another game. It's not gonna translate easily, but you have to work on it. So I think in terms of like old versus new, I do think that if the old games were out now, no patches, I mean there would be patches, but if there was no patches, the respect the game, how this one comes down, and everything like that, we would definitely have more top players. I agree that there would be more top players. I think a prime example is Smug. Smug is actually a brand new player when it comes to retro games, right? Third Strike in particular, he got A rank in Third Strike on Fightcade. I think that's pretty impressive for someone that didn't really know how to play Third Strike whatsoever. So I think he's a prime case scenario that you can use as like, yo, like Third Strike's mad hard, Third Strike's mad hard. A lot of these players can't get good in Third Strike. Well, Smug did, right? But that's also the help with chat, streaming, YouTube, all these replays. You have access to all this information, so it's easier to get better. Back in the day, so hard to get better. Like if you're not at a big arcade with like 3 players, it's really hard to get better. You're just gonna suck at it, or you're just gonna be limited to like kind of where your level is, right? You need to really have opportunities to play with better people people to get better at fighting games back in the day. And there was no online really, anything like that. So I think that's fair to say. That's why people were bad in fighting games back in the day. They were really bad. Like, I mean, I would go to tournaments and I would just be like, yeah, I won, because it's really hard for somebody to be better than my arcade. My arcade had the best players. On a Friday night in my arcade Chinatown Fair, it felt like a major. So when I go to majors in random states, like I don't know, like North Carolina or whatever, and it's not really like Chinatown Fair. It felt like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about X and Y and Z players, these sweaty players in arcade and everything like that. I think that's a fair, pretty assessment, right? So it's actually quite interesting, this conversation. I don't even know why people got so upset. Yeah, I guess like I don't know about NRS community, but when it comes to Street Fighter and Tekken, like I mean, people share information all the time. I mean, there's a lot of people complain about, yo, games are not easier now. It's just we're better. People are better for sure. The games are easier now. I'm sorry, like I cannot agree that people really think games are the same level of difficulty from now than before. The controls are easier in this game. Like if you try to play leverless in an older game, you're gonna have such a hard time because the input leniency, the strict inputs, like that was not there. That was just not there. So it's just really tough. We actually just made a video watching this hyper fighting tournament, and hyper fighting tournament, there was like that 16-year-old Blanca kid, and he got second place in the tournament. I thought that was really cool. That was really sick. So like there's examples of just younger players playing older games and just killing it. It's always gonna be a tough conversation no matter what. But yeah, easier. Yeah, if a game is easier, like in terms of execution and everything like that, that doesn't mean it's easier to win. It's easier to pick up because at the ultimate end, being the best player in a game that is considered easier than an old game, it's gonna be harder because you have more of a player base. Me, let's say for example, me winning Third Strike at Evo would not mean as much as me winning Street Fighter 6 at Evo. And let's just take out prize money out the way or everything. It's just the amount of entries. Street Fighter 6 probably would get like 3,000 to 4,000 entries at Evo. Third Strike is like probably less than 1,000. It really doesn't hold the same weight because there's less matches, less top players, less threats. I'm just gonna keep it stacked, keep it real with you guys. That's just what it comes down to. Winning Evo back in the day is obviously a lot easier because there's less of a, I would say there's less stress, there's less fatigue because there's less matches to be played, and a person that played games in both eras of old and new, it's definitely, there's pros and cons on both sides, I would say. The one thing I don't like, I would say, about modern fighting games is when I watch people play or talk to people, I can't tell if they are in love with fighting games or not. If you play old fighting games now, you love it. You really love it. Like there's passion because the reward of you winning in old fighting games is something that you personally like because you're not making millions of dollars on this. No way. But when I talk to people and they complain about Street Fighter 5, Fighter 6, and they're like, yo, I hate this game. And I ask, why do you play it? And they're like, because of the money. Right? And I'm like, all right, that's just a very superficial answer. But I guess that's the thing. Like if older fighting games had the money, would these players still be interested in playing it? That I'm not too sure about because it's obviously a hypothetical situation. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I like Chris T's like talking to you. It's just really good. And I did talk to Reinhardt like at TNS, he was randomly there. And we were just shooting. We didn't do an interview because I didn't know he was gonna be there. But yeah, I mean, he actually did mention MOB again. It's kind of the similar thing. Like a lot of people would get flattered if they played older games because I think in his perspective, he thinks the new fighting game players are cocky. And I guess the way he worded it, he didn't say cocky, but it was more like they think they could just run over what old fighting game players established. And clearly that would never happen. Like you would have to be really petty if you were a top newer fighting game player, like they do Gala, like a Big Bird, Angry Bird, Punk. You just feel like, you know what, I just want to prove a point. That would be actually kind of ridiculous though. The one thing that has been proven, and I mentioned this previous times, is that obviously the newer fighting game players are better in modern fighting games than older fighting game players. But older fighting game players has beaten newer fighting game players in newer fighting games. It obviously has not happened the other way around because there's no reason for newer fighting game players to play. So I mean, like Tokido has been Punk has been Tokido. If you talk about Tokido playing ST or Third Strike or CVS2, the older games, Punk obviously has never played those games. So you can't say Punk's going to be able to beat Tokido in those three games because he doesn't really play those games, right? The best assessment to say is that like older fighting game players can still hang with the top newer fighting game players in modern fighting games. So I think that's a proven fact. But there's also lots of other facts that have been proven. I know Brutus brought up something pretty similar. How about like Smash Melee? Smash Melee, people always talk about the gods. Mango, Mewtwo King, Hungry Box. And I mean, now there's new gods, right? There are new gods like Zane, Cody. So I mean, they've been cooking. How do I know these names? Because I just follow them. I like having the knowledge, right? Overall, I mean, people have gotten better in fighting games, but ultimately, you just have to just respect the old, respect the new, play the games. Who cares? Scene is growing. It's great. Just be happy. The only reason why I think like this conversation comes up is because there's more opportunity in newer fighting games, and maybe the old guard is just jealous that they didn't get a piece of the pie or anything like that because we were winning like $300, $400 for winning a major, while people are winning like thousands at like majors and regionals. Online tournaments, you can win like $700 and everything like that. Maybe people are jealous. Who knows? But I mean, that's why you make YouTube content like me and talk about this to make money, right? Who cares? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. This is obviously gonna be a YouTube video for it. So make sure you guys hit the like, share, subscribe. You guys know what to do, and we'll see you in the next one.
Deserve the pay rise, many having second, third jobs. Do you think it's a case to be made for MPs having a full-time contract, as most employees around the country do with set working hours and annual leave? I mean, it's really interesting this because being a member of parliament is the last completely undefined job. You've got a no-job description. I mean, MPs do work very long hours, but in a way, it might not just be better for the public, it might even be better for the MPs' general well-being and health if there was a sort of stipulation. I mean, a lot of my colleagues did work 80, 90-hour weeks, and it wasn't good for them. It's not actually often the other way around that everyone thinks it's idle, but I think there's in the modern world, this is also why I'm sort of slightly coming around to a written constitution. There's something to be said for slightly more predictability, a clearer contract, clearer expectations, rather than this weird sort of muddled kind of half spiritual vocation, half boondoggle. And talking about salaries, frankly, one of the reasons that a lot of people go to Australia or the States is that they're paid more, right? And that's because the US spends much, much more money on a private healthcare system, and we're not really working out how to deal with markets. And I think we also talk on the podcast about the fact in Singapore, ministers get $1 million a year. I don't know how one does that but my personal view is reduce the number of MPs, get down to House Commons half the size and double their salaries.
Yeah, but you made the point that as an MP, and Keir Starmer, who's my local MP, and he had an article in the local paper this week where he said somebody had complained that he'd become less accessible since he became leader of the Labour Party, and would even worse if he was Prime Minister. He said that he was as accessible as ever in terms of going around the constituency, but I think he said he had 1,100 constituency cases on the go at one time, which his staff are having to address as a constituency MP. And you tell the story about Willie Whitelaw used to do all his handwritten letters to the half a dozen cases he got. So the demand, I think the bit you didn't add to the list of what an MP is sort of social worker, citizens advice bureau, legal advisor, all these things that they have to take on.
When I was running to be leader, one of my colleagues who's an MP for Swindon wrote to my constituents telling them basically to vote for Boris Johnson and not vote for me, on the grounds that he thought I wasn't spending enough time in my constituency. At the time, I was the Secretary of State for International Development.
That was a very friendly thing to do.
And my constituency was 350 miles north of London. So I made a real effort to get up there, but I couldn't be there all the time. And he was trying to introduce, I think, almost legislation in Parliament to define, I think, that he wanted people in their constituencies 3 days a week. But that doesn't sit with our ministerial system. I was trying to say, A, your constituency is much closer to London. B, I don't think Boris Johnson turns up in his constituency very much. C, I meant to be the Secretary
didn't turn up for the recent by-election.
Secretary of State for International Development, right? My job is trying to fly around the world and do development programs in 40 different countries, and therefore I can't be in the constituency all the time.
What's the name of this friendly person?
It's called Justin Tomlinson.
Oh, a huge figure in our national politics. Is he still around?
I believe so, although I don't think Swindon's going to be that safe, so I'm not sure he'll be around after.
Where do you think is safe these days?
Well, this
is your old seat is safe.
No, I think my seat has been split up by the Boundary Commission, disappeared. I think it's a loss of these sort of deep rural kind of Wiltshire seats. Victorians will probably hang on to. There's going to be quite a lot of sort of, I think after next session, quite a lot of sort of buffed and tuffed and old MPs who've been in for a very long time.
Penny Mordaunt safe?
No, very. I think
Michael Gove safe?
Actually, even there might be in trouble. No, the kind of people who are safe, people who won't necessarily be always on your lips. So Geoffrey Clifton Brown, James Gray, these kind of figures who've been in for quite a long time. Well, yes, I mean, Drax, as we talked about, his family, I think it sort of owns most of the constituencies.
Right. Final question, Rory. Sam Dyson. Rory, if offered, would you accept a position as an ambassador under a Starmer government? If so, which country would you like to be an ambassador to?
God, that's incredibly kind. I don't think the offer's been made.
Sam's suggesting that it might be.
I think to be ambassador to the US would be unbelievably interesting and important for Britain, because I think Starmer's big priority, I think, has got to be to rebuild the UK-US relationship. We need an ambassador who knows the United States well and can deal with the US foreign policy system.
I think Nigel Farage is bitchy himself.
Hopefully. I don't think I've got much chance of getting that job, but I might have slightly more chance than Nigel Farage.
I thought you might have said Myanmar or Afghanistan or...
Yeah, we don't have
what about... You see, I think the other thing that we should do is have regional ambassadors. We should have ambassadors for regions.
Gosh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Middle East.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia. We do it all very country by country.
So you can imagine a sort of super ambassador.
Exactly. Would you fancy being a super ambassador? Should I have that next time I bump into Keir on the Heath? Should I say...
This is really kind of you. If you're bumping into on the Heath, my real pitch, which I need to make to West Streeting, is I would love to chair a kind of independent cross-party commission on the NHS. That would be my dream.
Okay.
Yeah,
have you decided what it's going to conclude?
No.
Or are you going to take it? You're going to be genuinely open-minded about
I think I'm genuinely open-minded.
Okay.
I think hopefully we can bring a bit of practicality, a bit of open-mindedness, and I think the advantage of my not being Labour, not being Conservative, is that we might be able to get a bit of cross-party movement.
Okay, I think that sounds quite interesting. We'll get Wes in and we'll put it to him.
Very good.
Wes, I know you listen. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Our species has always found it necessary to make models of itself in order to understand itself. And I go back to the stencils on the cave of Peshamal, this sense of touch between the skin of the earth and the skin of a living body as a kind of marker in time.
Welcome to the Rest is Politics Leading with me, Alistair Campbell.
And with me, Rory Stewart. And today we have with us Anthony Gormley. And Anthony Gormley is a sculptor. He's very, very central to British public art, British sculpture. He will be, I suspect, frustrated that he's often introduced as being associated with Angel of the North, which of course is in every child's textbook now. It's one of those images along with the London Eye, which kind of define our country. But he's in many different conversations. I mean, Alistair and I had breakfast with somebody this morning, a British Muslim, who was talking about just having seen Another Place, which is a collection of 100 cast iron sculptures of humans on a beach at Crosby, Merseyside. He has a career which we can get into a little bit and explore, but which really, I guess, took off in mid-1980s. He won the Turner Prize. He's a knight. He's one of the kind of celebrated figures of British art. But he's particularly interested in the body. He's got a lot to say about religion. He's got a lot to say about politics. And I think quite a lot to say about public art. So we're very, very lucky to have him. And of course, Alistair and I beginning with a slight apology that normally I think you're interviewed by art critics who would be much more knowledgeable about your corpus of work than either of us. But thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Can we go right back to the beginning? Born in 1950, Hampstead Garden suburb, German mother, very Catholic, Irish father. And I'm fascinated by your relationship with faith and religion, that sort of bring. I mean, your full name is Anthony Mark David Gormley. So called, I read, because that has the same initials as Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, to the greater glory of God. So we're talking quite a dad.
Yeah, that was a bit of a whatever ring around my neck, and yeah, absolutely extraordinary, I suppose, household routine of prayer. So, get up in the morning, you say your prayers by your bed, then you go down and you have breakfast, and there may be grace before breakfast, but there'll certainly be grace before and after lunch, and certainly before and after dinner. And age 6 or 7, cycling down to Temple Fortune to serve. I can't remember whether it was Father Collingwood or Father Delaney, but anyway, whoever it was, he got quite gaga by the time I was doing it, and I was age 10, and I would have to nudge him on a bit to keep going, because otherwise we'd be there forever. But anyway, yeah, Catholicism was really, I think, the rule of the carrot of heaven and the stick of hell was very high in, I guess, the moral kind of outline of my life's purpose.
But also, in your description of childhood, you also say that after church on a Sunday, your father would often take you to the British Museum or the National Gallery. And literally, as a sort of 6, 7-year-old, you'd be wandering around the National Gallery.
Very young. And if you can imagine what that's like for a little toddler, weedy little chap, like looking up at those great bulls from the Palace of Sardon, or the head of Ramses II, this thing made out of granite that is like 12 times the volume of an actual head. And I think that those experiences of looking at things from the deep past, that in terms of these sacred bulls or lions, these winged mythological figures, they're a kind of example of the imagination, that actually you don't have to stay with what you've got, you can transform it. And in terms of the heads of Amenhotep or Ramses, it's this is what we had to make in order to understand ourselves.
You weren't thinking that age 6?
No, I wasn't. No, I was just dumbstruck. I was thinking, these are things from a long, long time ago, and they're still here, and they make me feel small, and they make me slightly scared.
But Anthony, I mean, I'm the father of a 6-year-old. In fact, sitting in front of you on your desk is 3 objects that my 6-year-old just gave me. But when I take him around the Victorian Albert Museum, he can get a bit bored. Right? He can be quite liable to say he'd rather be back home watching Pokemon or something like this thing. Were you you must be quite an unusual child. I mean, you didn't ever feel, oh, why is my dad dragging me around this museum? I'd rather be back watching it.
I don't know. I just think that room, particularly the Egyptian room, is so generous in the kind of offer. You can look down on a Middle Kingdom tomb that has Nut, Queen of the Night, kind of carved in very, very shallow relief in its bottom. And she's quite a sexy woman. She's got, her breasts are kind of feeding the night. And then there were, in those days, before they made the Great Court, this wonderful little passageway that had all of the grave goods of fantastic pharaonic, afterlife accoutrements, tiny scarabs and all kinds of things made of gold and lapis. And anyway, it was just, it was a treasure house.
So you were the youngest of 7?
Yeah.
Were your 6 older siblings very similar to you or very different?
No, we were all absolutely different, and I have to explain that my mother went to Canada. She might have ended up in an internment camp like my grandmother, Omi, and she had only been married with my father for 5 or 6 years, and then she went for a further 6 years. So all of the pre-war, the 4 of my siblings that were born pre-war, spent 6 years without a father in the Lake of Bays in the summer, north of Ontario. And the minute they got old enough, the minute they were 18 or so, they just went back to Canada. This was the promised land. This was where you somehow could be free. You could kind of do whatever you wanted. And so it was a strange thing. A big house that was built by my father that faced T9 on the Hampstead golf course. Looked like Bauhaus to the south and kind of Lutyens to the north. And very strange, because it was painted in eggshell green and then textured sort of brown dado level. It was made to last, but it was actually more like an institution than my school. So actually being sent to Yorkshire was just an unbelievable liberation into
to go to a Catholic boarding school.
Yeah, go to a monastic school was just absolute fantastic. I mean, somehow just the space, the fact that up there were the moors, down there was the valley, little beck flowing through it, there were forests, and then all these significant others that helped me do stuff.
Can I just bring you back for a moment to your father? Because obviously the impression maybe that listeners get is this extraordinary man with his kind of brown dado walls, taking his children either to church or to the National Gallery, 7 children present. But give us more of a sense of what he was like as a father and some of the more, I suppose, active, loving aspects.
He was incredible, because on the one hand he was a tyrant, on the other he was just incredibly good fun. He used to have annoying habits. He would like put all his shaving foam on and then go around singing "Glory, Glory, Hallelujah" while trying to give us a kiss to get us out of bed.
With the shaving foam.
With the shaving foam.
And singing "Glory, Glory, Hallelujah" because of the religious significance.
Well, no, because it's a bloody
So get out of bed hymn.
Yeah,
Right,
like
okay.
belting hymn. No, he was an incredible sailor. We had this boat called the Sea Trout, which was an old clinker-built boat, and he would just set out from we had as a kind of country place this old stables. Their main house had burnt down. And he would launch this boat, quite a big boat with big old red sails, and he'd say, "Come on, we're going to the Nab." The five of us or the six of us would get aboard. And anyway, no, he was the first, or one of the first people to get the permission to produce penicillin. And I didn't see him that much because he was always off to India or Australia or Singapore or Hong Kong, founding factories and getting. I mean, his story. It's hard not to be very admiracious of a man that fought in the First World War, that married a German, that made his own life. I mean, and at the same time, he was brought up by Morris Brothers, and he wanted that absolute discipline. So he had to do first steps in Latin primer twice a week, and if you didn't get your declensions right, you got smacked. And yeah, so there were times when I would be in tears in the study, not for having failed my Latin.
How did your relationship with faith develop through your life? When did you lose it?
Well, I lost it in my first term at university, but I think the truth is I as I think all young boys who go into that kind of atmosphere, I was thinking, do I have a vocation? Am I going to become a Benedictine? Because they were inspirational. I know that Ampleforth has fallen under a very dark cloud, and for rightful reasons. But I had no experience of any sexual impropriety whatsoever. And all I can tell you is the support that I had. I want to tell you about the art room. The art room was in the oldest part of the school, 18th century building, right in the middle of it, and it was always open. It was open it was just always open. So you could get down there before General Assembly, as it were, in the morning and start something off. You could rush up there at 11 o'clock and kind of see how it was going. Anyway, it was just fantastic. And the support that I was given by Father Martin Haig, my lay teacher, John Bunting, an incredible sculptor who actually embodied what, in a way, the vocational life of a sculptor was.
Did you already know by then that you were an artist?
Well, they were incredibly encouraging.
Did you know?
Father Peter, yes. Well, I knew that I wanted to make things. That was so important to me that I realised very early on that making was a form of thinking, that making was a form of communicating, that maybe I implicitly trusted more than words. I know that we're exchanging words now, and I guess our listeners are listening through the agency of words. But in the end, I don't trust words as much as acts, and acts that are embodied into material mean the most to me.
There's a paradox, isn't there? It's the whole thing. I mean, this is an incredibly disembodied form podcast. People will be listening to this as they run or they're doing their ironing, and yet you're somebody who's all about touching stuff and being in a particular place. Whereas this will be floating in people's ears in the United States at some weird time. And so
this is the trouble of our times. We're all distracted. We are not in the present moment. We are usually in two places at once. We are here, but we're also thinking about there, or someone over there, or something that somebody has told us to do. And I think that rooting in first-hand, palpable experience is so important in a cyber age.
So we'll come back to your life in a second, but maybe this is a chance to just introduce a little bit, listeners, to your sculpture, because one of the things that's striking about it is that you are insisting on place. So, for example, the Angel of the North is made with people from that area, and there's a real sense of its industrial heritage. In Field, for example, you're getting hundreds of people to make little clay images. In the work that you did inside Australia, you get, again, a sense of participating in other people's bodies. There's a sort of sense of teamwork.
Yeah.
Tell us about these sculptures, or try to bring them alive for the audience, and explain the way in which they relate to touch and place.
Well, I think to start with the angel, since as you're right, and it's the thing that I'm most kind of associated.
Does it irritate you? You've always said it irritates you.
No. I think I just always have to restate the fact that this was made through collective will and collective action, and that is what I feel so humbled by, but also so inspired by. Art comes out of life; it should go back into life. And for me, I can just remember going around, Hartlepool and Middlesbrough with the maquette in the back of a Luton van, opening up the kind of shutter at the back, while there was a bunch of people in their brown coats or their overalls, and I'd say, how can we make this, mate? And it was just fantastic. This is a time when swan hunters had closed down, and one by one, all those amazing shipyards on the time that I grew up watching on the news. Again, a very similar kind of memory to seeing those Assyrian bulls. These massive things going down the slipway, bigger than the houses that were either side. And you see them in black and white, kind of suddenly this thing that was the size of a cathedral suddenly moved. Anyway, I had to find the people that had made that shape out of 6mm ship plate and learned how to bend it. Find them and say, let's make something together that tells the world what you're capable of in a different form.
Now, just to interrupt for a second again for the audience, I mean, this thing sticks its wings out and has to deal with 100-mile-per-hour winds. So it's a massive kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, it's an
problem for it
engineering.
not to blow
So
over.
there was a lot. I needed a lot of help. I was moulded with my arms out. I did have to have sticks because it takes about an hour and a half. But that was my very kind of small beginning. I then took that design. We had to digitize it, which we did with the help of Newcastle University. They then transferred it into a buildable thing where we used the ribs of a ship on the outside to be the form of this thing. But for me, this is this connects with the cathedrals. It connects that we live in a time when art has been institutionalized and commodified, and yet for most of it, if we think from Paleolithic times onwards, for most of the 25,000 years that art has been part of our evolution, it has been made usually in community for community, and this is a continuation.
Where does your creative impulse come from? Do you ever know when you have a particular idea of something you want to do? What's the feeling like? How does it feel when something new comes into your head?
Well,
I'm
it's
gonna do
usually,
that.
I haven't. This is a book, but it usually starts like. Sorry, I'm opening a little book. It's a Muji book. It's the size of a passport, and I've just got it out of my pocket.
It's a nice coloured passport, not like the new one.
No, it's true. This is a red passport, not a blue one. But anyway, it'll start like this, a little. But this comes from what I'm doing in the studio. So what's happening in the studio then gets translated into this, and then I'm thinking, how can I push it further? So this is believe it or not, a body, but it's a body as a zone of energy, and we're making this, but at the same time I'm trying to push it. I'm trying to say, how can we lose the body entirely, or lose the body enough so that you don't know whether the energy field is created by the body or the body created by the energy field? And that's what really, this, yes, we've talked about my work as if it was always like 200 tons of the angel, or I guess another place is about 60 tons of iron.
And sometimes enormous, right? So the angel, I think, sits on 100 square metres of concrete plinth.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. I am embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by how much concrete.
But what about the bigger picture idea, as it were, your kind of obsession with the body and actually with your own body?
There's nothing special about my body, but it just happens
but where does that idea come from that then informs so much of what you've done?
Well, the Ur story is being sent up for an enforced rest after lunch. And being a good Catholic boy, being told not to move, being told this is, but not being able to sleep, and just having this experience of lying completely still and becoming aware of the space within the body. And it would start with this claustrophobic red kind of hot space, but behind closed eyes. And as I got more familiar with it, because this was a repeated discipline, it became cooler and bigger until it became this space in which there was no objects, there was no edge, there was no bounding condition. It had infinite extension. And that experience as a very young child was then reinforced when I went to India and started studying meditation.
Yeah, so that's a sort of strange connection between you and me, and also Yuval Noah Harari, who we just interviewed, which is that we all meditate in the Vipassana tradition. And I'm about to go on another Zen retreat next
Good
month.
10 day.
Yeah, and Yuval has just come off a 40-day.
Yeah, no, he's impressive.
But it seems to lead in very, very different directions, doesn't it? I mean, obviously at the moment at which you were talking, I can recognise what you were talking about, but for Yuval, the experience of meditation leads to him being interested in the disembodied, or the sort of virtual, the way in which humans might escape their bodies entirely and become, robots or artificial intelligence. With you, the same tradition has led to a desire to be really kind of rooted and material, there on the beach or there on the hillside.
Yeah, good point. I think that the truth is that experience of the darkness of the body, for me, was a reversal. You could say that all Platonic, but also Christian kind of cosmologies are towards the light. Darkness is somehow evil and is full of repression and kind of motivations that we can't understand, that leads to violence and despair. And I discovered in Vipassana completely the opposite, that within that darkness of the body is actually potential. And in coming to terms, you could say, with the boy within, suddenly I was released from all of this guilt, all of this, the original sin that Catholicism had landed me with. But it's interesting, for me, I think of what I do, or certainly if we think of another place, these are industrially made fossils that simply indicate a place of human time.
Just to remind you, another place, the statues on Crosby Beach, which over time are beginning to get barnacles and rust and adjust endlessly to the horizon.
Yeah, and they spread. They're about 200 meters apart, so they're extremely isolated,
and
even though they're together.
Space, right?
Yeah, so they're 3 miles of coastline and about 1 kilometer out to sea. And when the sea comes in, they disappear, apart from the ones that are above the tide line, and the ones that are furthest out at high tide, because it's a tipped plane, 8 meters below the surface. And this, I mean, for me, what is this? This is, yes, making art in the time of mechanical reproduction. So the works become a field. You can't say this is a singular, unique object. It's a field effect. And the viewer, the participator, is invited to be part of that field. You're part of the picture.
Can I ask, I'm going to hand back to us one second, but one thing that interests me is how often you work in iron, steel.
Yeah. No, it is iron. It's important. It might start as steel. So it starts as, brake discs and then it's melted down, and it reverts to the same condition of the core of this planet.
But I'm interested in why the fact that you work less often in sort of silica-based things. You're less often working with sandstone or sometimes with clay, not really with glass, which I would think is more sort of organic.
Ethereal, perhaps.
Whereas
Is that what you're...
Well, I suppose steel is more, lacks that kind of transparency or porosity of these silica-based things. I mean, iron seems to be, you know, it conducts, it's metallic, and it's got an edge which these sort of silica-based clays and glass, sandstone lack.
You're thinking about your turquoise mountain glasses. Well, at least I am. Immediately, you start thinking, I think of these incredibly lucid blue glasses with tiny bubbles in, and just. No, it's, I'm going to say something that may sound totally counterintuitive. I think of my work as being about space, not being about objects. But how can you activate space? I want to use the density of mass as a catalyst for making these fields in which your movement, your space-time experience is amplified. And I can't think of a better way of doing it. I think of them, you know, as being 21st century industrial time equivalent of standing stones. They're an attempt to put human biological time in relation to sidereal planetary time. And I can't think of any way of doing it better. At the same time, you know, I am making works that have no body reference, because it's the viewer's body that then becomes the subject of the work. And these are works like Breathing Room or Clearing. I don't know if either of you went to the Royal Academy show, but Clearing is 11 kilometres of endless, a singular line without beginning or end that is like a big scribble, but it's in the room, it's up against the ceiling, it's down on the floor, it's bouncing off the walls, and it feels like the most crazy kind of, well, I call it a quantum drawing, because it won't persist within, as it were, the Euclidean geometry of our chosen habitat. And what it is an energy field, and you have to duck and dive in order to be, so it's sort of like a Twombly painting, but you're in it.
What role, two questions related to something you said earlier. What role does the art that you do have in the community where that art exists? And given this is a politics podcast primarily, how do you define the role of art within the political debate?
I think art is a fundamental human, or the making of things, the making of images, the making of marks, is a fundamental human need. It has been part of our survival, as I said earlier, from Paleolithic times. It is also a basic human right. The first thing to say is art should be on the curriculum. It is absolutely necessary, irrespective. I'm aware that I had a very privileged background. But I think you give any child from the age of 2 onwards a sheet of paper and a way of making a mark, and they'll go. At a certain point, because of our culture, they become self-conscious about that, in a way, need to lead, even if it's just a trace. There's a sense in which I have affected some part of the world by that trace, that making of a mark. And I think that is a absolute key in self-determination, in the building of a psyche, of a character, of a person, of a self. And without it, we are victims of a late capitalist world, and we're all kind of racing one against the other as to what little kind of hole in this cliff face we can occupy. And if Demis Hassabis or Sam Altman are right that AI is going to solve intelligence, it's going to make energy free, we are all going to now become redundant. Well, we better all become artists. We better find a meaningful way of making sense.
Recently, you had in this country, the Arts Council of England making rather strange noises, I thought, about the funding of the organisations which get their funding being told not to get too political. Now, what did you make of that, and what does that say about where we are culturally? It's
an absolute disaster. I have no idea. The Arts Council was founded by Maynard Keynes with the idea of arm's length policy. There should be no. I mean, we will end up with a Goering of. I mean, it's just we cannot
sponsored propaganda.
Yeah, we cannot allow art to become propaganda. Art schools are the reason that British art has become of international significance is because of the quality of our art schools. That is something that we inherited from the 60s. I ask myself, where does alternative thinking come from to businesses as usual? It will always come from, usually people who are dyslexic, who have had to find other ways of communicating. And where have the nests for those souls to grow been? Well, it has been